Nurses of psych wards, what did a patient do that left you speechless? Despite being a psychiatric center, occasionally we'd get a medication management intake, which was basically someone with intellectual impairment who needed a safe place to transition through a change in their medication. Our newest patient was severely intellectually impaired. He was unable to communicate verbally, didn't hear very well, and also had severe visual impairment. His was one of the most severe cases I'd seen. Anyway, one of the things he did constantly was cross one arm across his waist, stick the fingers of his other hand into his mouth, and rock aggressively forward and backwards while standing. And he'd sucked his fingers so frequently that it had affected his teeth, and with such duration that his arm was always glazed in saliva, which would froth up at the elbow and just sort of dangle there waiting for enough rocking to send it flying to the floor. This guy had spent his entire life in institutions, and he was about 18 or so when we got him. So it goes without saying that thumb-sucking liquid preventatives had all been tried on him, but our charge nurse went ahead and wasted her time attempting it. The truth of the matter from my perspective was he wasn't harming anyone and had very few comforts other than standing there rocking and sucking his thumb, so why make the poor guy's day any harder? Alas, he kept on slurping, even with his hand doused in that nasty stuff. Brace yourself. So he was on one-on-one observation during his time with us, which meant a staff member had to follow him around, pretty easy since he just stood there rocking, and keep him safe 24/7. But you were allowed to give the one-on-ones a little bit of privacy under certain conditions if they had to use the bathroom. For this guy we actually put him on the toilet so he could use the bathroom, and you guessed it, that meant cleaning him up. Oh, and I was his one-on-one that shift. Lucky me, given his condition, it was okay to let him have moderate privacy, which entailed me standing by his bathroom door and the door being open just a crack. If it sounded like anything other than peeing or pooping was happening in there, I was only a few feet away, so I'm doing the mental math for how long I think a number 2 takes, and I'm timing the process. Okay, now I can smell poop, so that means he's started. Another few minutes and I'll peek in to see. He's eating all of his poop, completely hand over fist, shoving it in his mouth, smeared on his clothes, arm, hands, the toilet seat. I told the charge nurse later, pretty sure I know why he didn't mind the taste of the thumb sucker stuff. Anyway, I have other stories. A close runner-up to most perplexing was the patient who was in the quiet room/timeout room, think padded room, unclothed because he'd torn his clothing up and we confiscated it and he refused to put on the tear-proof clothing we offered. Anyway, he took off his fingernails and shoved them in his manhood, and had to receive medical assistance removing them.
People who cater to the super rich, what things have you seen? My grandfather died with a $20 million portfolio. He lived in a one-bedroom condo that was built in the 50s, drove a rusted-out Honda, and his entire wardrobe came from Walmart and was 10 years old. At his will reading, a bunch of distant relatives showed up hoping to get a piece. In his will, he made fun of all of them, then spent 10 pages detailing how and where he wanted all of his money donated to specific charities and foundations. Some of it was even really surprising, as nobody besides him was aware that he casually owned 160 acres of land in Vermont that was just forest. The land was donated to a land trust, and turned into hiking trails. I am an art student working as a gardener. We work in one of the wealthiest areas in my country. Some customers are really eager to show me their collection of artworks that they have hanging on their walls once they find out that I study it. I remember one time standing in a bathroom, with my dirty gardening clothes and there was a Picasso above the toilet.
Ida for feeding my roommate's always hungry boyfriend? For the past 8 months, my roommate Taylor 24, female and I 22 have been sharing a flat, and our cohabitation has generally been smooth due to our tendency to keep to ourselves and not have much interaction. Taylor's boyfriend, Tristan, who lives about an hour away from her, comes over for dinner once a week. Throughout these dinner nights, I have never witnessed Taylor and Tristan cooking a fresh homemade meal, as they usually opt for fast food or prepare frozen meals for dinner, and while I hold no judgment towards them for this choice, this detail becomes significant later in the story. About 4 nights ago, I returned home from work to find Tristan in our kitchen. As I began preparing my own dinner, I struck up a conversation with him. Being from a Mediterranean Middle Eastern culture, I take pride in my cooking skills, having learned everything from the women in my family. Tristan couldn't help but comment on how incredible the meal smelled. Normally, I don't share my food as I budget my grocery expenses for one person. However, seeing that he appeared genuinely hungry, I decided to offer him some of my food. By the time Taylor joined us in the kitchen, he was already on his second plate. After Tristan explained the situation to her, Taylor gave me a side eye but remained silent, proceeding to cook some frozen chicken nuggets for herself. As they engaged in conversation, I continued cleaning up my dishes, minding my own business. Later, Tristan asked if he could have the recipe so that he could share it with his mom and she could try cooking the same dish. I suggested that I would message Taylor later about it. At this point, Taylor made a sarcastic comment about the meal being so good that even a picky eater like Tristan enjoyed it. Trying to maintain a lighthearted atmosphere, I attributed the deliciousness to my mama's cooking. In a semi-joking manner, Tristan then suggested that I cook for all 3 of them sometime, offering to pay for the meal and even bring free wine. We all shared a laugh, but Taylor seemed visibly disturbed by the idea and expressed that she wasn't interested in my cultural dishes despite never having tasted them. Brushing off her slightly racist comment, I responded that once someone gets past the initial smell, the dishes taste heavenly. Tristan agreed. Unexpectedly, Taylor became very upset and started scolding her boyfriend for enjoying my smelly food, suggesting that from then on, we two should have dinner together. She stormed off to her room, and Tristan followed her after apologizing to me. Since that incident, Taylor has started doing things she previously agreed not to do, such as tying up garbage bags and leaving them in the kitchen instead of properly disposing of them. Before I confront Taylor about her recent actions, I want to know if I am in the wrong in this situation. Ida, what has been your biggest F-up leading up to this point in life? I have bipolar 2 disorder, which means while I was untreated I was severely depressed. I had to drop out of high school and transfer to an online school because I could barely function. Being homeschooled made it very easy to slack off and forget about school. During freshman year I failed a majority of my classes. I think I passed 3 classes in total for that whole year. My counselors and teachers were worried about me, not enough to care about my mental health though. Typical, everyone told me they saw what path I was on in sophomore year. I failed most of my classes as well. I did pass more than I did the previous year though. Keep in mind that the only way I'm actually passing classes is by cheating. My counselors were constantly trying to get in touch with me, but I never wanted to talk. At this time I wanted to end myself. I was determined to starve myself to death. Weird way to go, I know. I stayed in bed all day and slept 24/7. I had no motivation to do anything, and school was the last thing on my mind. I also cut all contact with my friends. Junior year is when I started to get help. I failed some classes my first semester, but I was able to catch up along the way. Nobody really thought that I would be able to catch up and actually graduate. My therapist was also skeptical, my mom was panicking because of it, and I constantly got crap for it from my siblings. Come senior year I'm feeling great and I was actually able to pass all my classes, with the exception of one. Although I was 1.5 credits away from graduating, I was able to take one summer school class to still graduate the same year, just a couple of months later than everyone else. I pass and graduate not too long after. My GPA is 1.42, which is awful. This is something I regret the most because I feel as if it's a constant reminder that while not medicated I don't have any control over myself. I wish I could go back and apply myself. I wish I could have stayed in public high school and kept my amazing friend group. I wish I could have had a normal high school experience and actually live life, but, alas, you can't change the past. I just wish I could change a lot of things from my past, but it will never happen. Have you ever had a dream so beautiful that you cried when you woke up and realized it was not real? About a month ago I dreamed that I woke up because my girls, 3 and 4 years old, crawled in bed with me. We all snuggled together under the blankets and they tried to wake me like in Sleeping Beauty, which involved lots and lots of kisses and hugs. And I can still remember so vividly the feeling of their arms around my neck, the warmth of their bodies, the butterfly kisses on my nose and face, and the feeling of holding them in my arms. As beautiful as that dream was, the nightmare was waking up from it. I spent nearly an hour sobbing on the floor next to my bed, walked around like a zombie that day, and that evening I got blackout intoxicated. It was like losing them all over again. They would have been 5 and 6 by now. A couple of nights ago was the most vivid. I was dreaming that my husband was still here and we were in bed, cuddled up watching a film, chatting and laughing like we used to. It was so very real that for a second when I woke, I forgot and rolled over to hold him. That empty space next to me crushed me completely and I sobbed. A few years ago now I miscarried a child. I had an ectopic pregnancy, which basically means that I had a fertilized egg outside of my womanhood. The fallopian tube in my case. The tube burst and the resulting surgery and infection left me unable to have children. I was crushed. My husband was crushed. I spent the next 6 months in the depths of a depression I don't have the words to describe. I was not alright. One night I had a dream. There was a little girl with a wild mane of red hair like mine playing on a beach. I don't know how, but I knew that it was my daughter. Watching her play was an older woman with strawberry blonde hair and a soft, kind voice. She turned to me and said, "Hi, Red." It was my mom. She died giving birth to me. I broke down and started crying. She just held my head to her chest while I sobbed. I'm not sure how long I stood there. Time passes strangely in dreams. When she finally let me go, she looked me straight in the eyes and told me, "You'll get through this, honey. You're stronger than you know. I'll watch her until you get here." She turned to leave, taking the little girl's hand and walking down the beach into the setting sun. I woke up bawling. I couldn't even talk. I was crying so hard. My husband just held me until I couldn't cry anymore. Hitting on a mother with a small child in tow. I remember being out at the mall one day, feeling restless and looking for some action. As I was walking around, I spotted this gorgeous woman with a young child by her side. I thought to myself, now there's a challenge. Without thinking twice, I sauntered up to her and made small talk, asking questions about the kid and making myself seem interested in their well-being. But deep down, all I wanted was to get in her panties. And to my surprise, she seemed receptive to my flirty advances. We exchanged numbers and over the next few weeks, we met up for drinks and dinners while her kid stayed with a sitter. The intimacy was insane. We couldn't get enough of each other. But as time went on, I started to realize that I wasn't the only one she was seeing. I found out that she was married, and her husband was none too pleased when he found out about us. One day, I got a call from her and she was frantic. Her husband had caught wind of our tryst and was threatening to press charges for larceny since he had given her a pricey wedding ring. I didn't want any part of that madness, so I cut her off immediately. I was so angry at myself for getting into this mess in the first place, and I knew I had to be more careful in the future. I had to learn to respect the boundaries of other people, and not take advantage of them in order to get what I wanted. I also had to be more aware of the consequences of my actions, and not let my desire for excitement and pleasure cloud my judgment. So I decided to take a step back and reassess my life. I started going back to school, and getting my life back on track. I started to focus on my career and education, and I started to appreciate the little things in life. I was slowly starting to rebuild my life, and I was determined to make the most of it. But then one day, out of the blue, I got a call from the woman I had been seeing. She had been arrested for larceny and was facing serious jail time. She begged me to help her, and I knew I had to do something. I had to help her, not just for her sake, but for mine as well. I had to prove to myself that I was capable of doing the right thing, even when it was hard. So I decided to take a risk and help her out. I hired a lawyer and did everything I could to get her out of this mess. In the end, we were successful and she was able to avoid jail time. I was relieved, but at the same time, I was left with a feeling of uncertainty. I had done the right thing, but now I was left wondering, what would happen next? I almost committed a war crime. I started doing stand-up when I was in the army, in Afghanistan, actually. I started telling stories around the fire at night, but eventually started doing shows in the chow hall or during talent shows if we were on a bigger base at the time. It wasn't uncommon for me to do so badly that I lost people during these shows. I even had a platoon op to go on patrol early rather than watch my whole set. It was less fun than possibly dying. I wanted to get better, so I ordered a book and started working on trying to improve crowd work, talking to the audience, and being more physical. I figured if I could make the interpreters laugh with the language barrier, I'd be on my way to being a better comic. During our next patrol, we detained several suspected Taliban fighters. We needed to keep them on our base until they could get picked up by intel people, so we needed to watch them for 2 days. I thought the idea of a literal captive audience was too good to pass up and basically tried to do crowd work and run bits by them in an incredibly animated manner. Imagine Sebastian Maniscalco, but 2 months into comedy. I volunteered for as many guard duty shifts as I could. I'd try jokes, I'd ask for their names and where they were from, jobs, etc., anything I could try to make a joke about. Never a single laugh. Eventually, they got picked up and apparently one complained about my jokes specifically. I ended up getting a stern talking to for unconventional interrogation because I kept asking where they were from and what they did and had to explain that I was so bored and desperate to get better at comedy that I almost inadvertently committed a war crime.
My ex cheated on me with my brother. I, 27F, was with my ex, 26F, for 3 years. She was my first partner after coming out, and since my family wasn't very accepting or supporting of my sexuality, I was very dependent on her, both as a friend and partner. I loved her and was very serious about her. She on the other hand seemed to treat me and our relationship as a hobby. She was there for me and was loving and all, but we often fought over her not taking me and our relationship seriously. She said I was too attached and I felt she wasn't into a long-term commitment. She still met my family and on our first night in my parents' house, confessed to me that she found my brother very hot. I found this hurtful, but she brushed it off, saying it wasn't serious because she was gay and I'm human and have eyes. Long story short, I caught her cheating on me with him. I fought with them both and after plenty of yelling and cursing, we broke up and I told my parents my brother was dead to me. My parents sort of supported me. I don't think they ever took my relationship with my ex seriously because I'm gay, and so while they said they were sorry, they didn't really think it was all that heartbreaking. My ex started dating my brother after a few months and most of my family ignored the overlap. They honestly really liked my ex, and the fact that she was with a man now made it even easier for them to accept her. Once again, I think no one took my first real relationship seriously. I didn't know how to explain myself or demand anything from anyone, so I just kept my distance from my family. All this was 2 years ago. About 2 weeks ago, my mom called me to tell me my ex was pregnant and that her and my brother were planning to get married and start a family. I kind of lost it and snapped at her. I said I didn't care one bit about her or her baby. I called her a cheater and hung up the phone. Since then my brother has told me to not show up near his family. Even my mom and some aunts have said I was crossing the line. I have shared the details with a friend and she said I was in the wrong for the name calling and that I should get over my ex, implying I'm only feeling like this because it was my first relationship and nothing else. I'm conflicted now. Am I really overreacting? Am I being too harsh on them? I haven't stopped feeling this rush of intense anger and hatred every time I see her laughing with my brother. It feels worse now that she takes him so seriously but just breezed past our relationship and ended it on a whim. Should I try to forgive her? How do I go about expressing myself to my family from here on?
I refused to help my daughter after what she said. She insulted my poor, disabled son. I am a widow of a previous marriage, and so is my wife. She has a son from her previous marriage and I have a daughter as well. We dated for roughly 5 years before being married for 3 years now, and our kids have known each other since the beginning. No major fights or weirdness besides getting to know someone else as a parent/guardian. My son was a tremendous athlete in basketball and I used to play in college at a school I'm sure none of you heard of. Regardless, I know the ins and outs of basketball, and when he asked me to coach him, I was more than happy to. Turns out that he was good, really good. Division I good. My wife is a controller and I'm a pharmacist. Together, we make a very, very comfortable living, but are not rich. So when my son was getting scholarship offers for basketball, I realized we could pay for my daughter's college in full and neither of them would have any student loan debt when they graduate. A plan that I shared with my daughter, which I think was a mistake to begin with. These plans changed when my son tried riding on someone else's motorcycle, with their permission, but with zero training, and got badly injured in an ensuing crash. He lost part of his hand and foot, not life-threatening, but basketball ending. This happened last year and my son has been in a deep depression that we're desperately trying to bring him out of, but he feels like his entire identity got ripped away in the blink of an eye. He's been in counseling and prescribed medication but it has not helped thus far. Recently he confided in me that the pills he's on have unfortunate side effects with his libido to virtually zero interest and wants to stop them. I told him the important thing is that he's with us, but he can bring that up with his doctor next visit. Fast forward about 2 weeks. I'm upstairs looking for something in my room and I heard my daughter talking to her friends on her phone about college. The conversation turned towards her brother and she said she can't wait to be gone. I'm tired of hearing her brother cry every day and said his hand is gross. I knew spirits in the house had shifted since he became injured, but I didn't think she felt this type of way. I was going to talk to her later about this, but then I heard him say that he can't even get it up while laughing. At that, I was furious. I stormed into her room and took her phone, laptop, car keys, and TV out of her room. I told her she should be ashamed of how she's talking about her brother and he might do something permanent if he heard you talking about him like that. When my wife got home, we talked about what happened and while she's proud of the way I stood up for my son, she thinks it's too far to also not pay for her college, since we could easily do so. Substance dealers of Reddit, have you ever called CPS on a client? If so, what's the story? I used to deal way back when I was a hot mess in an extremely abusive relationship. I called CPS on not only one person, but 6. The one that sticks with me most, though, not only because of the severity, but because I called twice, was this couple who used to pick up from me at a laundromat and we ended up seeing each other often enough I felt okay to go to their place. I was so effing floored when I stepped through that door. I kid you not, they had taken up all the carpeting in the house and had torn down the walls to get at the copper wiring and pipes. They had no electricity or running water. There was nothing in that house except for some sleeping bags in what used to be the living room. And then I noticed a nest of blankets with bright blue eyes peering at me over the pile and realized that there was a toddler and a small child no more than 5. Until this point I had never seen nor heard them talk about having kids. The poor kids were filthy and obviously malnourished. The house stunk of substances so badly I gagged. I couldn't believe it. I guess the look of shock was super apparent on my face because the dad said they were squatting and introduced me to their kids. I made some small talk and then left. The phone was ringing for CPS before I closed my car door. I gave them the address and let them know the conditions of the home and they were squatting with 2 small children. Gave the names of the parents as I knew them and the names of the kids. They ended up going to jail for the squatting and the kids went to live with a relative. They ended up contacting me back to sell to them after they were bailed out of jail and I never responded. However, the guy I was with at the time ended up selling to them and they were living in a field in a tent with the kids. I got into a huge fight with my boyfriend over it and was so disgusted he still sold to them. I ended up calling CPS on them again. From what I heard from other people that knew them, the kids were taken permanently after that and about a year later the mom ended up going to prison for attempted unalivement of another person and the dad went to prison for check fraud some weeks after that. What was the biggest bullet, nay nuclear missile you dodged? I dealt in candy and soda. The vending machines at my middle school were ridiculously overpriced, because every penny above a certain dollar amount would go back to the school. So for example, if a can of pop was usually $1 in the machine, the school would charge $1.50 and get to keep the 50 cents. Instead of doing the less greedy thing and making it barely noticeable, like 20 cents more per unit, they decided they didn't want kids eating candy at school anyways, so they skyrocketed prices. $2.50 for a can of pop, $3 for a candy bar, etc. So I beat the system. I'd go to the dollar store with my mom, where candy bars were like 60 cents each and buy boxes at a time. I also bought flats, 24, of soda which ended up costing about 50 cents a unit. At first I wanted to do it all myself, so I sold them for $1.50 each, essentially doubling my money after I paid taxes on the product being purchased. It was great for a bit, but it started to grow too large, and a little bit out of control. This school had grades 7 to 9 in it, and was from a rural area, so basically every kid went to the same school. There was probably 500 kids between the 3 grades. In the end, I basically made a mob, lol. Instead of selling the candy and pop for $1.50 each, I contracted my friends from my small village to help me out. I sold them the candy and pop in bulk for $1 a piece, and told them they could do whatever they wanted with the candy. I'd sell them 10 units for their lunch money, then most of them would sell that all at $1.50 a piece, use the $10 for their lunch, and have $5 to buy more candy and soda from me. I was probably profiting close to $50 a day at the end. It was very impressive. Until the police showed up and the school called a massive assembly. Apparently selling candy and pop without some kind of license/permit is illegal where I live. On top of that, they said, out loud, during the assembly, that whoever was in charge of the scheme essentially created an illicit gang and that legal consequences would follow if it wasn't stopped by the following Monday. They also sent out a letter to every parent including the details. No names were mentioned. Thanks to my strong bond and the blood-like relationships with the boys I grew up with, we all agreed to end it and keep our mouths shut. It also didn't help that my mother refused to take me to buy cases of pop and boxes of candy after she read the letter. Looking back, it was all kind of a farce. I don't think they could have prosecuted 12-year-old me for it, but my mom wasn't willing to find out. How did Americans get so fat? I lived in Japan for 2 years, and lost a ton of weight. I drank a lot of alcohol, ate whatever food was convenient, and never consciously exercised. I lived upstairs from a Genkaizushi sushi shop, and across the street from Choka Tuntun with excellent ramen and surprisingly large jumbo bikuri gyoza. I had a car, but walked and took public transportation because it was more convenient. After 2 years of Japanese life, my BMI was 19, just on the underweight side of healthy. I now live in an American suburb. I track my diet and exercise on apps. I have a home gym with weights, a Peloton exercise bike, and VR boxing subscriptions. I have another gym at work. My BMI is 29, overweight bordering on obese. I've thought about the reasons for this. Why did I get thin without trying in Japan, then get fat while trying to stay thin in the USA? If you were trying to design the perfect obesogenic society to make people fat, you would do 2 things: subsidize low nutrient foods with a lot of calories, like corn. Use fear, zoning restrictions and tax laws to keep people away from sidewalks, parks, and the gym of life. America does both of these things. Due to the peculiar way Americans select presidents, Iowa has outsized political influence. Iowa also grows a lot of corn, so it's not surprising that American agricultural policy favors corn. Modern varieties of corn, and especially those varieties processed into corn syrup, have calories but not much else. If your body tells you to eat until it senses that you have enough vitamin C, and you eat mostly corn, you'll consume a lot of calories and still be hungry. If your tongue tells you to eat until it has tasted enough, you'll have a lot of corn syrup. On the other hand, traditional Japanese restaurants serve small amounts of carbs, rice or noodles, intensely flavored with small amounts of high-quality protein and fat, fish in sushi or pork slices in ramen. Japanese cuisine is quality over quantity, while common American food is the opposite. It's easier to stop eating after a few bites of intensely flavored carb/fat/protein medley than a few bites of bland fat-free sweetened engineered food. At the same time, American zoning laws encourage large residential areas with no commercial areas nearby. Where there are commercial areas, there are huge parking lots which are unpleasant to walk through. Parking spaces occupy the area that a sensible construction would use for walking paths. Japan is the opposite. There are plenty of walking paths and pedestrian-only areas. Mixed zoning with stores on the first floor and residential units above are common, and possible without requirements for a parking space per bedroom or restaurant table. Parking and highway tolls in Japan are expensive, so people are encouraged to walk and take public transportation. Finally, American media encourages people to be afraid of kids getting abducted while walking to school, so they are driven instead. Afraid of the neighbors calling the police because your kids are outside, so kids play inside instead. Afraid of crime on public transportation, so everyone drives instead. Afraid of ticks and mosquitoes and sunburns in nature, so everyone stays inside and watches screens instead. Japan has giant swallow hornets, so called because the hornets are as large as a small bird like a swallow, that kill dozens of hikers a year, but nobody stays out of the mountains because of them. It's possible to live a healthy lifestyle in America if you constantly invest time and effort. It's easy to live a healthy lifestyle in Japan by just being lazy. Being unhealthy requires extra work. I don't love my cash cow wife. I married her for money. My time to shine, I guess. So growing up, I was the usual jerk. My dad left me when I was around 6, my mom was an alcoholic and abusive, and I basically was living in a dump with her. Life sucked like crap. The best part was going to school. No, it was not the teachers, they sucked. It was my friends who respected me and accepted me for the jerk I am. I enjoyed socializing with them. They made me day. However, they were bullies. Now, I didn't give a crap about bullying. I knew it happened, but as long as I didn't do it or was the victim, I was fine. In comes this shy, scared, and nervous-looking girl in middle school. My girlfriends began to group up and bully her for almost a couple of weeks. I didn't care, I wasn't going to take part or be the victim. I just wanted to effing finish school at the time. The bullying continued for the girl. She would cry, hide, and tried to stay away from school as long as she could. When my friends locked her into a locker once, I stopped them. I guess she used that opportunity to get to know me. When my friends skipped school, she would come and talk to me or sit near me at lunch. She would share her lunch with me since I had nothing. She helped me with my homework, which I had no idea about. And she began to pay me, which I liked. I guess in return, I stopped my friends from getting to her. I owed her that. As years went by, she invited me to dinner with her parents, we would hang out together, and she'd pay for everything, which again, I liked. I liked her, but she loved me, if you know what that feels like. As time continued to go by, I got my driver's license at 17. The problem was that a car would cost a lot of money and insurance for a young person like myself was a lot. So I asked her parents for the money, saying I will pay them back. I knew they would say no. They should have said no. Everything would be so different if they did. But they said yes, and bought me my very own car. After that moment, I realized that I had to take care of their daughter, at least until I paid them back. I would drive her anywhere, everywhere, we became closer and closer. She was so happy with me and always has a smile on her face when she sees me. It was her that kissed me first, it was her that brought me to her church, it was her that proposed to me, and it was both of us that got married to each other and gave each other our virginity. We've been married for 10 years tomorrow. I still owe her parents for the car and owe my wife all the cash she gave me. I like her, but she loves me so much. I've never cheated on her or ever thought about it. Our lives are perfect, but I wish I could let her know that I don't love her the way she loves me. To conclude, I work a minimum wage job and my wife is a teacher. We don't have kids. She loves me so much, but if I could take it all back, I would. I don't love my cash cow wife. I think I realized I do love my wife. Today, I took my wife out to lunch for our anniversary. When I saw her cute face, I immediately felt different. I want to thank you guys and girls. You know who you are. You made me think of my wife differently today. It was the first time that I actually told her I loved her without forcing myself to say it. At first, I muttered it under my breath and my wife asked what I said. I tried a second time and again, I couldn't speak up. Then I said it out loud for the third time. My wife smiled and her face turned all pink. We remained quiet for a little while until she began to ask me about my day. We talked for a little while before we visit her parents. I told her parents that I would start paying them back for the car they had bought me when I was in my teens. They told me not to worry about it, that they were happy that I remember and visit them even though it wasn't their anniversary. We talked for a couple of hours. My wife and I returned home. It was then that I opened Internet Explorer and asked my wife to look at my thread. We sat down together and she read it. She began to cry while reading it and hugged me so tight. The last time I saw her cry was on our wedding night and it was tears of joy according to her. I told her that I realized that I was treating her unfairly. I told her I wanted to be more loving towards her. I told her I loved her and she was my life. She told me that I was her life, that I saved her from unliving herself, and that without me she wouldn't be happy. At this point, I was crying. My wife is currently sleeping. I need to make up for every day I claim to not love her. I have been living for her every day. For the people that told me to pay back my debts and leave her, I have realized that I will stick by my wife till death do us part like I had promised her 10 years ago. She is my life right now and I don't want to have anyone by my side than her. Everyone says I had a baby, so I started to go along with it. After I was done eating out my neighbor the other day, they surprised me with baby gifts. They were pink and had glitter on the toes and sequin flowers on the sides. We cooed over them for a few minutes and I told her how much I appreciated the gift. After she left, I threw them in my bedroom closet with all the other baby junk I've been given over the past 6 months. 6 months ago, everyone in town started to ask about my baby. I do not have a baby, I have never given birth or even been pregnant. I thought that I was being mistaken for someone else. I'm not particularly unique looking. Maybe some other short, dark-haired and hazel-eyed girl gave birth recently. But I am shy by nature and southern by birth, so I was too polite to say you're wrong, you have the wrong person, I don't have a baby. I said things like oh, okay? Mostly because it must have been a case of mistaken identity. People brought over baby clothes, a crib, a swing that plugs into the wall and jiggles, toys and shoes and diapers. A very weird situation to be in, for sure. But then, to put it plainly, things got weirder. I was in the grocery store, and the manager, a friendly older man, came up to me and asked about my sweet little girl. He asked if she liked the different formula he had suggested and if I wanted more. I just smiled. When I got home, I found formula in my grocery bags and an almost empty can in my cabinet. I don't even remember putting it in my cart. The thing is, everyone has been so nice to me, and the situation is just so odd that I started to go along with it. How's the little darling today? A neighbor would ask when I went to get the mail. Oh, she's wonderful. Sleeping through the night, I'd answer. Then a young woman that got coffee at the same place as me asked about a play date with her 9-month-old and my then 5-month-old. I sort of blew it off. Next time I saw her though, she talked about setting up another play date and how much fun our two darlings had. She showed me a picture on her phone. Aren't they just precious in this picture? Your little girl has the most beautiful blue eyes. Her dress really makes them pop. I'll text this to you. I looked at the picture and saw a chubby baby in a red shirt and blue shorts. It had dark hair and dark eyes. It was the only baby in the picture. I went home and opened my bedroom closet full of baby junk. I pulled out teddy bears and an unopened box with a changing table in it. I pulled out a shopping bag with new baby clothes. I dumped it out on my bed and looked through them. I found a light blue dress. A few weeks ago, I decided to call my mom. Hello? She answered. Mom? It's me, I said. Oh, Pearl, hi, how are you? I asked. We don't talk often. I'm good, we're all good out here. She paused then asked, and how are you two doing? Us, too? I asked hesitantly. Now don't act like that. I know I haven't been in touch much, but I do care about you and my grandbaby, she said sourly. I know, Mom. Oh, she's crying. I gotta go. I lied. Give Holly my love, she said and then hung up before I did. The funny thing is, Breakfast at Tiffany's has been my favorite book since I was a kid. I'd always thought Holly would be a great name for a kid I would eventually have. I went into my room to put my phone down after my short conversation with my mom. The changing table and the crib were neatly set up by the window. I didn't do that. I'm sure I didn't. I walked over to the crib and looked inside. Nothing was there. I walked over to the changing table, then took a step back before I bumped my shin against one of the legs. Because I remembered that I had done that before. I looked down and saw a bruise on my shin. I know I hit it against the changing table, but I also know that they weren't in here before. I know it. How's Holly today? My neighbor across the street asked. We were both out grabbing our mail. She's good, happy as ever, I said. I heard her screaming up a storm when you came home last night. I'd be surprised if you were able to get her to bed at all. Once she lays down it usually doesn't take too long, I replied. I went inside and looked through my mail. A bunch of junk, a few red envelopes. I put everything down on the kitchen counter and opened a cabinet to get out a cup. I heard some noises coming from my room. I paused and listened. I didn't hear anything for a minute, so I grabbed the cup and got some water from the sink. I heard something over the sound of the tap. Holly must be awake. I went into my room and looked down in the crib. Holly's stuffed elephant was in the crib. I reached down and picked it up. It was cute. No wonder someone got it for Holly. I put the elephant back down in the crib and brought the cup to my mouth to take a sip. I realized I was holding a baby bottle. Mom brain, I thought. Where did I put my cup down? But then I saw I was holding my cup. And I'm not a mom. What the fuck was I just thinking? I looked back over at the crib. Why do I still have this crap in my room? I kicked the crib. Then I kicked it again, then again until the wood began to splinter. I pushed the changing table over on its side. I opened my closet and shoved in the pieces of the crib and any other baby-related item I could find. I slammed the door closed. I can't keep this charade up, I decided. I can't go along with this nonsense anymore. I went to get coffee this morning. I was so tired. I felt like I hadn't slept all night. The barista smiled at me. Your kid keep you up? She asked. No, I said firmly. Her smile wavered. I sat down at a table to drink my coffee. Some woman walked up to me. She asked how I was doing, how my daughter was doing. I'm fine, I answered, and left it at that. She sat down at the table and in a hushed and concerned voice, she asked me if I was experiencing any depression. She said that new mothers often feel like this. I'm not a new mother, I said. A man came in and walked quickly up to the table. He bent down and whispered something in my ear. It didn't register at first. What? I asked. You left your kid in her car seat in your car, he said again. I jumped up and ran outside. I unlocked my car and opened the back seat. How could I be so stupid? How fucked up am I to leave my kid in the car? But nothing was there. No kid, no car seat. I drove home. I sat on my bed and looked through the pictures on my phone. I looked at the picture of the chubby kid in the red shirt. I stared at it. Where is she? Where is Holly? There's only one kid in this picture, but everyone else says that there are two. Chubbs and my little Holly, bright blue eyes, blue dress. She does look so pretty in that blue dress. I do have a bit more to write, but Holly just started to cry. I need to go check on her. What is the most heartbreaking thing someone had said to you? My high school sweetheart died from cancer. We texted constantly and I loved receiving messages from her. They kept me going through my mundane retail job. She was everything to me. I loved her and made sure to tell her many, many times. I'd lost my mother to colon cancer and she was the only one who said your mom would want you to go on. What would she think? And as cliche as that sounds, her comfort saved me from spiraling down a black hole of alcohol-fueled anger. Whenever she went through chemo, it wasn't uncommon for us to not speak for a few days at a time when she went through treatment and recovery. She'd just text me back with her usual hi moo-moo. And things would be normal. One day I looked at her Facebook and saw a lot of pictures posted of her though her life. My stomach dropped and I texted her to see if she was okay. She responded back that she was fine in her usual cheery way. I shook the bad feeling off. I was playing Arkham City one night and out of nowhere I had that same gut-wrenching feeling and checked my computer immediately, and there was a message from her. She said, "You know I love you, right?" I said I love you too, and then she confirmed the news. She was dying and the doctors couldn't do anything for her anymore. I broke down crying and said that I couldn't lose her too. I just couldn't after losing my mother. She then said your mom will take care of me in heaven just like she took care of you. That was utterly devastating, but she accepted it. She still reassured me that she wasn't going anywhere for a while, but she passed a week and a half after she told me. The last thing she said to me was Happy New Year before her health declined. I felt so deeply that we were meant for each other, yet we both knew we couldn't officially be together because of her sickness. I'm getting better a little bit, but I feel so hollow inside without her. I'm at the point where I don't feel like I'll find another woman to love me the way she did. A strange woman harassed me at home, demanding to see someone that never lived here. I work from home, so I'm usually inside my small house, and sometimes I don't have a lot to do as I live alone. It was about 4 p.m. and someone knocked on the door. It was a woman who looked early 50s, very smartly dressed. It was stuff I could never afford. Most people around here generally couldn't afford it either. This lady stuck out like a sore thumb. She looked flustered and agitated, glancing towards the back garden before trying to look through the tiny, frosted glass window on the front door. I noticed she was carrying a dog's lead, but I didn't see a dog. As it happens, at the far side of my back garden there are two hedges. There's the hedge that I own within my property boundaries, and there's a second hedge outside my boundary that's council-owned along a small grassland where people walk dogs. Because of my hedge, I can't reach it to do anything about it myself. Consequently, when I saw the dog's lead I thought her dog has gone through the hole. If it's a big dog, it's not getting into my garden, but if it's a small dog it might be able to work its way through, and I've always got some cooked meat, so I figured I might be able to lure it out. I am a dog lover, so of course, I want to help this woman if I can. I open the door and this woman gives me the weirdest look. Like she was expecting someone completely different to answer the door and that I shouldn't be there. To be fair to her, my mum used to live here too, so I didn't think much of that weird look to begin with. Maybe she was expecting my mum? I say, hello, and she just stares at me for the longest 30 seconds before she tries to look past me and asks to see Margaret. I don't know what it is about other people's mistakes, but whenever someone has the wrong number, I always end up apologizing as if it's my fault. So that's what I did, apologized and told her there was no Margaret at this address. Again, she gives me that look, only this time there's anger behind it. Yes, there is, she insists. It occurs to me at this point that I have a relative called Margaret, but she lives about 60 miles away and I haven't seen her in years. Nonetheless, just in case she's got her addresses muddled, I ask her, "You looking for Margaret?" But she just hisses at me, "You know exactly who I'm looking for. What have you done with her?" I'm absolutely lost at this point. I've lived here 20 years, and I know the name of the previous owner, so I know she's not asking for them. I also know the names of the neighbors, and the names of the people who have lived on the street in the time I've been here and since moved. None of them are called Margaret. So, all I can do is tell her she's got the wrong address. No, this is my address. You're lying. That was a tad alarming. She's at the right address. She's not knocked on the wrong door. However, she clearly thinks I've done something to somebody who to the best of my knowledge has never lived here. I don't know how long the previous owner had this house, but we must be talking about at least 30 years since anyone called Margaret might have lived here. It's at this point that I notice that she subtly wrapped that dog lead around her now clenched fist like she's planning to use it as a weapon. In my youth, I did plenty of self-defense training, so I'm not exactly scared of her, as such, but I'm obviously getting a bit concerned about the situation that's brewing. I don't particularly wish to get involved in a brawl on my doorstep with a complete stranger. I'm torn between shutting the door in her face or trying to de-escalate the situation. In the end, I close the door a little so she's got less to aim at and tell her, look, I don't know who you're looking for, but if you think something's happened to your friend, maybe we should just call the police and let them sort it out? Sure enough, the woman slams her fist with the lead wrapped around it into my door. I later discovered she'd struck the door hard enough to crack the frosted glass window in the middle of it. She's bleeding from doing it. It must have hurt, but she doesn't flinch or show any sign of pain. What the hell? Any confidence I had in my self-defense classes started to waver here because I'm not used to people who don't feel pain. All I can think now is that she's on something and having a really bad trip, so at this point I put on my scariest voice and tell her to get the F back. I let her know I'm calling the police, and if she's still here when they get here, she can deal with them because I'm not dealing with her anymore. She tries to stop me from closing the door, but I shove her back and manage to get it closed and locked. I make a point to stand next to the door while I'm calling 999 so she can hear me. While I'm waiting for the police to turn up, I watch her on the surveillance feed. She moves out of shot multiple times, presumably to check the back of the house, and I hear her calling out for Margaret. A few minutes before the police finally turn up, I see her kick over my wheelie bins in a rage, but then the most chilling thing happens. She walks back to the front door and literally stares directly into my camera. That camera is pretty well hidden. I'm not saying that nobody could spot it, but most people would only know it was there if they'd been looking for it. Most people aren't looking for cameras, right? She knew it was there. She must have eyeballed it previously. I later reviewed all of the footage I had from that day, and she never made eye contact with it once. She never even looked in that direction. I only had about a week's worth of footage before the oldest footage is overwritten, and I checked everything I had and she was only on camera that day. All I can think is she'd been here more than a week prior. While she's staring right into it, she flips me the finger and then makes a throat cut gesture. Before walking off, I head to the window to watch her leave, and she's walking like she doesn't have a care in the world. She doesn't look back, just wanders away. Police finally show up, take a statement, I give them a copy of the surveillance footage, and that's that. I called a couple of times to follow up, but nothing. Nobody ever called me about it. I won't lie, this effed me up for a few weeks. I moved the knife block closer to the door. I started staying up really late and not getting much sleep, which really didn't help. On some nights I was so tired that I started experiencing auditory hallucinations. I'd hear people who weren't there talking, and because this woman was the cause of all my stress, I heard her voice and the name Margaret most of all. Every time I heard the gate open, it put me on edge. I'd review the surveillance footage every day. Eventually, as the weeks passed and I hadn't heard anything else, I started to regain some of my comfort and just put it down to a weird experience. It didn't last. About 4, maybe 5 weeks after the first encounter, she came back. It was just after midnight. I was in the living room mucking about on my phone with the TV on low volume for some background noise. I heard a car door slam and peeked out the front window. A dark-colored car was parked at the end of my driveway. I didn't see anyone moving about, but a minute or two later, the front gate swung open with its metallic groaning and there was a knock on the door. Even when I'm not involved in a blood feud over imaginary Margarets, I'm not going to answer the door at that time. I checked the surveillance camera. Its night vision mode is pretty crappy, but I'm positive it's that woman again. I can even see what I think is the dog lead. And of course, she knows I'm watching her because she looks at the camera again, and I tell you, when someone is already giving you the heebie-jeebies, the way night vision makes people's eyes look like soulless black voids doesn't do much to make you feel better. Suddenly, she yells out, "Shut that effing racket off and come out here. Now."
My kids hate each other because of social media. My husband and I have 2 amazing children who happen to be twins. 15, towards the end of the school year, my son asked at the dinner table, "Dad, can I go to the gym?" When he asked what for, he said, "I want to be an alpha." My daughter laughed out loud and said, "You're into that masculinity nonsense." At first I said it's fine if he wants to be in shape. We all have our differences. The next day she approaches me on something my son posted to his social media profile, and it was something along the lines of, "Women belong in the kitchen," and I immediately went to my son's room and asked why he posted that, and he replied with, "It's true." I took his phone and told him not to be posting things like that. After a while my daughter and him get into an argument. She says that men are nasty pigs who use women all the time, while he replied with, "Women are hoes." I immediately got angry and grabbed both of them by the arm and brought them each to their rooms without any electronics. I asked my husband what's gotten into them, and all he could say was social media. My son and daughter both got into their last heated argument about gender. She said he'd grow up to be a misogynist, and he replied better than a lonely feminist. Eventually it got to the point where she threw the remote at him, and all he was saying was, "Real men don't fight with women, they call the police." He did in fact call the police and they did say my daughter might be held accountable for the next time this happens. I'm just lost at this point.
What was the most shocking thing you learned about your family's past? I was scrolling through r/ask Reddit, and I saw a post that caught my eye. It asked for a story about a young woman who found an old family journal and discovered her ancestors' involvement in the abolitionist movement. I was intrigued by their bravery in helping slaves escape via the Underground Railroad, so I decided to look into my own family's past. My great-great-grandmother was a slave owned by an elderly man who had no children of his own. Surprisingly, he treated her like family and even let her go out alone sometimes, which was pretty risky considering how paranoid some slave owners were about their property running away or being stolen. One day while she was out on one of these excursions, she met another plantation owner who fell head over heels for her at first sight. He wanted to buy her freedom as soon as he could, but unfortunately before he could do that, the old man passed away without leaving any money behind for anyone, including my great-great-grandmother's admirer, so they never got to be together. My great-great-grandmother eventually got emancipated and married a white man named John Smith, who wasn't related to me. They had 2 daughters, Elizabeth, my grandmother, and Mary Jane, my mother. Despite all the hardships they faced during the Great Depression, they made sure their kids were taken care of so they could get an education. Years later, when I was rummaging through my grandmother Elizabeth's closet looking for something better to wear than what I had on at the time, I stumbled upon this wooden box that piqued my curiosity. After digging through piles of clothes trying to find it, I finally opened it up expecting jewelry or photos from way back when, but instead there was this ancient leather-bound book inside that seemed like it wanted me to explore its secrets. This book held pieces of my family history that hadn't been seen in years, stories full of joy and sadness and fear all wrapped up together, just waiting for someone like me to come along and uncover them again. Reading this book took me back in time. It reminded me how resilient our ancestors were despite all their struggles, how much hope they had even when things looked bleakest, how much love they shared with each other, how passionate they were about social justice advocacy. All these things helped pave the way for us today so we can live our lives freely without fear or oppression from anyone else. How keeping a gratitude journal changed my life with chronic pain. Starting my journal was one of the best decisions of my life. I have a neurological condition called chronic pain, and especially where I live now, it's not something people take very seriously. People often treat me as though I'm making up my pain for attention, or acting dramatic. I believe my negative attitude in the past was only a result of the reactions of people around me. As a solution to the way people treat me, I've tried meditating, and while I saw some improvement, it wasn't sustainable due to my pain. The only thing that is sustainable for me is maintaining my daily journals. Instructions: have a strong first sentence by making it attention-catching. Make sure the story has an appropriate and concise ending and THST it isn't drawn out. Instructions: have a strong first sentence by making it attention-catching. Make sure the story has an appropriate and concise ending and THST it isn't drawn out. Yours truly, a happy woman. I've had a gratitude journal for almost a year now. When I started it, I was in a really low place. I was very depressed and hated my life. I had been dealing with chronic pain for years and was becoming increasingly desperate to better my situation. I was reading happiness books, meditating, etc. I realized all these things weren't helping because they were not something I could sustain in my pain. The biggest thing that came from those efforts though was getting the idea to start a journal. So I did. Instructions: have a strong first sentence by making it attention-catching. Make sure the story has an appropriate and concise ending and THST it isn't drawn out. I started small. For 1 week, I jotted down 3 things every day that I was thankful for. I realized quickly that I wasn't very thankful for much, so I tried to force it. I didn't want to start every day with something negative, so I tried to think of one thing every night that would count for the next day. The first few days were hard. There were very few things I could bring myself to write down. But I persisted. Day by day, I started seeing improvement. Instructions: have a strong first sentence by making it attention-catching. Make sure the story has an appropriate and concise ending and THST it isn't drawn out. 3 weeks in, I was truly thankful for every little thing. I noticed I was appreciating the little things more, like the birds chirping outside my window. I realized I had never noticed them before. I kept it going for another week, and every day it brought me such peace. After about a month, I realized I had a happier outlook on life. I was still depressed, but I was grateful for my life and my home, even if it was not an ideal living situation. I started doing physical things I had previously thought I could not do, like going kayaking and keeping my pain at bay long enough to enjoy the process. I stopped focusing on the negatives in life. 1 year later, I am happier and better adjusted than I've ever been. My journal is still a part of my daily routine, and I now live in an ideal home for me with my own garden. I truly believe maintaining the gratitude journal helped me find peace in my daily life and find the beauty in it.
My husband threw out all our food to make me lose weight. We've been married for 6 years and together for 9 years. 2 college kids who fell in love and decided to build a life together. I recently gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, 14 weeks old, who's my entire world. I've suffered through 3 miscarriages and experienced several complications during pregnancy. I was on bed rest for 3 months and had to go through over 20 hours of labor before the doctors performed an emergency C-section. But our daughter was born healthy and happy, and all that pain was worth it. I had gained about 30 pounds during my pregnancy. I was 5 feet 7 inches 121 pounds prior. After giving birth I gained another 10 pounds since I have been breastfeeding, and my body has been craving calorie-dense foods. Not junk food. Just 70% minimum cacao chocolate, stuff like plantain chips, meats, dairy, nuts, etc. The doctor told me that I should listen to my body's needs and feed myself whatever I feel like I need. My husband has been helpful. He was happy when he learned the gender, took care of me and accommodated all my needs during my bed rest. Postpartum, however, he started to make up excuses to not help with the baby. He hasn't been as affectionate with our daughter as I had hoped he would be. He made a few negative comments about my weight here and there, like you're a bit chubby, today's a good day to work out and shed some pounds. I was an extremely active woman who worked out 4-5x a week and indulged in dangerous and adventurous activities. But now I'm completely exhausted, I can barely get out of bed, I've collapsed 5 times, and I'm stressed out, and at the same time I have to take care of our baby in the household. The other day, my husband had already gone to work and I went to the kitchen and found all my food gone. Every single bag, box, package, everything. I called him crying to inquire where all my food is, and he told me that he threw everything out because I needed to start losing weight. I hung up on him and called my best friend so she could bring me some food that I needed from the store. Afterwards my husband came home, and when he saw the food that she had brought, he threw everything outside and smashed everything with his foot. I was furious with him and I was screaming and yelling at him for being a selfish piece of crap, and he called me a effing cow while throwing some of the crushed packages at me and ended with punching a hole in the door. I called my brother who picked me and my baby up, and I'm now staying at his place. His mother, sister, and even my own mother are all defending him and that I have to lose weight and apologize to him for my postpartum breakdown. I guess I'm just not sure if this is good grounds to file for divorce, or should I listen to my mother? Is this how all men are wired? My husband threw out all our food to make me lose weight. Update. My mother still got in my head, and because I've always obeyed her I listened and went back to my husband. He did say that he was sorry for calling my a effing cow, but he said he was only being honest and said, "Isn't honesty the most important foundation of a happy and healthy relationship?" And I thought he was right. So I started cutting back on my food and eating low-calorie foods, but problems almost immediately arose. My energy levels dropped and my milk supply diminished quickly. I must have collapsed at least 4 during that period, and 3 days ago, at night, the baby was crying nonstop and my husband got angry and yelled at me to make her stop. I told him that I wasn't producing enough milk due to lack of food, and he literally said cows eat grass and produce gallons of milk. What are you, a meat cow? That's when I decided to take my daughter while I was shushing her and letting her breastfeed whatever drops of milk I had there, and once my husband fell asleep, I left the house and came to my best friend, who welcomed me in and told me I can stay here as long as I need to. I didn't go to my brother because I didn't trust him anymore, since he also told me that I should work things out with my husband. I already filed for divorce and cut off contact with his family and my own mother. My best friend and her fiancé have been helping me a lot by taking care of my baby while I was resting, and my best friend would bring whatever I needed from the store. My milk supply has returned to normal and I haven't collapsed once. I've probably had more rest for these 3 days than I've had in a month. I am going to attempt to get full custody and supervised visits from the father, but my best friend's fiancé said that it might be difficult to do without evidence. And I do have at least some evidence because we of course have cameras outside our house and they recorded everything. It may not be enough, but fingers crossed.
Teachers, what is the saddest story you have heard from a student? I was teaching middle school in a pretty bad district. A lot of students were poor, had single parents, or had parents in jail. One day I pulled a serial troublemaker 8th grader out of class to talk. Other teachers on my team were complaining that he'd been more aggressive than usual, and as the team leader, I wanted to chat before bringing in the admin. After a few minutes of asking how his life was going, he broke down a bit but tried to hide it with a defiant shrug. "I'm going to see my dad this weekend." "Oh yeah? How long has it been?" I recalled the kid's dad was in prison. 5 years. Another shrug. His body language said, "No big deal," but his eyes told another story. "Okay, what are you going to talk to him about?" "My brother." "Oh, I didn't know you had a brother. I'm going to ask what he did to put my brother into a coma." Not gonna lie, I totally froze. "Your dad did that?" "Yeah, I want to know what he hit him with." I honestly had no idea how to reply. Can't hug a student, even if he would let me, which he wouldn't. I started to say something about how he's a strong kid, and I had high hopes for him, and if he needed anything, but he cut me off. "I need to use the bathroom. I got hairspray in my eyes this morning while I was getting ready. It really stings." He was fighting to keep the emotion off his face, but it wasn't some sweet, cathartic response to my platitudes. His eyes were holding back an epic rage fury the likes of which I don't think I'll ever understand. I'm not much into telepathy, but I could feel his anger boiling over, even though he was still a stone. "Okay," I said, "but if you want to talk." He was down the hall before I finished. He didn't come to school that Monday.
My jealous sister-in-law is obsessed with my pregnancy and called me a liar for not confirming. Now, she refuses to look at me because I shamed her in front of the whole family. I got pregnant in November. Previous to this, I had a very difficult miscarriage, so this time around, I decided not to tell anyone of the pregnancy until I was 12 weeks along. A couple of times during those initial 12 weeks, sister-in-law would ask point blank if I was pregnant. I always tried to politely brush it off and just hold my belly and say I love food, implying I'm just fat. Sister-in-law acts like this with everyone, but nobody really says anything to her. She married young and had a messy divorce, so people just try to cut her some slack. Even my mother-in-law ended up calling me at some point saying, "Please don't be angry at Rachel. She sees everything you have and she doesn't have it because she is divorced." Once 12 weeks rolled around, my husband and I told my parents and his parents. I guess his parents told his sister, but that didn't bother me too much. I figure it's past 12 weeks, so it's not a secret. and sister-in-law had been pregnant before, so she knows how private these things can be. Well, apparently I was wrong. My in-laws had a gathering at my husband's grandmother's house, and several times sister-in-law brought up how I was pregnant and she called it. At one point she called me a liar because I didn't confirm with her when she asked point blank. I just kept looking away and people were giving her weird looks but not confronting her. Nobody was really even speaking to her. She was just talking loudly to herself. My husband was trying to quietly give her a death stare but she kept ignoring him. Plus he was running after our toddler, so I don't blame him for it. He's very non-confrontational, so I'm sure that after we left, he would have called her the next day and spoken to her. But I guess this time I saved him the phone call. She just didn't drop the subject, so I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Why are you so obsessed with my uterus? Seems a bit weird." And she got offended and called me a liar again for not confirming with her when she asked point blank. I looked at her again and said, "Asking if someone is pregnant is a really rude question. I don't know why you think it's appropriate, but of course, if you always want to be first to know, I can text you post-coitally every time I have intimacy with your brother. That way you can even have the astrology sign of the future baby figured out." She looked at me disgusted and just kept saying it's wrong to lie, and my husband and I and my toddler left. I burst into tears as soon as we left, but my husband was completely on my side about it. His mom even called me the next day to say that she spoke to sister-in-law to say she was inappropriate. Sister-in-law now refuses to look at me for any family functions. Easier for me.
I adopted my best friend's son because his entire family died in an accident. 15 years later he proposed to my daughter, who he's raised since she was a baby. Back in 2001, my best friend's family died tragically in a car accident and only their 16-year-old son survived. My wife and I took him into our home for over 4 years while he finished school and he was able to stand on his own. I saw him as one of my children and I was so proud of what he was able to accomplish. Wayne's wife and I gave him a monetary donation for him to start his own business. It quickly became wildly successful. He's now 36 and has grown into a fine young man. That was until we learned the truth this past Sunday at a family dinner. There, my 21-year-old daughter informed the entire family that she was engaged to him. In fact, they had been dating for the past 3 years. She delivered the news so happily, and clapped when she revealed the news, clearly expecting us to get up and congratulate her. But we all felt incredibly betrayed and blindsided. The amount of lies and secret keeping they had to be telling to keep this relationship from us is astonishing. Not only is the large age difference very disturbing to us, but they were raised as siblings and she would refer to him as her big brother when she was a child. It was all very disgusting and I knew I had lost my appetite. I told them both that I did not approve of their relationship and he was no longer allowed in my home. As long as my daughter continued this relationship, she was also disowned. Alienating my daughter would probably cause more harm, but I don't want her to think that I accept their relationship by treating her like nothing's wrong. She's definitely the victim in all this and I want to be there for her, but she's not happy about me banning her fiancé from our house. I told her I wanted this relationship to end immediately because I am disgusted and angered. This man, who I thought was my son, had been preying on my young daughter for God knows how long. He helped raise her for God's sake. He babysat her, changed her diapers, came to family dinners every week, went on family vacations, etc. He may not have been biologically mine, but he was raised as such and that should have let him know that my daughter is off limits. He was a constant part of her life since she was 1. There should be no reason why he chose my daughter of all the girls in the world to be with. My wife and I talked the situation over and we decided to go to our daughter's apartment. I first apologized to her over my initial reaction that came out of anger. I made it clear that her safety and well-being was my first concern. We had a long discussion, and there were some things that my daughter said that alarmed me, such as her loving him while she was 14 and he was 29 and them not doing anything intimate until she was 18, which meant that bastard was preying on my daughter and waiting for her to turn 18 to sink his claws into her. However, since their engagement has now become public, concerned family members have contacted me with events that seemed innocent at the time, but now seem suspicious. For example, my wife's sister told us about a time when our kids were at her house. My daughter was 16 and he was 31. She said she had heard him leaving my daughter's room in the morning. My son also told me that he had run into my 15-year-old daughter out with the bastard when she was supposed to be in school. I can't believe we never saw the signs. He had been grooming her for years. I feel sick knowing we willingly took him in and loved him like family because this is how he chooses to repay us, by manipulating our underage daughter. I asked my daughter what she loved about him and she went on a tangent about how he's always been generous and caring to her because he would always give her extra things on special occasions like her birthday or holidays. She never thought this behavior was suspicious. Because he had told her the reason he was giving her extra gifts was because she was always overshadowed by her brothers, and she deserved extra attention that she didn't get from her mother and I. I hate to say it, but maybe he had a point because if we had paid more attention to her, we would have seen that she was being groomed and there was a child lover living under our roof. My wife asked if he had manipulated or threatened her into keeping the relationship a secret, but she said the decision was mutual. She was worried that we would stop paying for her apartment and tuition if we had known, which was true, we would have. My wife then asked if she felt bad or guilty about lying to us for 3 years straight. We always had weekly dinners and they sat across from us, pretending like they weren't dating. Our daughter even went as far as making up boys she had been dating while at college so that we wouldn't suspect anything. She did feel guilty about lying, but her fiancé had told her it would be worth it in the long run. It was not. I told her that because I had raised him, he was her brother and she kept denying it. She said they weren't related by blood so it didn't count, but I let her know the age gap was really concerning. There's a reason he's dating someone 15 years younger than him instead of dating someone his own age. He likes little girls and she needs to accept that. She got mad at us, and tried to kick us out, but I stayed put and told her she wasn't in a healthy relationship. I was scared for her well-being and she could do so much better than her adopted brother. I suggested family therapy for us, but she said she doesn't need it. I told her that if she can't see that she was groomed, then she needs it more than all of us. But she wasn't budging. To her, he had loved her like nobody else had, and I told her that's because he had been preying on her since she was little and made her fall in love with him. I needed her to understand that she needs to leave this relationship, but in order for my wife and I to be able to help, she needs to want the help. This was probably too much for her to process, so I let her know she was always welcome into our home. Before leaving, she said she would like her fiancé and I to speak, but I do not think that is a wise idea right now.
My dog found a body in my backyard that looks exactly like me. After I was finished fiddling with my hoo-ha, I noticed it was raining and I had to bring my dog in. "It's raining, Jessie. Come inside." I called. It wasn't the first time I'd caught my Irish setter eagerly scooping up grass and dirt with her paws, but it was certainly the first time she'd succeeded in uncovering something. Something horrifying. "What the fuck?" I screamed. I locked eyes with Jessie's discovery in the ditch, a woman's corpse. My heart cascaded towards the earth, pulling my limp body in tow. And as darkness enveloped my vision, I prayed that it had all been a direful dream. When I regained consciousness, I found myself lying in the wet grass, eyeing both the setting sun above and Jessie's slobbery tongue. "I'm awake," I groaned, sitting up and stroking her. "I just took a quick nap? Why am I?" Then it all came back to me. And even in that darkening garden, which backs onto a large forest, I could see what lay in the hole. Me. I felt my chest twist and tighten as I expended all of my energy in an effort to retain consciousness. There was absolutely no denying it. The lifeless body in Jessie's ditch was an identical copy of my own. From the brunette hair to every freckle on her newly rotting face, everything but the horizontal scar on her forehead. I ran inside, whilst Jessie continued to flit between me and the dead woman who looked like me. My dog whimpered in confusion, and I joined her. But with trembling hands, I managed to pick up my phone from the kitchen counter to ring my husband. "Hi, honey," he said. "It's a bit late to be ringing me, isn't it, Jack? You need to come home." I shuddered. "What's wrong, Sophia?" he asked. "I'll be home tomorrow. Please ask your boss to let you come home early," I whispered, refusing to peel my eyes from the patio doors overlooking Jessie's ditch. "What's going on?" Jack asked a little more urgently. Jessie found something in the garden that I can't explain it over the phone." I cried. I was met with silence. A pause that filled me with inexplicable dread. It must have lasted no more than 2 seconds, but it was enough to raise every hair on my flesh. And then, "You sound really worked up, darling," Jack said. "I'll ask Stuart to let me drive back early." That slowed the immediate alarm bells, but it did not still them. I let Jessie inside and the two of us curled up on the sofa, lights on and patio curtains drawn. Though that did nothing to resolve the existential anxiety, as I knew what lay beyond them. 2 hours later, Jack returned from his business trip, and Jessie bounded into the hallway to greet him. "Where's your mummy?" he cooed. "Is she okay?" When my husband entered the lounge, he beamed brightly at me, a soothing smile that would usually put me at ease. "What did our crazy dog find?" he asked. I need to show you, not tell you," I said. I drew the curtains and opened the patio doors onto our pitch-black garden. It must have been around 10 p.m. The world felt unnervingly still. The only sounds were my squelching footsteps in the grass and Jessie's nervous panting. I pulled my phone from my pocket and shone the flashlight into the ditch. But what I saw filled me with as much terror as the initial discovery. "What am I supposed to see?" Jack asked, sighing. The ditch was empty. "No, it was right here," I whispered breathlessly. "I passed out when I saw it." Jack nodded. "Well, that probably explains it. You got confused and fainted? You're prone to doing that." "Yes, but I don't hallucinate things. And the body was still there after I regained consciousness." I huffed. Jack smiled and stroked my face. "You always misremember things. Why don't you head up to bed? I'll pick up a McDonald's for us. I need some food, and you could do with a coffee." I begrudgingly agreed, watching from the bedroom window as Jack hopped in the car and went on a late-night McDonald's trip. But I didn't go to bed. Not after the house's external lights revealed something terrifyingly damning on the bumper of his BMW. Dirt. My heart was pounding as I pieced together what I could, that Jack had clearly slipped into the garden and moved the body to his car before coming inside. Why? Well, I had an inkling as to how I could find the answers about the man I thought I had known for 7 years. With Jessie closely following me, still rattled about her discovery in the garden, I headed to Jack's office. It wasn't a room that he had ever forbade me from entering. However, one of his desk drawers had a lock, which had always been a point of contention in our relationship. Something that Jack forever dismissed as a security measure against intruders. I didn't know how much time I had before he returned home, so I got to work. I strode through Jack's cluttered workspace, rounding the corner of the desk. Without hesitation, I proceeded to hammer away at the locked drawer with the blunt end of a heavy ornament. Jessie pawed at the drawer inquisitively, barking at the excessive noise. "That's it, girl," I grunted, hammering away. "Let's make it look like an accident. You were all worked up, after all." After repeatedly bludgeoning the drawer lock, the handle eventually snapped off the wood and the drawer slid open. Inside, there was nothing but a small piece of paper with the following printed words: "Desktop, Ruin 940714. S folder, UE7643. Passwords, not what I'd expected to find, and I knew I had limited time before Jack returned, but there was no way I could waste the opportunity. Everything that I'd known about my husband was a lie. I threw caution to the wind, turning on the monitor and sitting in his desk chair. The password worked. As the desktop loaded, I wondered what I would find in his folder. What sordid secret was my husband keeping? I didn't want to imagine why there would be another me in a shallow grave. Cloning. Time travel. My head was spinning. I searched Windows File Explorer for his folder, and there was one result. A password-protected folder. And, so, I shakily entered the key. Inside the folder, I found neither evidence of some master cloning program, nor evidence that my husband had traveled to the future and murdered me. Yes, I'm aware that my hypotheses were ludicrous, but the truth is far less believable. What did I find? Just one Word document with an obscure title, The Seed Process. I opened it to find diagrams and instructions for some sort of ritual. The Seed Process. I violently trembled at the crudely drawn diagrams, depictions of humans being lobotomized. Brains in jars. Roots sprouting from the pink matter. I skim-read the list of instructions, and the picture of this seemingly supernatural ritual started to form. Remove the brain. Plant the seed. Water the brain, and watch limbs grow. Let a new, improved human flourish. Mold your loved ones in your desired image. No more resistance. I started to wail uncontrollably, and Jessie nuzzled my leg to soothe me. I could type more of what I read in that document, but recounting it in greater detail would only make me relive that sickening feeling, a horror that cannot be put into words. Jack has been removing my brain, burying my corpse, and regrowing me from the brain outwards using a seed, whatever the fuck that means. I don't know how many times he's done it. I don't know how many versions of me are buried in the garden, in the forest, perhaps. Jessie likes to dig there too, but it explains so much. The blank spots in my memory. The misremembering Jack always mentions. The fact that every time I notice a red flag for my husband, I wake feeling different, refreshed, compliant. Every time, he's been chipping a piece of me away. Changing me. Improving me. That night, before he came back to the house, I took Jessie and left without a word. Is he tracking me? I hope not. Whoever me might be. A far stretch from Sophia. That much is certain. And it fills me with a deep sorrow. It also explains the unsalvageable chasm within me. Some repressed, unreachable, past version of myself lies at the bottom of that well, I imagine. After all, Jack killed the real Sophia long ago. Who knows how deeply into the forest she's buried.
Am I the asshole for demanding my husband to pay me the $1,000 he spent behind my back? My husband 33 and I, 31, used to have a 2-income home, but in 2020 we've lost our home and one of our incomes, his. We moved into a smaller apartment, had to sell many things and give up most of our costly habits. My husband has an expensive habit of going to the spa for a weekly massage session. We live in an urban area, so this stuff is ridiculously expensive. A single session is $250, and he has to have it every week, so that it'd be nearly $1,000 a month. I offered him to have his session at a regular spa, but no, he has to get it from that luxurious spa near the restaurant we used to go, saying the lady who gives the massage is an expert and he's used to her. Problem is, I'm the only income earner and I'm struggling to make ends meet. I'm also pregnant and need to save money to prepare a nursery. I told him to cut his sessions, but he refused. I told him I won't be paying for them anymore, and he said he'd get the money himself. Yesterday I checked and saw that he's been using my credit card for his sessions for a whole month and had maxed out completely. I found that out when I went shopping for baby essentials and the cashier said I had no money. I had to return everything, then went home and went off on him. I told him he maxed my card out and made me look like an idiot at the store. He said he didn't tell me cause he knew I'd have an issue with it. I demanded he pay back the $1,000 he spent, but he refused. I yelled at him, calling him irresponsible, and he got upset and called me selfish and told me to stop playing victim and that this is affecting both of us since he's going to be a parent too and it's stressful for him and I keep dismissing his own needs as a human. I went upstairs and he went out. He started giving me the silent treatment, but I kept demanding the money back. He said I shouldn't expect it back since we're married, then my money is technically his and I should stop using his unemployment against him. It's gotten to the point where I don't know what to think. So am I the asshole? I hate an 8-year-old. I know the title sounds immature, but hear me out. I won't use any real names. So my little sister has a friend who is literally evil. Let's call her Bella. They are both in the same grade. Bella tried to drown my sister in the lake. She also hits my sister in a non-playful way. But that's not why I hate her. A few months back we had kittens, 3 orange kittens. Bella decided to put one of them in a drawer, then proceeded to slam it shut on the kitten. I never heard a kitten scream so loudly, so I ran to see what happened. I got the kitten out and he's okay now. A few days ago she was over and decided to throw my orange cat into something. I heard a loud thud, so I went to see what happened. Bella said the cat fell, but I know cats don't hit the ground that hard from falling. The next day my cat could barely eat or drink. The poor thing couldn't even walk right, so we took him into the vet. Turns out he had inflammation around his spine on his neck, so the vet gave him some meds and we went home. I questioned my sister, and she said that Bella said cats always land on their feet. Today I snuggled my cat because he couldn't keep his body temperature up, and then when I had to leave the house, my mom called me to tell me my cat died. That cat was my best friend, and he died because an 8-year-old wanted to see if he would land on his feet after being thrown. Am I the jerk for leaving my sick husband at home to go to a party? My, 25M, Husband Harry, 26M, has been in bed with the flu for about a week now. He's quite miserable, headache, nausea, fairly high fever, so I've been working from home to be able to keep an eye on him throughout the day. It was my younger siblings, twins, 9, birthday on Saturday and my husband and I were invited over to my parents' house to celebrate. On Friday, Harry told me he wasn't feeling up to a children's birthday party, which is understandable. I wouldn't necessarily want to be around rowdy children if I was sick either. So I decided I'd go there on my own, bring over the presents, stay for an hour or two and be back home before dinner. To be honest, after spending days holed up in our flat taking care of my husband, I was quite grateful for the opportunity to get outside for a few hours. When I told Harry as much, he didn't comment on it but he did seem a bit grumpy afterwards. Saturday came and I drove over to my parents' house in the afternoon. They live about 20 minutes away. I left Harry with some painkillers, tea and tissues on the nightstand so he wouldn't need to get up while I was gone. I told him he could call me in case something happened, though. The party went great and I got back home after about 2 hours without any calls from Harry, so I assumed everything had gone well. However, he was frowning all evening and when I asked whether he was alright, he called me selfish for leaving him alone and accused me of not caring about his well-being. He told me I should have stayed home with him instead of having fun on my own while he was miserable. He has since been giving me the silent treatment whenever I tried to talk to him about it. It's been a few days and I thought he'd have calmed down by now, but he's still sulking and I'm starting to wonder whether his reaction is reasonable and I'm the here. What disturbing rumor turned out to be true at your school? When I was a senior in high school, we had a new teacher join the faculty to teach health and home economics. She was probably about 26 years old and very, very attractive. Everyone was talking about the hot new teacher. As I was senior class president, I needed a new faculty advisor since my previous advisor of 3 years retired at the end of my junior year. About 2 weeks later the principal called me into his office and informed me that the new hot teacher was going to be our new class advisor for the rest of the year. As a result, she and I spent a lot of time together, at school and off campus, organizing and running myriad events to raise money for the class, plan the prom, field trips etc. Soon, the rumors started flying around that she and I were messing around. This was completely false. I can say she never acted inappropriately towards me or suggested anything to make me think she had plans for any type of physical or intimate activity. She was a fantastic advisor and always just that, a class advisor. I spent the rest of the year denying these rumors with friends, with teachers and with parents. I was even interrogated by my wrestling coach the day before the district championship match. She and I had a laugh about it at graduation as she had to face similar questions from other faculty as well as the principal. She confided in me that she had tendered her resignation but the principal would not accept it and said he believed her and would ensure the rumor was squashed. So I graduated and left for my plebe year at West Point, forgetting about the entire situation. At West Point the first year is called plebe year rather than freshman year. The first semester of my plebe year was moving along as it should with no unusual events worth mentioning until the final month. Then, in early December, the topic of my high school faculty advisor resurfaced. One night when I was studying, there was a knock on my door and the company tactical officer, a regular Army captain, walked in and told me to report to his office immediately as there was a phone call for me from the Dover Police Department. Now, I immediately assumed it was my brother playing some kind of twisted joke on me since he was a captain in the very same police department waiting for me on the phone. Since my TAC was standing right behind me, I answered the phone as we were taught. Cadet Kerwick speaking, how may I help you sir/ma'am? I immediately recognized the voice on the other end. It was not my brother but a close friend I had grown up with and known for over 15 years. He said, hey Steve, hope things are going well there, but I don't have time to chit-chat. I need to record this call and ask you some questions. Do you consent to being recorded and will you allow me to swear you in so that this is official and if anything you say is later proven to be false or misleading, you may be subject to criminal charges and a warrant issued for your arrest. His name was Bill but we all called him Woody. I said, Woody, is this some kind of a joke? Who put you up to this? Because I'm about to shit my pants as I have no idea what this is about. My mind was racing so fast trying to guess, counter-guess, and trying to process that I could potentially be kicked out of West Point for something I had no clue about as of that moment. Woody replied, it's no joke and this is a very serious case we are investigating concerning inappropriate behavior between an adult and a minor or minors with regard to possible consensual or non-consensual intimate activities or intimate assault. That's when I knew exactly what this was about. I said, go ahead Woody, I consent and will answer any questions you have. So I basically had to repeat his words almost like being sworn in as a witness who was going to testify in court. The questions all focused on that hot, young class advisor I worked with during my senior year. They kept me on the phone for an hour asking every possible question imaginable and then asking those same questions again in a different way. I answered every one honestly and candidly. But at the 1 hour mark I was becoming agitated as it seemed like they were on a witch hunt and were going to keep asking questions until they got an answer they liked. So I spoke up and said, gentlemen, you can continue to ask me these questions in any order or format that you desire but I can assure you that my answers will not change because they are truthful and there was never one moment where Ms. X acted inappropriately in front of me. She was always completely professional and never even insinuated at something that would cross the line between teacher and student. Following that statement they had no further questions and told me they would contact me again if they needed to follow up or get additional details. My TAC could see I was visibly shaken so we talked for another hour and I told him everything about the situation. He never had to ask me if I was being truthful because every cadet adheres to a strict honor code that becomes part of who we are. That code states that a cadet shall not lie, cheat or steal, nor tolerate those who do. He told me that I handled things professionally and can hold my head high if I ever return home for a visit. And that was that. I went back to my studies and prepared for my final exams and went home for a short Christmas break. That's when I found out that my teacher, my class advisor, had been found guilty of having a relationship with someone in the current senior class. That relationship was intimate and he was a minor. Seems the student ran around bragging to everyone that he was doing it with the hot teacher. I don't know if it was true or if he made it up. What was true was that she was fired from her job and never allowed to teach again. She had to register as an intimacy offender for the rest of her life. She lost everything: family, friends, money, possessions, and had to serve time as an inmate in a state correctional facility. If you ask me what I think, I don't believe it. I know the kid who was allegedly in a relationship with her. He was a complete jerk. Loud mouth, not smart, not smooth, not good looking, and most of all, he was a liar and a storyteller who would say anything if he thought it would make him look cool. I had wished I could have tracked him down and interrogated him my way. My guess is things might have ended differently. But I never got the chance to run into him and the cards he laid were played. What are the best hacks to know when at a restaurant? When my father-in-law was diagnosed with lung cancer and started chemo, the hospital gave him a list of things to avoid because his immune system was compromised. A lot of stuff was obvious, like soft serve ice cream and anything from a soda fountain, because the nozzles on both don't always get cleaned that well. Some stuff made sense but wasn't obvious until I read it, like don't get slices of pizza, because they have been sitting out, and when getting a whole pizza ask for it unsliced, because the pizza cutter only gets washed at the end of the day and sits on the counter going through every pizza. But the one that surprised me the most was don't get Jamba Juice. It was the only company called out by name. And it wasn't don't get certain things from there, it was just don't get Jamba Juice period. Makes me wonder how gross their stuff must get. Never use vending machines in general, they are 99% of the time never cleaned. All we are taught to do, I have worked at dozens of different places, is to once a week rinse it out with water, but even then it is rarely performed weekly. Usually what tends to happen is the sweetener tends to get gooey and clumped up all in the drink, and the nozzles can get mossy. It is terrible for your health to have these artificially sweetened drinks, let alone have it with moss and gooey sucralose. It is probably one of the worst things you can do for yourself. I used to date a restaurant inspector and he always said to go to the bathroom and wash your hands before buying food at a fast food joint. If the soap dispenser is empty, leave. If the condition of the restroom is filthy, then leave. Subway's meat all comes packaged. No surprise really. However, when you open up the package of turkey, you get hit with a wave of farts. The turkey smells like real, actual human farts. My manager even warned me about it before I opened my first package. Also, when we made the tuna salad we would have to weigh out a pound of mayo to mix with the fish. If you go in the morning, all of the meat / cheeses / vegetables / bread or whatever was left from the night before. That stuff gets used up before they start using everything that's been freshly made / cut.
Students who have dated their teachers, what's your story? Dated, and married, my general chemistry TA, nothing scandalous though. We didn't start dating until a couple of years after the class ended. I had a huge crush on him throughout, and we'd run into each other a bit on campus and chat. Eventually we saw each other intentionally, then dated. During the class, I did go to a lot of tutoring, digging through my textbook for obscure shit to ask him. He's a good man, he always redirected our conversations back to chemistry when I'd try to get off topic. We laugh now because it was super obvious, and I actually did learn a lot from him. I dated my high school history teacher year after graduating high school. We're still together 5 years later. It was awkward with my high school friends once we came out. He is the best man I've ever met and I'll definitely be with him forever. He's 10 years older than me, so we still have lots in common. I'd say the worst part is that going back to our hometown, still so many dirty looks, wish they could just be happy for us.
My coward husband thought I baby-trapped him even though we are married for 7 years. He is now crying and begging for forgiveness after I sent him divorce papers. My husband and I have been married for 7 years. He lived next door and we just clicked. It was like a fairy tale. One thing I have always thought that made our marriage so strong was our friendship and trust in each other, although now my husband seems to think otherwise. Recently, my husband found out that his friend, Jeff, has been baby-trapped. Basically, Jeff's wife stopped taking the pill and fell pregnant a few months into their relationship, and only came clean after the wedding. Jeff came from a very conservative family, which his wife knew, and so he felt obligated to marry her after the pregnancy. Unfortunately, he also now feels obligated to stay regardless of the clearly messed up dynamic because he feels that he has made a vow and will stick by his wife and child. My husband, for some reason, has been really rattled by this. I am currently 4 months pregnant with our first, and my husband asked me yesterday if I was trying to baby trap him. I first laughed because I honestly thought it was a joke. He was dead serious and doubled down. So I told him that we had already been married for 7 years and that a baby was not going to trap him any more than he already was. My husband did not like that answer and said that there was no time limit on baby trapping and that my intentions were clearly not pure given how I was acting as if his concerns were a joke. He said he had trusted me in the past, but my laughing in his face gave him no reason to trust me now. I did not really know what he wanted or how I was meant to respond, and I said we should talk about this in the morning. I woke up and my husband was gone, but I did have a nasty text from his brother saying that I had forced my husband into this pregnancy despite it having been a joint decision. My husband had insulted me and our marriage in a very hurtful way. I was so confused and upset that it didn't occur to me to be angry. In the meantime, I called my best friend. She came over with some chocolate and was furious when she heard. She called her husband to the house after I had gotten everything out of my system. He is a family lawyer, and he said that he would happily represent me if I wanted to go through with a divorce. Then, my mother-in-law showed up with my husband in the car not long after my best friend's husband arrived, and she practically dragged him to the door. My mother-in-law said that he had showed up at theirs late last night, saying that he was certain that I was using the baby to trap him. Fortunately, my mother-in-law is a smart woman and absolutely tore him a new one before dragging him to the house today to apologize. My worm of a husband did not look me in the eye the entire time, but said that he was scared about becoming a dad and projected his fears onto me. He said he wasn't sure if he was ready for that kind of commitment, but he will step up, as if he is some kind of hero. I roll. I called him a coward and told him that he should stay with his parents until I was ready to talk to him. I didn't want to say anything about the divorce papers because I didn't know what his reaction would be, but he will find out soon enough. I also showed my mother-in-law the text from my brother-in-law, and her face was like a storm cloud. Overall, everything has settled a little bit. A few days later, I had a scan with the doctor, my mother-in-law attended with me, and the baby was happy and healthy. I finally found out the gender. I am having a little girl and I am over the moon. My mother-in-law was a gem and was so touched that I included her in the scan. She is very excited to be a granny. On that note, my mother-in-law organized a family lunch a couple of days after the scan. I was a little reluctant, but I knew that she had good intentions and wouldn't do anything to make matters worse. When I arrived, my husband and brother-in-law were there, along with my father-in-law and mother-in-law. It was quite awkward until my mother-in-law asked if anyone had anything to say. My brother-in-law spoke first and apologized for his awful text. He said that he was swept up in the moment and wanted to support his brother. I explained how hurtful it had been to receive such a nasty, vindictive message. He knew as well as anyone that my husband and I had been trying for almost a year. Next, my mother-in-law looked quite pointedly at my husband, but he actively avoided anyone's eyes. Eventually, she spoke up and announced that my husband would no longer be welcome to stay in their house. She said that she was ashamed to have her son behave the way that he has and that she would prefer to make space for her granddaughter rather than have some lowlife hanging around. My husband had opened up his mouth to say something earlier, but his eyes lit up when she said, "Granddaughter." My husband had always wanted a girl and he was suddenly in tears, saying that he was so pleased to hear the gender. My husband suddenly wanted to touch my belly and asked if he could come home and paint the nursery. I told him in no uncertain terms that he was not welcome and that he had destroyed any trust I had in him. I told him that if I took him back, I would be worried that he would disappear at any kind of big news and that I couldn't have someone at my side who balked at the first chance. He asked me if I was telling him it was over, and I point-blankly told him that I had engaged a lawyer. My husband was kind of frantic, but I felt so calm, like someone had put a blanket over me in the situation. Normally I am a big crier, but I felt so removed from everything. My husband said that this was not fair. He had shown a little bit of panic and suddenly I was throwing away our life, even denying him his daughter. My father-in-law reminded him that this was the same baby he felt trapped by no more than 2 weeks ago. My husband said it was a mistake and he was stressed, but my mother-in-law asked him how he thought I felt. She asked him to imagine being so vulnerable and giving up your body to grow a family, then suddenly the one person you trust is accusing you of terrible things. He said it was a mistake and he projected his fears onto me. I told my husband that I felt so broken when he left because I had all these dreams of a beautiful family that came crashing down in an instant. He said that he wanted those things with me and he wanted our baby girl, but that he let the panic overwhelm him. I told him that wasn't a good enough excuse for what he put me through, and that he certainly didn't seem panicked when his mom had to drag him to my door to apologize. He didn't have much of an answer other than to say that he was ready now and wanted our girl. In all of this, in all the times he told me he wanted me and our baby, he never once apologized properly. After a very long discussion, the lunch wrapped up and my mother-in-law stood by what she had said about my husband not being welcome. He asked again if he could come home with me, and I told him that it was my house. I owned the house before. What conspiracy theory do you believe is 100% true? The treatments for supposedly incurable diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's actually exist and big pharmaceutical companies just don't want you to find out. I'm a professor at an elite university and we're actually told to keep our major discoveries private because it needs to get approved by the higher ups. I've seen so many of my colleagues make a breakthrough discovery that would make them win a Nobel Prize, but were forced to hide the research in a private database that only private pharmaceutical companies and other researchers had access to. Many times you would see these companies patent the research and release it years later as a miracle medicine. I've tested out a few myself, and you'd never expect that the things we take for granted could be the secret cure to our issues. One time when I was going through the piles of research, which included things like curing diabetes or a climate change quick fix, I found a paper on functional mushrooms. I thought they meant the psychedelic type, but it turns out mushrooms are more efficient than we thought. One prime example is the stoned ape theory. They also had studies of using mushrooms on rich students to get them into fancy schools because it would give them cognitive advantages over all the other students. Basically, instead of getting insanely high on mushrooms and seeing shadow figures, these mushrooms actually help them be an academic weapon. The article highlighted their finding as the next big thing to help at-risk students and help people take advantage of their full potential. As for the study itself, it said that the mushrooms used were chaga mushrooms and lion's mane. They were meant to be mixed with caffeine so that the mind could enter a focus mode and have heightened cognitive abilities. This is because chaga mushrooms protect your brain cells and improve immune function, lion's mane boosts cognitive function and memory, and caffeine improves concentration and raises alertness. When used together, these ingredients can enhance your ability to focus, remember things, and think clearly, which means a person's productivity would shoot up by 100%. I was obsessed with this idea because I was extremely behind on my work. I was going to look for lion's mane and chaga mushrooms to mix into a cup of coffee, but I found a flow state mushroom coffee that already had the same ingredients. The next day, I brewed the mushroom coffee and got to work. Usually, I have to force myself to do the work because I need to survive, but when I drank it, I felt my mind realign. I was about to grade 150 papers in just 2 hours, and it felt oddly calming. Usually, I procrastinate a lot because everything else seemed more interesting than seeing a student put a frowny face on a question they didn't understand, so I just couldn't concentrate. By the time I got to the university, I immediately felt ready to start the day with new energy and focus. As I was teaching, I sped through my lessons, and I didn't have to deal with annoying students asking extra questions because they understood everything. Some of my classes even ended early. Then, I had to grade my stack of papers. I would usually feel drained from teaching and using all my brain power to discuss each lesson plan. However, that day, I still had enough energy to grade papers without any issues. I sat down at my desk and went into great detail about what each student did wrong and how they could improve. I was able to get through 2 piles of papers instead of my usual half. By now, I would be exhausted and ready to go home. Though this time I didn't have those pessimistic thoughts, and I was more willing to do more work because I was still focused on completing everything for the day. I was managing my workload better than ever, and the flow state mushroom coffee was more effective than drinking regular coffee, especially since it did more than just keep me awake. When I looked at the mushroom research paper again later that day, I realized I had experienced all the effects written there, down to the last detail. Since it worked, that meant there was a different reason the higher-ups decided not to show the public any of the research. It felt like they were waiting to patent the formula to sell it at super high prices, and profit more off of people. That got me thinking, if the study on flow state mushroom coffee was successful, what does that mean for every other study? Edit. The coffee I use is called Clarity Brew. Look it up.
What was the scariest experience you had regarding your child? We had just moved to Reno with our year-old baby boy Chris. It was Sunday, and the flea market on El Rancho was really busy. We were buying and selling odds and ends to brighten up the new apartment. Chris was right there in his stroller, in front of our stall, among people in traffic. Loads of friendly Hispanic family folk stopped to ruffle his blonde hair. Chris loved attention and he was a charmer too. Then suddenly, he was gone, poof, disappeared into thin air. We did a cursory area search, nothing, and no one had seen him. We had never felt such fear and loss at the same time, ever, like I almost peed in my pants. My wife same reaction. Both of us deserted the stall, and quickly threaded through the outdoor aisles of traffic, to find our boy. Our emotions were compounded because we had recently had our dog stolen from our pickup/camper at a gas station in Phoenix. There was also a language barrier problem. Indeed, this was primarily a Spanish-speaking crowd, but some kind soul led us to the manager, who announced on the PA system the particulars of a lost baby on the premises. Hispanics are family people, and the instant empathy radiating through this 2 to 4 acre crowd of hundreds of people was palpable. Then we heard those magic words over here. Oh, the relief. He had escaped the stroller somehow and was ambling around a food stall, scarfing up treats. This event still comes to mind on occasion because it was so intense. We thought our baby had been stolen, and the trauma of having to live with that would have been devastating beyond belief.
Surgeons, what is the scariest thing you've seen in the operating room? A 30-year-old man came to see me for unexplained visual loss in one eye. I thought there was a mass pushing against his left optic nerve and ordered an MRI. This demonstrated that the mass was in fact a large aneurysm of his carotid artery against the brain. The protocol was to send such cases to the vascular neurosurgeon who saw him the same day. He agreed on the diagnosis and ordered an angiogram to better show the aneurysm. Both the angiogram and surgery were set for the next morning. This was about 1987, and there was no way of fixing the aneurysm without open neurosurgery. We were lucky as Dr. T was world famous for his technical ability and he was kind to allow me to come as his assistant. The skull was opened by the resident by drilling 4 holes that were then connected with an electric saw that had a ridge to protect the soft brain beneath. The large skull flap was removed and the underlying dura, tough skin around the brain, cut and flapped back, exposing the brain. For the next hour, the chief resident pushed and manipulated the brain to one side and then a ridge of bone had to be drilled down for better exposure. Then we had a clear view, the juncture of the carotid and ophthalmic arteries with a big bulging arterial aneurysm coming straight up at us. Before touching this, Dr. T placed 2 cords around the carotids on both sides, just in case, he explained. Then a silver aneurysm clip was slipped in behind the aneurysm and slowly released, allowing the two prongs to cinch closed over the neck of the aneurysm. Only, I didn't get to see the last part. Suddenly, the entire brain pan filled with blood. I was suctioning but couldn't keep up with the outpouring of blood. The resident ripped his suction tip off and I followed suit, so we went with these hoses into the bloody opening, but we couldn't make any headway or even see the brain. Dr. T couldn't see a thing and blood was spilling up and over the edges of the skull. A nurse started to read the falling blood pressures: 110, 65, 90, 50, 70, 40, 55, nil. Then the anesthesiologist said, "We've lost him." Blood pressure crashed to unmeasurable. The nurse was squeezing bags of blood into him but couldn't keep up with what was pouring out. Now, if this happens in the abdomen, you can press the bleeder or place clamps, but in the brain, you don't have those options. But cool as a cucumber, Dr. T stuck his hands below the surface of the blood and began feeling about. He tied off the carotids proximal to the bleed. Then suddenly our suction worked and the blood pressure came up from 0. Dr. T examined the area and laughed. There was a second aneurysm hiding behind the first one, he exclaimed. A second silver clip was placed, then the carotid ligatures were removed. I turned to the anesthesiologist and said, "Were you scared?" "No," he said, "just sad." He was dead, and I saw no hope that we could get him back. Such a young man. 2 hours later, I related the story to the patient's wife. On follow-up, the patient did great. He even got his vision back. I have never seen such cold-blooded, rapid action under fire. Dr. T didn't even take a second to swear. Afterwards, in the doctor's lounge, he smiled and said, "It's more fun when it goes like that."
I teamed up with my brother's ex to get revenge on him. This one is a long story but a good one, so get the popcorn ready. This drama is a few years old at this point. It happened during one of my lowest points in my life. Now that I'm finally healing, I wanted to share the small bit of revenge that I'm still so incredibly proud of. For context, I need to give a bit of backstory. TLDR of this section is, my brother is a violent, manipulative, piece of poop to everybody in his life. I, 24, lived with my brother, 25, for a little over a year during 2020 to 2021. I'd always been very close to him, since we were so close in age. For a long time I deluded myself into thinking his SHT actions were acceptable. I mean, all older siblings hit their kids' siblings, right? About 6 months into us living together, he started bringing his new girlfriend around, and about another 4 months later we all moved into a new apartment together. I got along great with his girlfriend. We had pretty similar personalities, so banter came easily. I still talk to her regularly even. Back to the point, my brother was never a good boyfriend. He burned through women all the time, but of course all of them are the crazy ones, right? You'd think that would be different if he was willing to sign a lease with this girl, but far from it. They fought all the time, to the point that I would just leave the apartment to go on a walk with my dog for a few hours anytime I could feel the tension about to boil over. There was even an incident where he tried to run her over with his car. Eventually, they broke up, and he forced her out of the apartment somehow despite her being on the lease. This was fine, I guess. Bummer that almost lost a friend since he threw a tantrum anytime she showed up to get some of her things, or even just to visit. It wasn't much longer until we got new neighbors, 2 18-year-old G Earls and a couple of guys around 21. My brother made fast friends with them. Only problem, these 4 were homophobic, transphobic, racist, and Trumpers. For context, I'm pan, and I don't make that a secret. For almost the entire time we lived together I had a dumb joke painting of a TikTok quote I made hanging in the living room. One day I noticed it was suddenly sitting on my desk when I got home from work. Whatever, maybe the command strip wore out, so I hung it back in its place. The next day I got home and lo and behold, the painting is back on my desk. I walked out to the living room to find him and our new neighbors, drinking and engaging in unsavory conversation. I asked him, "What's up with the painting?" Instead, or my brother answering, I heard from one of the girls something along the lines of, "Some people don't want to have that gay poop shoved in their face." Immediately I asked her to leave, because I won't go back in the closet, not for anyone. She refused, so I got a little mad, might have called her beach. If I didn't, I should have. After the third time asking her to leave, my brother started claiming that he just doesn't like the painting. That he's never had a problem with for a year and a half. Things rapidly escalated. Without getting into too much detail so I don't bum people out before the good part of the story, he one assaulted me. By the end of the next hour, I had a broken nose, and 2 massive breaks in my eye socket. He got a small bruise on the back of the head from a flimsy curtain rod I attempted to defend myself with. The cops were called, of course, and somehow, despite the obvious physical indicators of who's the bad guy, I was the one who ended up in jail that night because I used a weapon, the flimsy curtain rod. My mom picked me up in the morning and took some of my things and my dog from the apartment. I've been living with her since. Okay, here comes the part about the revenge. I was using my mom's phone for something about a week later, and saw a text from my brother about his plans to throw a party in his apartment for his birthday. I was enraged. How dare he act like he didn't just lose the one person who stuck by him despite his aberrant actions for years. So I devised a simple, but effective plan. I called up his ex, who was still living in the same city, and asked her to swing by the apartment complex to see if he was doing what I suspected, serving alcohol to minors. Remember that 2 of the neighbors were under 21. She was more than happy to oblige after his abuse, manipulation, and grapes. The night came and we kept in contact, and she confirmed that a F-ton of people were there, including the 2 underage girls. So we enacted phase 2. She called the police. I had to mostly stay out of it due to the protection order the city put against me while my case was being settled. Normally I detest calling the police on a party, but god damn it I was angry, still am. By the end of the night, he was facing charges for serving. I think, 5 underage people, he was facing a fine he couldn't afford to pay, and eviction due to the multiple incidents involving police. Sorry for the long story, but maybe you found some enjoyment. Personally, I don't think I went far enough. I'm still no contact with my brother, and am still battling PTSD from the night. Hopefully this act of catharsis helps me heal some more.
Night owls, what's the creepiest thing you heard at night? I was sleeping in my parents' room because they were on vacation and my dog only sleeps in their bed, first floor I might add. From a distance I could hear screaming, didn't think much of it. We have kids in the neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods. 10 minutes later the screams are louder and closer, still didn't think much of it. Another 10 minutes and the screaming is louder and closer. My dog is now alert and huffing and growling. My heart is beating but I still play it off knowing I have locked all the doors. My dog will go into fight mode and I have a gun in the cabinet. No joke, 10 minutes later the screaming is right outside my window, that's right where my head is, and it's louder than anything. My dog is absolutely flipping out like I've never seen him before. I'm a pretty intimating guy and I'm having a panic attack and probably crying. I'm under the blanket hurled up in a ball, too scared to do anything. My dog won't stop barking, so I grew a pair and looked in the window. I saw no one. Minutes later 5 police cars go into my neighborhood looking for an escaped psych patient. The scariest part is she had a knife and was hiding under my front porch steps.
What's the horniest thing you ever did? When my wife and I were dating, she's 16, me 17. I snuck over to her house late at night. Her mom had a red car that was really sun-faded. So this night I knocked on her window. Helped her crawl outside and started making out on the side of her house. She showed me that she shaved. It was my first time seeing her like that and I went to town. We were trying to figure out how to do this standing up and decided to lay her face down on the hood of her mom's car. All is done and she goes back to her room. I come over the next day to help her job hunt and she shows me her mom's car in the daylight. Not sure if you know, but heavily oxidized paint on cars really like to absorb the oils from your skin. You can see the silhouette of a girl on the hood of the car. You can make out handprints, a cheek, her boobs, even her belly button. Her mom didn't notice until she was in town and after driving her car to church. My girlfriend, wife, convinced her that someone was playing a prank on her. I saved the day by washing and hand waxing/washing her car. Fast forward a few weeks and I decided to pay my girlfriend another late night visit. This time it was in the back seat of my Camry, because I had learned my lesson, I guess. She went back inside and went to bed. I started my car. Mind you, this car was flawless and had no mechanical problems ever. I wouldn't hesitate to drive it from California to Florida. When I started it, the solenoid decided to stick and caused my starter to stay in the starting position. Not sure if anyone has heard this before, but it's like sticking a screwdriver in a metal fan blade. Noisy AF. Her mom came running outside, neighbors turning on porch lights and dogs going crazy in the neighborhood. That was fun trying to explain why I was there.
I blew up at my childless sister. My older sister was just diagnosed with PCOS/stage 3 endometriosis and was told that due to a combination of these conditions and her age, she is 39, she will never have even the slightest prayer of having children of her own. Now, a little context here, my sister has always wanted kids her whole entire life more than anything. She has wanted nothing more than a loving family, but sadly she has never had a healthy relationship. Only men who cheat or have stage 5 Peter Pan syndrome. Anywho, we got invited to our cousin's baby shower a few months back and I couldn't attend all of it for reasons I will not delve into on here. I suggested her not to attend the shower as I thought it would be too painful for her. However, our pregnant cousin is also the daughter of her godmother and her favorite cousin, her words, not mine. So I told her all right, but to call me to come get her if it was getting too tough. Well, fast forward a half an hour after I dropped her off at the shower, I hear uncontrollable wailing in the background as I was on the phone with our aunt, preggo cousin's mother. She asked me to come and attend to my sister, so I returned. I come back and I see my pregnant cousin sulking in the corner playing games on her phone on a couch, and I see my sister still tear-faced but all smiles now as the other ladies were handing her cookies and cakes and talking and cheering her up, all gathered around her in the living room. One even ran out and got a card just for her and no gift for our cousin. I stayed with her until the shower was over and later she got drunk on wine and started dancing poorly and well had a grand old time. Meanwhile, our cousin was never seen again the rest of the afternoon. I'm not sure exactly when she disappeared, but she was gone for several hours. When the party started breaking up, I overheard my sister hugging people and saying thanks for coming. I had a great time, what? So I drove her home and was deadpan. Silent until she asked me, hey, you seem upset. I pulled over and parked and just started screaming my lungs out. I called her a selfish, entitled brat who doesn't give a shit about anyone but herself. She started to cry, to which I responded, stop the tears. I hope you never have children or find a man, because quite frankly you deserve to be alone forever. I mean, really. I was furious by how she behaved at the baby shower, and also, to add insult to injury, my cousin and her hubby had been trying for 7 years. 7 years to have a child. Am I the a-hole for chewing my sister out for what she did, or is anyone on her side in this? Edit 1. I must say that I definitely feel awful for not having spoken up and taken more action at the party. And while it in no way excuses this, I must explain that there were several people in attendance that I knew. These weren't just strangers I'd never see again. I felt embarrassed and I more or less shut down and tried to float by. Then in the car, I was able to confront my sister one-on-one.
I ran away from home and met an amazing girl on a train who changed my life forever. 14 years later I'm reuniting with her. When I was 15 years old, I ran away from home because I was pissed off at my parents for grounding me. I didn't have a lot of money, so I decided to hop onto a train and ride it as far as it would go. I reached the end of the line in less than an hour, and decided I wanted to ride it all the way back again, while trying to formulate some kind of plan of how I wanted to live the rest of my life without my parents or anyone. At the last stop, a girl came on and sat in the row right behind me. I didn't pay much attention to her at first, as I was busy writing my life plan on a napkin. It was a few minutes later that she got up and sat next to me, curious as to what I was writing. I told her the story, and after a few laughs, we began talking about everything and anything. Her name was Amanda and she was absolutely wonderful. She told me she was getting off at the last stop. It was also the stop I had gotten on originally, and I told her we would ride to it together. When the last stop did come, we both knew we probably wouldn't see each other ever again. This was before the days of cell phones, and I was a shy little kid afraid to make moves. As we got to the end of the sidewalk which split in two different directions, she went right and I went left. Before saying goodbye she turned to me and asked me a question that has become a wonderful part of my life. She asked me, "Tell me something you have done, or want to do, that you think I should do. It can be anything, as challenging as you want it to be, or as easy. As long as you give me the rest of my life to complete it, I promise I will do it." I was confused as to why, but I thought about it, and told her, "Sing a song a cappella in a room full of strangers." She said perfect and asked me if I would like a challenge as well. I told her I did, and she told me, "Read, from start to finish. Ulysses by James Joyce." I had never heard of it at the time, but I agreed, and we said our goodbyes. I have an awful memory, and can't remember most conversations I have with most people. But I remember all of that clearly because of the challenge she gave me. In the 12 years that have passed since, I have tried to read that book in over 150 different sittings. Every time I open my copy of the 780-page monster of a book, I always think of her, and I always think of that day. I've never been sure if it was her intent or not, but she left her lasting memory on me with that challenge. Soon, I learned what she did was a completely wonderful and amazing thing for me. So I decided to keep it going. I've met a lot of strangers in my life, some that have become friends, and some, due to living in different time zones and whatnot, didn't. I don't want to just have experiences and then let them go. I want to remember these meetings, and embrace the fact that they happened. So whenever I leave someone who has left an amazing impact on my life, I always make sure to add them to my Ulysses bucket list. I ask them to give me a challenge, as difficult or as easy as they want it to be, and regardless of the fact that they have done it or not, simply something their heart has wanted to do. Some have been easy and fun. I met a man in India 9 years ago who told me to, for a week or a month, cook/buy twice as much food as I intend on eating, and give the other half to a stranger in need. I completed that mission 8 years ago, and thought about that man and the time we had all the way through. I met a girl on a cruise 6 years ago, who told me to jump into a body of water on a slightly cold day, without touching or feeling the temperature of the water first. I did that the very same year. I met a couple at an outdoor music festival a few years ago that told me to wear the most bizarre outfit imaginable and walk through a public place, completely oblivious to the fact that you aren't looking normal. I did that task the very next day, at the same festival. Some have been difficult, to say the least. 3 guys I met in Amsterdam and smoked all night with, told me to go to a mall and give 10 strangers 10 presents. That one took a lot of courage, but I did it a year or so after I met them. It was nerve-wracking, but at the same time exhilarating leaving my comfort zone. A girl I met on a plane told me to skydive. I'm still in the process of getting that done. There are many others that each brought joy to my life. There are still many tasks I have yet to accomplish, and every time I think of these tasks, I think of the people that gave them to me. It amazes me how well I remember all these people, while I can't remember so many aspects of even yesterday. These experiences, not only do I take from them a mission or a challenge, I also take from them a memory of them that never fails to appear inside of my mind. I opened my Ulysses book for probably the 300th time yesterday, and read a few pages. I'm in the final 30 pages of the book, also known as the most dreaded of the read. In the last 40 pages or so, James Joyce doesn't use a single punctuation mark, no periods, no commas, no nothing, a straight 50-page run-on sentence. I never saw Amanda after that day, nor do I know if she ever did get a chance to sing a song to a room full of strangers. But what I do know is that she gave me a gift that has never once stopped giving. So wherever you may be, thank you for giving me the Ulysses bucket list, and I swear I'll finish it one day. Never did I think there was the slightest chance I would actually get to talk to her again, but that's exactly what happened. Last night, I found out that the Amanda that guy who ate knew, was in fact the Amanda I met 14 years ago. I sent her an email reminding her of our meeting years ago, and she replied to it. We've been talking a lot and we're going to meet again very soon. My roommate is obsessed with and trying to become our friend's fiancé. This primarily involves me, Solbury, 29, my roommate Cassie, 26, the girl she's stalking, Maëlle, 28, and Simon, 31, Maëlle's fiancé. We live in a city of almost 2 million, but somehow, everyone in this nerd circle knows, or at least knows of, everyone else. I moved to this city for college and ended up staying, as a lot of people often do. I was living alone until I met Cassie through a mutual friend about 3 years ago. I come from a very stable home life. I have a very close relationship with my mother and stepfather, and I have twin younger brothers that I talk to daily. Cassie, on the other hand, was raised by her aunt and uncle and was on and off medicine, I don't know what for a lot of her middle school years. She has no siblings and avoids calls from her aunt, only talking to her maybe once a week. She has her quirks, but I thought she was a well-adjusted member of society. Cassie and I were at a convention roughly a year ago when we met Simon and Mael. They had just moved to the area and Simon, Cassie and I hit it off. We found out that we all had quite a few mutual friends and our friendship was solidified when we all saw each other at a party a week later. Mael was really quiet and reserved the first couple times we all hung out, but eventually we were all getting on really well. Simon and Mael are somewhat of a power couple, if that's the correct word. They are both attractive, they have good careers, but they also have a very visible and active presence in these subculture communities and a myriad of hobbies both within and outside of the community. They have a lot of friends surrounding them, and their condo is often the center of operations for weekends out or parties. Mael is very no-nonsense take-charge kind, and Simon is very goofy, open, and welcoming. They're both very social, basically. After we met them, Simon and Mael got engaged. It was a long time coming apparently, and everyone was thrilled. While I knew that Cassie had a crush on Simon, not surprising, he's very good looking and charismatic, I thought that it was something very innocent, as she's had crushes on people in our friends' circle before. But sometime after they were engaged, I can't remember specifics, I wasn't writing anything down at this point, she said she was going to flake on plans to hang out at their house and play board games. When I asked why, she said Mael and Simon had been fighting a lot recently, and it made her uncomfortable. I was genuinely surprised, as I wasn't aware of her being over there without me, and every time we were there everything had seemed normal. Cassie insisted that they'd been fighting, giving each other the silent treatment, and kind of joked that I was normally so observant but hadn't noticed this. She then said she wasn't surprised, that Mael was a cold-hearted person and Simon honestly deserved better. This seemed like a pretty intense escalation to me, as she'd never had a problem with them before and got along with both Simon and Mael, so I suggested that she skip hanging out and take some time to draw things out. She apparently did this a lot in therapy, and making these flowchart things seems to help her with graduate school anxiety, worries, and difficult decisions. She instead asked if I was still going, and when I said yes, immediately said she'd go. I didn't want to discourage her, but I said that if she felt uncomfortable, she should tell me and we'd leave. We went, and she would laugh and joke with Simon, but when Mael spoke to her or asked her questions, food or drink choices, for example, she got very visibly uncomfortable and would kind of shut down or pretend not to hear her. Simon would glance between me and her a couple of times, but no one said anything, even Mael. I hadn't seen Cassie act like this in a long time, and resolved to talk to her about it when I got home. Well, that never happened, as we ended up staying the night and then going out to brunch the next day, where Cassie seemed perfectly fine with Mael. I thought it had blown over, and Cassie didn't say much about her from then on, so nothing sticks out in my head until Cassie announced a couple weeks later that she had a boyfriend, Chad. Cassie has always been bisexual but she's casually dated women exclusively since I met her, so this was a new development. I asked if she'd end up bringing him around, if she wanted to switch beds. Her aunt ended up giving us mattresses a couple years ago, and I'd taken the bigger one at Cassie's insistence. At first she said yes, and then changed her mind, saying that he lived alone and it was easier to go over to his house. Despite this, she never spent the night there, although she'd vanished to his house for hours on end. After she got her boyfriend, that I never met, almost 2 months later, is when shit really started getting weird. Cassie started getting oddly obsessed with things she'd never cared about before, like skincare and hair care. Her face started breaking out like crazy, and it really seemed to frustrate her. She was getting packages almost every other day, from Amazon or other places. I found a pamphlet on our side door table for laser eye surgery. She has glasses. She got a brand new phone, out of the blue, and started going to her school's gym and starving herself, and then binging the next day, and constantly told me that she was starting to lose weight. She was looking so good, her boobs were getting smaller. When I was folding our laundry one day, I found a shirt that was not mine and would not fit her. When I asked her about it, she quickly snatched it away, saying that she bought it for when she would be fit enough to wear it. We'd always watched TV shows together before, but she was spending an abnormal amount of time on her phone now. She mentioned setting her phone to French because she wanted to learn another language, and I told her to talk to Mael or another friend Stephanie, both are trilingual. She said she'd never ask Mael for help, and asked me not to talk about Mael around her. When I asked why, she said it seemed like Mael was mean to her, and Mael's behavior gave her anxiety. At this point, I started writing things down, as warning flags were going off but I had no idea why, what they meant, or how to handle it. Which brings us to yesterday, when I got a text from Simon after I came back from work and Cassie had left me a text saying that she was at her boyfriend's, word for word off of my phone. Simon: hey, are we hanging tonight? Me: I had no plans to. Why? Simon: just saw Cassie leaving our development, wondered if we forgot about plans we'd made. Mael is working overtime tonight so I'm sorry if there was a miscommunication. Me: there wasn't, I had no plans to hang out and neither did Cassie. Simon: okay, nice, just making sure. See you Sunday. I thought about texting Cassie at this point, but decided against it. She came home that night with her hair dyed dark brown. I mentioned that Simon had texted me about seeing her leave the development, and she denied being there. I showed her the message, and she read it, before handing it back to me and saying that she didn't think there would be any board games on Sunday. When I asked why, she told me that Mael and Simon were considering calling off their engagement, because Simon wasn't happy with Mael anymore. When I asked her what made her think that, she got defensive. She said that Simon talked to her more than I realized, that they had a real connection, and that she was privy to all kinds of terrifying things about Mael that Simon had told her. She pulled out her phone and said that I should believe her, but if I didn't, she'd show me proof. For some reason, seeing her phone was the turning point for me, and it hit me all at once. Mael had dark brown hair. Mael had the exact same phone that Cassie suddenly got, and set it to one of Mael's primary languages that she speaks. Mael didn't wear glasses, but Mael did have Ray-Bans in the exact style that Cassie suddenly bought, pointlessly, because Cassie did not wear contacts. I'd never met Chad, but all of her descriptions of him sounded suspiciously like Simon: tall, tan, black wavy hair, really dark brown eyes. I asked to see her phone, and she basically flipped out, saying that I should trust her on principle, and that we're best friends. I wanted to ask her about everything I'd noticed, but I had no idea how to bring it up, so I sort of choked on my words. Cassie used the opportunity to yell at me again for not trusting her, started crying and said that she was going over to Chad's, slamming the door on her way out. After a couple minutes of just sort of standing there trying to process things, I started snooping. I know I shouldn't have, but that's water under the proverbial bridge at this point. I started in her bathroom, where I was faced with an unfamiliar array of French skincare products and really expensive shampoos and conditioners. The first drawer had all of her old stuff in it, Suave, drugstore skincare stuff, etc., and the second drawer had more of her old stuff with a paper list in it. I opened it and found a bunch of odd things written down, divided by lines. I realized after a moment that they were brands: Avan, Fido, Madewell, that sort of thing, divided by types, skincare, clothes, etc. Also written were seemingly random words like yoga, bangles and peacocks. Cassie worked part-time and did not have a lot of money to spare, so I was wondering where she got the money for this brand new range, and wondering if that's why her skin was so bad now. I opened the third drawer, and sort of just got a horrible sinking feeling. The third drawer had a bunch of things of Mael's in it. Lipsticks, hair accessories, a fucking pouch with her name embroidered on it that I didn't open, and a bunch of other stuff I didn't take stock of. After seeing this, I immediately texted Simon with, "Hey, is Mael missing anything from her bathroom?" Simon immediately called me. Yes, Mael had been missing things for a while now. I explained what I'd found, and Simon was just as confused and lost as I was. It ended with him asking me to just remove those things from her bathroom and put them in a bag, and to meet the next day to pick them up so I could explain to Mael. He said that I was still welcome in their house, but Cassie wasn't welcome anymore. He then said he'd call and tell her this and hung up. I gathered up all of Mael's things and moved them safely to my room, and when I came back out into the living room, I had 5 rambling texts from Cassie. In them, she blamed me for ruining her chances with Simon. She accused me of destroying our friendship by going through her things, saying she'd never forgive me, and that Mael was a bitch who was lying and trying to frame her to keep her and Simon apart. I immediately called Cassie, and it rang once before it went straight to voicemail. At this point, no holds were barred. Her laptop was on the arm of the couch, and I opened it. At first, I was going to go on her Facebook, but everything was right on the desktop in a folder labeled NNNN. Pictures of Simon from Instagram and Facebook, what little pictures Mael had posted on social media and screenshots of her Twitter updates, pictures of their house, the bathroom, the inside of Mael's dresser drawers, pictures peering through the windows of both of their cars, a picture of Mael's engagement ring. I immediately zipped the contents of the folder and emailed them to myself from Cassie's email account. I tried calling her again, and was shuttled to voicemail. I considered going into her room, but thought that might have also been crossing a line, so I just went into my room to take stock of what Cassie had stolen from Mael. She'd taken jewelry, a lot of stuff from the French pharmacies, tampons, calling cards, ointments, a lot of lipsticks, some skincare, mostly sunscreen, hair accessories, some things definitely from her bedroom, a pair of small pink socks for example. So I'm just at a loss. I'm convinced there's no boyfriend of Cassie's, but I have no idea where she's been when she says she's at his house. I'm convinced that something is very wrong with Cassie for her to be so weirdly obsessed with Mael, but I have no idea what. Mael woke up with the flu this morning, so we are not meeting tonight, and Cassie hasn't been home since she left yesterday. I tried calling her twice today. Simon texted me briefly earlier in the day, but aside from that, I haven't spoken to anyone else about this.
My husband's girl best friend is pregnant and she says it's his. So I met my husband, 25 male, while I was 22 and we hit it off instantly. He was the man of my dreams. He took me on date nights and made sure I was loved and gave me big gifts every so often, telling me I was the only one for him. I believe this since we have been together for 4 years now and I've never had any issues, until he introduced his best friend who we will call Laura for privacy reasons. I remember we had an argument because he didn't tell me about her for our whole relationship, and he had been sneaking to see her and hang out with her at parties when I was sleeping, believing that he was working overtime. I was hurt by this and my first thought immediately went to infidelity, but I found all of their texts to be platonic after he willingly told me to look. I thought she was nice at first since when I first met her she spoke to me politely and said how lucky I was for about a week, until there was a get-together and my husband invited me along, because it was her mother's anniversary and her family loved my husband, as they had known each other since they were kids. I was okay with this and quite excited since I wanted to make more female friends and have girls' nights out to relieve my work stress, since my job is difficult and I make 6 figures. I should also mention my husband works in an office job that doesn't pay a lot, so I handle all of the house bills and chores while he is trying to get another job. I walked into the house with my husband and she ran to him happy and immediately wrapped her whole body around his arm and dragged him off to the garden. He didn't even come to get me or anything after being dragged away, so I went to the kitchen to ask for a drink where I was greeted by Laura's mother. She is a lovely person. We generally had a nice talk about our own lives and she made sure I felt welcome. The whole gathering was mainly nothing special till it got to the dinner. I sat down next to my husband and Laura walked up to me and asked me to move. I asked why since the only other spot available was next to her uncle and mother, and since it was about her mother, Wouldn't she want to sit next to her? Laura replied to the question with, because I want to sit next to him. I turned to my husband who just nodded and told me to move as well, saying that I was being childish and making a scene. At this point I generally felt my blood boiling. I stood up and told my husband that I felt uncomfortable and that I needed to go to the bathroom and asked where it was. Laura told me and I left the table doing breathing exercises trying to calm down. I ended up messaging my brother from the bathroom and he said I was being jealous and that I was overreacting, so I agreed and went back to the table to sit next to Laura's mother. The whole time they were laughing and it seemed that everything he said was funny to her, and she kept rubbing his back, touching his arms, and saying how strong he had gotten, and she would look at me smugly. The breaking point to all of this was when I put a bit of meat onto my plate and she said, "Are you really going to eat all of that?" And I froze in embarrassment while my husband and her laughed. Her mother stood up for me saying that was inappropriate and to treat guests with respect, but she ignored it. Laura is very pretty and slim and works out, so coming from her it hurt a lot. I stood up from my chair and walked out the front door and called my dad. I told him to pick me up and that I'll explain why in the car. When I got in the car I broke down and told him everything. He said I was most likely overreacting, but the situation was very odd, and that I'm welcome to stay with him for the time being. I thanked him and went back to our house. While I was getting comfortable my phone flooded up with messages from my husband and Laura. I read the messages and to my horror my husband was saying I ruined the whole dinner and that he was going to stay there for the night. I then read what Laura said, saying I had ruined her night because of my pick-me behavior. After doing research on that word, it's only filled me up with more anger. My husband came home around 5 p.m. from Laura's and I immediately said, leaving me and staying at another woman's house was disgusting, and he started shouting that I'm overreacting again and that I need to go to counseling for my jealousy issues. For about a month everything was going okay again, apart from that my husband getting more distant and cold, and I could feel that our argument wedged a gap in our marriage, until I got a message from Laura this morning with a positive pregnancy result, and a threat saying we should get divorced because it's my husband's. I don't know what to do and I'm just venting because I feel awful, and I feel like I failed as a wife. I don't know if I should confront my husband, but I'm thinking about it. After I saw my abusive ex-boyfriend was attending my friend's wedding, I bailed and I feel awful for not telling anyone. I received the online save the date and of course replied yes. Then I was scrolling through the guest book and saw my ex's name. When I saw his enthusiastic reply of yes, my heart figuratively stopped. I felt cold inside, and I started hyperventilating. For a little background, this man abused me for months, isolated me from my friends and family, used me for money and lovemaking, and then cheated on me. He made me feel crazy for confronting him about his substance use, about the girls hanging around him. I eventually stopped asking him because I wanted to keep him happy. When he moved away for a few months and we were long distance, he had friends that would report back to him if I went out with friends. He would confront me on our Skype chats about me being out with guy friends unchaperoned, and would forbid me to go out without a chaperone. I eventually caved and didn't go out with any of my friends unless they were the girls he knew or had just stayed home. I lost contact with many friends and my family. But then, we were engaged and something broke in me when I realized I would have to give up everything to be with him, and I envisioned myself either dead or wanting to be dead when I saw our future together. When I finally broke it off for good with him, he had previously installed a key logger into my phone and computer and was able to see everything I sent and did. He threatened to unalive himself if I didn't talk to him, so I said, "Go right ahead," and notified his mom he was making threats against his life. I told her that if he contacted me again, I was going to the cops. She said she would take care of it. A few nights later, I went to a late movie by myself and got a call saying he was right outside my apartment. He saw my light on and just wanted to talk. I was not there at the time. He had a history of stalking and previous allegations of abusing his ex-girlfriends. The next day, I started the proceedings to get a restraining order out on him. Fun fact, they are really hard to get. The order of protection was granted for 1 year and I have moved on. I got a new laptop, phone, and changed my address. He was blocked on Facebook and I deleted all of our mutual Facebook friends so they couldn't report back to him on me. So back to now. Seeing him RSVP to a mutual friend's wedding threw me off kilter. My current boyfriend was unable to attend with me due to work, so I didn't want to go alone. I meant to email the groom and explain how I didn't want my drama to overshadow his wedding, and that he may not have been aware of the crazy ex-drama that happened a couple of years ago, but I saved it as a draft and never dealt with it. I pushed it back to my mind and was focusing on work and school. But I got the email reminding me about the wedding, didn't know what to do, and did not show up. I sent the newly married couple an Amazon package from their wedding registry with my apologies and offers to take them out to dinner after their honeymoon, but I don't know how to ask him now. How do I bring this up to the groom? How do I explain why I didn't reply and why I didn't show up? Do I go into detail about the horrible things my ex did? Do I show them a copy of the restraining order? Do I just continue to ignore and later message the groom to just take them out for dinner? Update: so I took the advice of some to call my friend rather than an impersonal email or Facebook message and left a nice voicemail offering to take him and his wife to dinner and apologizing for missing their wedding. He called back and squeezed me in their packed schedule before they leave for their honeymoon. I saw them last night for dinner. I gave them hugs and apologized again for missing their wedding. The groom said he vaguely remembered the bad breakup and the restraining order, but said he thought enough time had passed because the order of protection had expired. He also said they sent out the invites and saved the dates in waves, and the ex and I were in different waves. He said he thought we could put aside our issues for one day for his special day. He said he had invited family members that didn't get along with one another with the expectations that everyone could put aside their issues for his wedding. I told him I didn't want to see the ex ever again, especially being alone at the wedding, and wasn't comfortable at all attending. My friend acknowledged this, and then we had a good dinner and caught up since our college days. They confirmed they had received my many gifts the day after their wedding. Then they said the ex had RSVP'd and volunteered to be the sound guy, MC and sound system, but did not show up. My friend had to man the sound system on his own wedding day. The groom and bride said they would have rather me show up than the ex. We have plans for me to see their house when they return from their honeymoon and hang out more frequently. They have an incredible collection of board games. It was a great dinner. Thank you again to everyone for the advice.
My wife absolutely cooked my affair partner. And it haunts me every day. My wife and I were high school sweethearts. We are both 40 and have been together for 25 years. We have 2 children together, 5 and 6. For the past 5 years I have thought that we are together because we basically grew up together. I met my now girlfriend, 28. I know I'm 12 years older, but I met her at work. She is beautiful and attractive, and I thought she was this new change I wanted. Instead of breaking it off with my ex and doing the right thing, I cheated and I got caught. My wife was so gracious about it. She didn't want us to be together anymore. This was a year ago and I left our house and rented an apartment. We have yet to start the divorce process, although I don't want to. Neither of us was talking about it. My girlfriend, however, is not so happy about this. Mainly because I left our big house that's originally my house to my wife and daughters. I inherited the property from my grandparents and it is worth a fortune right now. My girlfriend means that it is my family home. And for me, yes, it is. My family is living there. But my girlfriend meant that when we get divorced, my wife has no claim to the house. 3 weeks ago, my girlfriend and I were dropping our daughters off with her mother, and my girlfriend went against my wishes and started talking to my wife about the house. My wife was confused and said that the house is hers and her daughter's, and she looked at me all confused. But my girlfriend told her that it was mine and it was time to move on. My wife then said that my girlfriend shouldn't put her nose in other people's business. My girlfriend became angry and said that my wife is a hag who is bitter because she's old. My wife smiled and said, "Is your age your only redeeming quality? Because that won't last." Then she said that she would rather be 80 years old herself than 20 years old. My girlfriend. She wasn't angry or bitter. She isn't old either. She is 40 like me. Am I so old? According to my girlfriend, she's very beautiful too. I don't know what my girlfriend was thinking. I felt so ashamed and angry with myself. My girlfriend was immature and embarrassing. I've been unhappy for months now. But if I broke it off, it means that I have hurt my family for nothing. My wife called me the next day and said that maybe we should start talking about divorce. I broke down crying the moment we ended the call. Now every time I see her I want to be in her arms and cry. Just thinking about 80-year-old her with 80-year-old me beside her. The way we envisioned ourselves every time we saw an elderly couple holding hands or kissing. And we thought, this will be us too. I realized I'd rather have an 80-year-old her than a 20-year-old anyone. But I have messed that up. My wife only likes 2 of our kids. My wife and I have 5 kids. For simplicity, I'll call them Adam, Brian, Carol, David, and Eric. Last week I was talking to Adam about his senior year plans and he said something that made me reevaluate everything. I said it was bittersweet to watch him grow up because I'll miss him so much when he leaves. He said, "You will, Mom won't." Very casually, like it's a known fact. I said that was ridiculous and he just said okay. So I spent a week watching my wife just quietly observing how she talks to our kids. I realized that Adam is right. She doesn't like him. She doesn't like Carol either. Adam and Carol are our 2 most social kids. They both have a lot of friends and do a lot of group activities. My wife and I have always been homebodies and we prefer to stay home and read or enjoy a nice meal rather than going out. I noticed my wife continually makes comments about Adam and Carol. Their friends and how they spend their time. Adam and Carol don't even respond, which makes me think this has been going on for a while and I just never noticed. It's even worse with David. She just ignores him and he completely ignores her. They don't talk at all. He spends all his free time in his room playing video games. I already knew he liked to spend a lot of time on his games, but he's always willing to talk to me about his games when I ask him and his mother, through radio silence. In contrast, my wife talks to Brian all day, takes great interest in everything he has to say, and praises him constantly. Eric, while only 6, is always cuddling and telling him how great he is. I don't know how I never noticed this before. I don't even know how to talk to her about this. Is there any way to raise the topic that doesn't sound like an accusation?
When did the popular kid's life fall apart in a few seconds? 3 popular kids went swimming in a quarry, only 2 came out. It sucks because the one that died was popular for all the right reasons. He was a genuinely good dude. I was the weird kid, but his locker was right next to mine and he was friendly every single day to every single person. He was an only child, and his dad had died when he was 2, was really happy-go-lucky, and he was popular because he was outgoing, supportive, warm and kind to everybody without fail, and although he was friends with the kind of kids who bullied people, he was the first person to tell them to knock that shit off if he saw it. When we were 16, his mum, who who was one of the nicest ladies I ever met in our small town, passed away in a freak accident involving a semi-trailer. He dropped out of school, he stopped talking to anybody, and he refused to let anyone visit him. I have no idea what became of him. Sorry, Jay. I hope your life got better.
My horrible father refused to let me seek help regarding my ovarian problem that made me have fertility issues. Now, he's begging to see my daughter and I refuse. My father did not believe me when I was younger and thought I was making up my pain. I have been having issues with extreme pain around my period since they started. He prevented me from getting appointments with specialist doctors because it would cost co-pays. We were not well off, but my brother got karate and swimming classes and I was told to suck it up. We were traveling for vacation when I had so much pain in my abdomen I was screaming and they wanted to turn around the plane. My father was yelling at me to be quiet and said I was making him look bad. He was telling the flight attendants I was fine and just to keep flying. I was brought to a hospital when we landed, but my dad spent the whole time complaining loudly I was ruining his vacation. It turned out to be ovarian torsion, and I needed surgery. He refused to get me real help because we went to a doctor once, and they told me it was in my head. He agreed and refused to take me again, no matter how much I was in pain. He kept telling me I was just attention seeking and then yelled at me for not getting into a good college, which I couldn't because I was too debilitated to study half the month. Fortunately, I was able to land a job that paid fairly well, and it wasn't until I got on insurance through work I started to look into what was wrong. It took a few years, but I finally got exploratory surgery, and they concluded it was endometriosis. It is a disease in which tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside the uterus. It can cause severe pain in the pelvis and make it harder to get pregnant. I was so relieved that I cried and felt so much weight off my shoulders, knowing finally what was wrong. Obviously, with endometriosis came fertility issues. My dad, in front of me, told my husband he wouldn't blame him if he divorced me, because I couldn't give him a child. I screamed at him and cried, and he made it seem like it wasn't a big deal for him to say it because everyone was expecting it. It took 3 miscarriages and 4 years to have my daughter. Now my daughter is 4, and my parents haven't met her yet and are always trying different numbers to get me to pick her up. He has now started bothering my husband. I picked up and yelled at him for ignoring my pain and telling my husband to divorce me for not getting pregnant. He defended himself by saying he didn't know how female issues work, and he didn't think I had a real issue. And his defense for what he said to my husband was that he didn't want my husband to feel bad about leaving when I kept having miscarriages. I hung up, fuming, and my mom is now calling and texting and asking that I forgive my father.
Ex-homeless Redditors, what was the scariest thing that you ever saw on the streets? Not that scary, but one time I was on a park bench just killing time. This homeless dude that everyone called Red was at another bench. He came up to mine, and asked if I would watch his shit while he slept for a bit, and I said yes. So he laid down next to me, and after a while he sat up for a cigarette. About 3 drags in, he starts coughing and his face turned all purple fast. Never realized how fast people turn purple from lack of oxygen. He fell over on his side, and I jumped up and gave him a little smack on the back a few times, and I kept yelling at him to get up. I was hesitant to call an ambulance cause of hospital bills that he obviously wouldn't be able to pay. But right as I took my phone out to call, he had been unconscious for like 30 seconds at this point. He starts gasping and gets up. I asked him if he was okay, and all he says is effing COPD and then takes a drag of the cigarette that he never even dropped the whole time that happened. Blows my mind he didn't drop it. Lamau.
Have you ever walked into your house and noticed a sound that you thought was suspicious? What happened? Not a sound but a lack of a sound. My wife, kids and I had just returned from grocery shopping. As usual, the kids rushed into the house, leaving the front door wide open and mom and dad to carry in the groceries from the car. It was then that the lack of a sound drew my attention. No dogs running around welcoming us home and barking in excitement. I called the dogs but they didn't come. I searched the downstairs rooms with an increasing feeling of dread. When I reached the lounge, there were the dogs sitting quietly watching a blank TV screen in the corner of the room. Feeling a complete fool for my panic, I sat down in my armchair and called them to me. They didn't come but remained sitting in the middle of the room staring at the TV. I was mystified at this most unusual behavior until a small voice sounded. "Please mister, can you call off the dogs?" Hiding behind the TV, which he pulled back into the corner, was a small boy of about 11 or 12. I instantly asked how he had got into my home. Quivering with fear, he pointed to a very small ventilation opening above the main picture window. How he managed to squeeze through such a narrow space was a mystery to me. I left him where he was and called the police. When they arrived, I put the dogs in the kitchen. The bobbies questioned the boy, who turned out to be the brother of a youth well known to the police. As the kid was so young, all the police planned to do was take him home and inform his parents. I never found out what happened to him. I made a great fuss of my dogs and gave them a double helping of dog food for their supper. I modified my ventilator to make it impossible for anyone to repeat an entry. Am I the a-hole for not paying for my little sister's friends? I, 25 female, and my husband, 25 male, live in Texas. We have a lot of family in Arkansas where we're both from, so we decided to travel back home for a week. Upon our arrival, it was hot, as expected. On day 2 of us being here, my husband had the idea of going to a water park. I asked my little sister, 13 female, if she wanted to go. She, of course, said yes. She then asked if she could bring a couple of friends. I asked what her definition of a couple was. She said 2 to 3. That's fine. Remember that my little sister earns her money from doing chores around the house. So, she said she would be paying for herself. I asked would her friends be paying also, and she said yes. I asked this in case I needed to pull more money out. This place is cash only. They don't have ATMs at the park, so I would have to drive 5 to 6 miles back out from the garden if I needed one. We agreed to go later that day since she needed time to tell her friends. When we finally left and headed to the park, I was driving a car full of loud teenagers with my husband. It takes about an hour from my hometown to go to where the water park is. When we finally arrived, we grabbed our bags and walked to the booth. For an adult above 12, it's $15. For children 12 and below, it's $5. Considering they were all 13, each must pay $15 to get in. My husband paid for myself and him, and my little sister paid for herself. When it was time for her friends, they looked at each other. I asked what the problem was, and they said they had no money. I wondered what they meant, and they responded that they only had a card. I asked if the money was on the card, and they said yes. One of the friends asked if I could pay for her now and get repaid later. I then asked who would pay for the others, and she responded me or my husband. This is when my little sister steps in, telling her friends that she told them it was cash only. They all proceeded to contort their faces as she was talking. I offered to drive them to the ATM a few miles away, which was the only option. One of the girls asked why I couldn't just pay for them. I asked her what she meant, and she said that I have money, I should be able to pay for them. That was a problem because I only had a card and my husband. He took out the cash we needed earlier in the day. I asked them again if they wanted to be driven to the ATM, and they all asked me why I couldn't pay. I told them that I only had a card and that the money used on me was taken out earlier. One of them went on to say that I was selfish for not thinking of the what ifs that could happen. My little sister told her she was more than welcome to stay in the hot car if she didn't accept the offer to go to the ATM. That sparked an argument between the four of them. Since we were still standing at the front desk, many incoming people could hear this happening. I grew slightly embarrassed and asked for a refund while they were going at it. The front desk lady gladly returned my money, and we walked out. I grabbed my sister by the arm, letting her know we were leaving. Her friends hurriedly followed as they didn't know what was going on. I drove everyone home, and we returned to my mother's house. When we walked into the house, she told me that my little sister's friend's mom said I blew everything out of proportion and was a major a-hole. I don't think I am. My little sister, mom, and husband are all on my side. One of the girls' mom took the situation to Facebook, saying I was selfish and an a-hole. I didn't respond to anything, but I'm thinking I should clear my name. So, am I the a-hole here?
I refused to attend my sister's wedding after she purposely excluded my children. My sister Laura is a bit high-strung. She hates messes, loud noises, anything that could happen after a bit of fun. So naturally, she's also a child hater. She's getting married in this super fancy church and I can already imagine the disinfecting she's going to be doing just to stand there and say I do. As you can already guess, she doesn't want any kids at her wedding. Her invitation was so beautiful, but right at the end, there was a big red X over children and said, if you bring any S-men demons, you'll be escorted out immediately. I happen to have 11-year-old twins and I was really offended by this. I tried to ask my other siblings about it and they were all chill about it, probably because they can't find anyone who would even be willing to have kids with them. I could respect her choice to not have children, even though I think she'll be miserable when she's old and frail, but I draw the line at hurting my kids' feelings. It felt like a personal insult because I'm the only one in our family to have kids. I called her and told her that I would no longer attend her wedding because it was clear that she disliked my children enough to not want them at her wedding. I mean, it's her literal niece and nephew and they're grown enough to behave. She did not take it well. She began to yell at me by saying that she wanted everyone to be present there and said things like we have not had any issues before, and it's ridiculous of you to pull something like this, etc. But I did not back down and said that I did not want to argue. I said, look, if you want it to be child-free, I do not want to attend. Your option is to make do with the others now. She was protesting, but in the end, she got mad enough and is not talking to me now. My parents are calling me names as well by saying that I should have attended it. The wedding's over and I did not go there. But everyone's saying that I should have respected her wishes, which made me think that I did something wrong. Am I the jerk?
What was the most disrespectful thing you've seen done at a funeral? I'm a funeral director and this was genuinely the most shocking thing I've seen. We brought a man into our care who had died of AIDS complications in 1999 or so. His parents were immigrants from Eastern Europe who were very conservative and had not known their son was gay. He had moved to Milwaukee from their little town in the sticks about 10 years earlier. Cancer was what his mom and dad were told. His friends in Milwaukee had their services that the parents didn't attend, and I worked with the parents on a massive Christian burial and interment in his hometown. The decedent's brother and sister met with the priest and asked him not to mention their brother's lifestyle during his homily, and explained why. He agreed. So the mass starts, and the normal rituals get going, and then it's time for the priest to speak at length. A traditional Catholic homily in a conservative church like that one isn't a normal eulogy. Its purpose is to bring glory to the Father, And if the deceased is spoken of at all, it is about his or her devotion to God and how that was evident from earthly actions. The priest got to a certain point in his pretty much boilerplate remarks and then took an audible breath and told everyone that he was feeling moved by the Holy Spirit to speak freely. He spoke about decisions that people make that are contrary to God's plan, and how that inevitably results in corruption, and you can probably guess the rest of it. He never actually mentioned AIDS or sexuality, but it was pretty much right there if you read even a little bit between the lines. He did not go in procession to the cemetery, rather went in his car and was waiting for us when we all pulled up. I don't think I had even turned off the engine to the hearse when the brother got out of his car, rushed to the front of the line of cars, and got in the priest's face, who then drove away without performing the burial rites. I was told later that the brother went with, "How dare you?" And the priest countered with, "I follow the Spirit." I had no choice. Honestly surprised the brother didn't lay him out.
I hired a hitman to kill my stepdaughter. To say I've been happily married for 2 years is almost a lie. I adore my husband, but there's something that effectively ruins our relationship. His daughter. I don't want to sound like I'm the stereotypical evil stepmother. I'm not. And in many ways, Bear is a very sweet girl. She's always outdoors, finding animals to play with. A cute quirk she's had since she was a child was to sing at the birds until they came to her, my husband tells me. And it seems to work. Robins flood the tree in the garden during winter, and we even have the occasional swan wander over to our house. We live, I should add, in the center of a city. There are some patches of wilderness behind our estate, where Fair spends a lot of her time. Too much, in fact. In the past year she's taken an interest in traps, snares, nets, that sort of thing. Her father even bought her a hunting knife for Christmas. The way she smiled was simply terrifying, if I'm honest. And the fact that she now brings it with her into the woods does nothing to soothe my nerves. I've tried to mention it to my spouse, but he seems determined to overlook any sign of his daughter's, well, abnormality. He is also determined to ignore the rotting smell that seems to emanate from her room, and the reports of missing cats in the local neighborhood. I don't want to rock the boat, but I'm convinced it was her. I think part of the problem is that everyone thinks she looks too innocent. Dark hair, big eyes, pale skin, she's like something out of a fairy tale. But to me, only one word echoes around my head when I look at her: nightmare. She looks like a dead thing, some sort of preserved princess from 500 years ago. No one else seems to see it, and if I'm honest, I began to fear for my sanity the past couple of years. How could any sensible adult actually be scared of a teenager? But last week I had all my subconscious suspicious confirmed. My husband has been away on a business trip. I always hate being alone in the house with Fair, but it was unavoidable. Besides, work usually meant that I always arrived home late, so it's not like we've had to eat together and play happy families or anything. I give her space, she gives me mine. It works. But any illusion of normalcy shattered last Friday. I'd forgotten some files at home, important ones, as always, and had to turn around and go back home to collect them. I thought Fair was at school, as I'd always been told that she went to school, though now I can remember that I was never actually told which school, and never saw her do homework, or get on a bus, or go on a trip, or hang out with a friend. It's like her life is the woods. It's the only place in 2 years that I've actually seen her go. I used to think she went there to seek some sort of solace. I justified her weird habits with just wanting to escape and have her own space. I should add that Fair doesn't talk at all. She can sing, I suppose, but apart from that she doesn't really communicate. I tried to take it in my stride, but the silence when it was just the two of us hurt my ears. Anyhow, I left work that day to pick up the files. It was scarcely noon, and the sun shone high in the sky. I was annoyed, getting stuck in traffic, not being able to drink the coffee that waited on my desk, the general discomforts of sitting in a car, and my bad mood seemed to hover over everything I passed on the drive home. Occupants of other cars were more aggressive, birds seemed to swirl threateningly in the sky. Clouds moved across the horizon, and I could hear a distant thunderclap as it started raining. Gray pedestrians walked at the edges of my vision, and my focus tapping on the steering wheel grew louder. I thought I was going to snap. The base of my neck buzzed. I pulled into the driveway of my home sharply, wrenching the wheel to avoid the mangy cat that darted from underneath the bushes by the porch. For a second, everything was fine. The tension eased, and I felt myself relax. I knew this house, it was mine, and it was comfortable. I was too distracted to notice that the front door had already been unlocked. In my head I was locating the files, which briefcase, which desk, which room. There were perhaps 5 seconds of standing in the hallway before my train of thought derailed. A thick, coppery tang seemed to hang in the air. Had something died in the vents? I took the 2 steps in the direction of the kitchen. From the angle I stood at I could see clearly into the space I had designed myself. Smooth marble countertops, weathered green cupboards, wide windows garnished with white blinds, covered in what looked like a heaving mass of fur. Fur and blood. My ears gradually focused, and I could hear noises, yowling, mewing, chirping, squawking, and above it all, something much worse. Chewing. Fair stood in the center of the room, face buried in the stomach of a fuzzy kitten. My brain tried to translate it as something sweet, a cuddly gesture of affection, perhaps? But as my stepdaughter raised her head, I saw blood smeared over her face, trickling down her neck onto her neat little blouse. I took 2 steps back, opened the door, quietly left the house and drove to a nearby viewpoint. I inhaled. I stepped out of the car. I exhaled. I vomited. Wiping my lips with a tissue, I dug my phone out of my purse. Work now seemed distant, and the files I considered so important equally so. I had memorized the phone number, and besides I was already respected client of theirs. In the corporate kingdom, it always helps to know a hitman. I didn't climb the corporate ladder by letting old men decide whether I was pretty enough to promote. I got to where I am through hard work and leveling the odds where they needed to be leveled. If you're going to criticize, I recommend spending a day in my heels and evaluating how generous you feel at the end of it. It's been almost a week. She should be dead by now. But as I woke up this morning to go to work, I found something lying outside my bedroom door, a human heart, with a bloody Polaroid picture lying next to it. I've come to several conclusions. My husband isn't on a business trip. My stepdaughter killed the professional I sent after her. My stepdaughter isn't human. I don't know what she is, but I've locked myself in my room. The smell of blood is steadily getting stronger, and I can hear her singing from outside my door. The more I listen, the more beautiful it sounds. I want to open the door. I want to hear more of that voice. I'm writing this while I can still think. I love her. She's so beautiful. I want to open the door. Open the door. I love her. I was constantly bullied because of my name, but my father refused to change it because he thought I should feel honored to have it. I feel he thinks I am a reincarnation of his mother. I was named after my deceased grandmother, Phyllis, whom I never got the chance to meet. She was the matriarch of my dad's side, and her death left a significant impact. I was the first child in the family born after her death. My mom says she didn't want to name me this, but my dad strong-armed her. This name has been difficult for me in several ways. My dad refused to let me go by a nickname throughout my childhood. The other kids still found ways to mock me, such as calling me Phil and telling me I had a boy's name. Then, in my teens, they'd ask me if I wanted to be filled. I know kids can find anything to tease people with, but it certainly didn't help. It was hard because I felt I had to live up to a ghost. It doesn't help I look just like her. I was constantly reminded of the legacy I had to live up to. I was told I needed to uphold the name's honor whenever I made a mistake. Remember, I have always listened to my dad's stories and learned about history, and I greatly appreciate that I was named after someone so amazing. And I tell my dad this, even though I do not like the name. In college, I decided to reinvent myself and began going by Lissa. People began to assume my name was Alyssa, and I just went with it, to the point that all my friends and colleagues called me this. My family was aware but would still call me Phyllis, which I accepted then. My dad clarified his disappointment, but I told him all that mattered was that he got to call me it. I also explained why the name was difficult to me several times, both growing up and as an adult, and he told me the meaning behind it was more significant than bullies and that I should be honored to have such a legacy. I got married last fall, and it was an issue for my dad that the officiant called me Alyssa. Alyssa was written on all the wedding decorations and invitations. When I went to hyphenate my last name with my husband's, I legally changed my name to Alyssa. I had my grandmother's middle name as well my whole life, and I kept that as it was never an issue. It's Marie for those curious. The issue for my dad is that his family has grown used to calling me Alyssa. I never asked them to, but they chose to do so. My dad has said that I was wrong to change my name and that I should feel honored. I tried to explain my reasoning, and he said it hurt him and that I didn't care enough. I got mad and said I cared enough to respect him, calling me Phyllis and never correcting him. I respected him by continuously validating his feelings and never telling him he was wrong, while he always brushed mine off. But if he wanted the truth, I wasn't born to be a reincarnation of his mother. I am my person, and it's not fair for him to put his grief on me. This upset him. My mom said I pushed it too far by saying all of that. I feel bad he's upset, but I don't know if I agree that I was wrong. Am I the a-hole?
My boyfriend is forcing me to dress like a little girl. My boyfriend, 19, and I, 19, have been together for a few months after taking a break for a year because I moved away for that year. Neither of us wanted to do long distance, and neither of us got into a relationship with anyone else. Before that, we were high school sweethearts for 2 years. Back then, he didn't care what I wore or at least didn't tell me that he found certain clothing, shirts with midriff showing, tighter dresses, or me posting vacation pictures, such as me on the beach in a bikini, uncomfortable for him. Now that we have gotten back together, he tells me it is a boundary for him that I wear more children's clothing because he doesn't want other men to see me and want me. Only he should see me for my age. According to him, older women's clothing makes women go straight to hell and is begging for another guy to touch them. He says that I should look like a little girl that has never even looked at another guy so that I could stay pure for him. If I didn't want to be an immoral woman in his eyes, I have to start dressing like a little girl. He told me that before, he just felt happy that he got to be with me because he had liked me for years and didn't feel like it was his place to tell me what to wear. He didn't want to scare me away. Now that we are back together it's different. He says that since I slept with other people before, I should at least do him a favor by remaining innocent in appearance so that no one talks badly about him. Yesterday we went through my clothes and he told me what he is okay with me wearing and what he isn't. There was one specific dress that I loved and he told me it's a no and I started crying. We almost broke up over this one dress until he asked me what I care more about, him or the dress. Obviously I told him I care more about him. It's very difficult for me because I'm very into fashion and I don't see these clothes as too revealing or hot at all. I also struggled with body image for years when I was younger and this is taking me back to the mindset of not being able to wear certain clothes because I wanted to hide my body. However, I'm very dependent on him and value his opinion a lot. I don't know what to do. I don't want to dress like a kid, I'm grown and I should be able to look like it. He's told me several times my clothing embarrassed him and that the whole world should see me as a good little Christian girl. My wife's mother has inserted herself into our intimate life. My wife and I have been romantically involved for 7 years and married for the last 5 years. My wife and her mother are very close. My wife's father passed away when she was young and it has just been the two of them for the past 20 plus years. It was actually really nice when my wife and I started dating. I inherited this amazing mother figure as I never had parents myself, and we have all become very close over the past 7 years. My mother-in-law is very kind, loving and open. However, she can be a bit weird or quirky at times. She frequently asks about our intimacy life, about when we are going to give her grandchildren, and sometimes asks me if her daughter is satisfying me in bed. My wife dismisses those questions as the typical sort of questions that Asian parents ask, but in my opinion there is more to it. There are 2 other stories that stand out to me as even more strange. One day about 4 years ago when my wife and her mother went out shopping, her mom suggested getting honker implants together. My wife laughed it off, but her mom was apparently very serious and insisted she would pay for them both. My wife turned down the offer, but then about a month later, her mother had suddenly gone through with it and now had a pair of milkers. Another strange example is how my mother-in-law took a tour trip to Thailand recently. She came back happily bragging that she went to a brothel while there. Not that she just walked by one or went inside one, but that she was a paying customer at one. My wife usually brushes off this behavior as if it was normal, but sometimes we acknowledge the absurdity and laugh at it together. However, my wife has a very difficult time saying no to her mother, as in she cannot do it. In the entire time I have known her, I have never once seen my wife stand her ground. My wife has tried saying no to her a few times, but as her mother pressures her she inevitably caves into her mother's wishes. One example is from early last year when my mother-in-law wanted us to buy a new car. Not that she wanted us to buy her a car, which I offered to do, but that my wife and I had to buy a new car. We both agreed that we did not need a new car and that it wasn't her mother's decision to make. After several days of back and forth, we ended up buying ourselves a new car. I still don't understand why that was necessary, but we have a car payment again because of it. We have even tried being the bad guy when this happens, and saying I was the one who didn't want to do something, but in every case, my wife eventually gives in and goes to her mother's side, even when she really doesn't want to do something. This topic is one of the few topics that we regularly argue about, although not very frequently. So on Friday night, the most bizarre thing yet happened. My wife and I often sync up the end of our commutes home from work, so that we can drive home together. We managed to get on the same train as usual Friday, and drove home together. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary as we drove home, but we were both surprised to see her mother's car in the driveway when we arrived home. We went inside expecting to be greeted by her mom, but everything was quiet. No one appeared to be in the house. We looked around a bit and my wife tried texting her mother to see what was up. While we waited for a response, we decided to change out of our work clothes and into what we normally wear around the house. When I entered our bedroom, I was shocked to see her mother sitting on our bed in nothing but a towel. I turned around, looking back at my wife and trying to give her mother some privacy. Her mother spoke, but not in English. My wife stopped me with her hands up in front of her while she leaned around me to look at her mother. They continued not talking in English, which is extremely rare for them to do in front of me, and I continued to look at the floor with my back to her mother. My wife looked at me, said something like it's okay and slowly directed me backwards towards the bed. When I was closer to the bed, my wife gently shoved me onto the bed. I looked away from her mother, still trying to be polite despite being very confused as to what was happening. My wife continued to reassure me with her words while her mother continued to speak to her in words I did not understand. My wife unbuttoned my shirt and they both pulled it off me. I just laid there completely frozen. My mother-in-law called my name and told me to look at her. When I did, she was no longer wearing the towel. My mother-in-law started to kiss me while my wife unclothed. My wife kept reassuring me that everything was fine and we did it, in front of her mother, who just watched us. Afterwards her mother told us to get cleaned up and that she would make dinner. Then she just walked out of the room like nothing happened. My wife was acting normal too. I tried to talk to her briefly when we were alone, but she just told me everything is okay and that we should go eat dinner. I went to bed fairly early Friday night, just to kind of be alone. My wife came to bed quite late from what I could tell. I didn't sleep much Friday night. I woke up early Saturday, Sunday, and today as I am physically uncomfortable all night and my stomach is in knots from worrying. My wife stayed in bed late both Saturday and Sunday morning, which is unusual for her. I tried talking to her this weekend, but my wife brushed off what had happened like it was normal. I'm thinking of divorcing my wife due to her drinking habits. I've only been married to my wife about a month now. It's been a great time and we've really connected, and we enjoy having a night out. She's always been a heavy drinker, which wouldn't be too much of a problem if she didn't get drunk so easily. But recently it's gotten a whole lot worse. We went out recently and she got so drunk she could hardly walk and threw up onto me. I kept telling her to stop drinking and we should leave, but she kept going and her friends egged her on. She threw up on me again. It wasn't weak stuff she was drinking. She was at a table with 2 other people and they drank a whole bottle of vodka and did 15 shots of Fireball between them two. I was at a different table with a few of my mates and we weren't drinking too much, just some cider. I didn't notice what she was doing until I looked over at a half-empty vodka bottle. I walked over and that was when she threw up the first time. She was saying some very awful things about me after puking and I'm not sure if it was just the vodka taking over or she was revealing how she felt. She started getting racial. I'm Jamaican living in the UK, and it really hurt me. I suggested we leave and she pushed me away and told me how the fun was just starting. She needed to be carried to the toilet and would sit in there for up to an hour not doing anything. I checked the toilet and she was in the same spot I had left her. I pleaded for her to leave but she went back into the garden and kept drinking. Eventually the bottle was done and there were so many shot glasses there too. I was sitting at their table now trying to stop her drinking, but my efforts were futile as she threw up on me again. She told her friends very personal details of my life that I really didn't want anyone to know. I told her we were leaving and picked her up. She wanted to stay but I didn't let her. On the walk home she kept falling into bushes and pushing me away and told people that she was scared of me. I have never done anything remotely abusive yet she wanted to tell lies to other people. All my work friends think I am abusive and have stopped talking to me. She really ruined my social life and I am contemplating divorce. I've caught her cheating once in the past but did not break up with her. This time I might.
Today I effed up by telling my new boyfriend that I was in love with him. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 9 months. He seemed like such a good man. I would have never thought he could destroy me like this. All my past relationships were pretty toxic and I always seemed to get involved with insecure men with anger issues. When I met my current boyfriend, I couldn't believe how kind and patient he was. He was so sensitive and understanding and we talked about our feelings and our past all the time and he was always open about how he felt about me. He would text me sweet messages every single morning and night, and said that he had never felt this way about anyone else and that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. My feelings grew for him every time we saw each other, and I felt so comfortable telling him anything about myself or how I was feeling. We shared so much, and I still can't believe he was able to just throw me away like I was nothing. I could have never anticipated him causing me this pain. Everything happened the other night this week. He had a work party that was taking place on this fancy boat. We had a lot to drink and he had driven us there, so by the end of the night we decided to Uber home together. We walked out of the party, and we were at the front of the boat just holding each other and staring at the beautiful view of the cityscape. The summer night was warm but we squeezed each other tight and kissed deeply. Everything just felt so perfect, so right in the moment. I stopped kissing him for a moment, and I looked into his eyes and told him that I loved him. I could just burst out in tears when I remembered this moment, and I wish I'd just forget it for the rest of my life. As soon as the word love escaped my mouth, my boyfriend's entire face dropped, and he literally pushed me off him. All he said was, "Why would you say that?" With this grossed out look on his face. I started getting nervous and stumbled over my words as I tried to explain to him how I felt. I told him I was sorry if I made him uncomfortable. He made a grumbling noise and said that it was manipulative for someone to say I love you before the other person had said it. He asked me why I was trying to make him look like an a-hole. At this point I felt like crying. I was humiliated and I said I'm sorry I said it in the first place. I shouldn't have said it. I did love him, but I didn't know what he wanted me to say in that moment. That's when he started to get really upset and even raised his voice. There were a couple of other partygoers on the boat deck near us, and they turned to look at his outburst. He started yelling at me that I shouldn't have even said it if I didn't really mean it. I just cried and kept my head down as he went on to call me crazy, weird, and a liar. He said I could take the Uber alone and to leave him alone for a while. He then stormed off, and left me there alone and crying with a bunch of strangers staring at me. It was one of the most humiliating moments of my life and I don't even know if it's worth it to reach out to him. I'll never tell another man I love them again for as long as I live.
What's the worst financial decision you've seen someone make? My ex-husband got cheated out of tens of thousands of dollars just by being an over-trusting and underthinking seller. He had always wanted a piano his entire life. One day, a friend's father had passed and left them an incredibly amazing and very old piano that she had no use for, so gifted to him. He loved it, and tuned it and fixed it up. Out of nowhere, a giant ball of tragedy struck that put us in a very bad financial situation, causing us to no longer afford where we were currently living and having to move to his family's old home, which is off the mainland and on an island. Being that the only way to get anything moved was by ship and extremely expensive, he had to sell a lot of things. And much to his dismay, the piano was just too big and too heavy to afford to ship there. So he put out a listing to sell it for a very reasonable price. It was an antique, in spectacular condition, made in the early 1900s and was worth at the very least $80,000. He listed it for a fraction of what it was worth due to time constraints on having to get rid of it before the move. Someone contacted him and offered to buy it. And then he did something monumentally stupid. The buyer offered to have a truck come and pick up the piano in a very quick time frame and asked if it would be alright to give my husband $1,000 up front and then the rest in 2 weeks when they got paid. I know he was under a lot of stress, but damn, that was dumb. You do not let anyone walk away with an incredibly valuable item without it being paid in full. As I'm sure no one here is shocked by, the person never paid anything else on the piano and just disappeared. The money from that sale alone was pretty much all we were going to have to live off of until he was able to secure a new job in the new location. Scammers are truly awful and many people need to learn not to be so trusting. It's sad. But it's just how it is. Not doing the group project? Enjoy getting a 0. I had a group project I had to do with 4 other people. 3 out of the 4 in my group were great, but Becky was a lazy and entitled bitch. There were roles each of us had to fill in the group for the project to work right. The final girl never once participated in the project, so her role was completely empty and it was dragging the rest of us down. We couldn't just fill the paper for her either. We eventually finished the project and did her part too. Every time we called her, she would say something along the lines of, "This project is stupid anyway, you guys did my part so I'll still get the grade. See you at final presentation." At the presentation, we all showed up. The other 3 and I did the best we could. The girl just did the slides, but our instructor didn't seem impressed. He had a few questions about how we came to our conclusion and who did what in the group. The other 3 were trying to keep focus on the roles they filled, but the instructor was asking about the role that Becky skipped out on. I answered that we didn't have anything from that role because she didn't come to any of the project sessions. We just did what we could without her. Once I said something, the other 3 girls confirmed that Becky's ass did 0% of the work. The professor checked the project log and confirmed too, so he said that Becky wouldn't be getting a grade. Until that point, Becky was standing there acting like she deserved any of the grades we all got. She panicked and tried to say she was just really busy, and tried to say she did some parts of the project. But another girl shut her down by saying she saw her at every party in the past couple of weeks. That girl got a 0 and the rest of us got like an 85. I've never felt so happy about a grade. Professor, fuck Becky.
I accidentally found out my coworkers don't like me. Today I tried to do a nice thing for one of my coworkers. She mentioned she had a craving, and so when I was getting my lunch, I picked up the food and drink she wanted to on a whim. I gave it to her and went to the break room to eat. I guess I got the wrong type and flavor. When I came back from my lunch, she told me to ignore the instant message she sent me. Naturally, I read it since it was the first thing that popped up when I logged in. It was some not so nice things about me that she meant to send to our other coworker. I tried to keep my composure, but I had to go to the bathroom to cry. I've always been kind of an outcast, but this was a huge blow because I thought my coworkers genuinely liked me. I feel like even at 28, no matter how hard I try to fit in and be nice, I somehow mess it up.
Am I the a-hole for telling my wife to get over our dead son? I have been married to my wife for 13 years. We had 2 children together, Sean, who would have been 19, and Marcus, who is 14. Almost 3 years ago, we allowed Sean to go on a camping trip with some friends. During this, he ended up getting injured pretty badly by jumping into water that was not meant to be messed around in. We lost him after a few days. My wife and I blamed ourselves, but my wife especially felt extremely guilty. Since this, Marcus has been in arm's reach of my wife every single day. He rarely goes out with friends and he's rarely unsupervised, which is just not good for a 14-year-old boy. Marcus finally argued back because his friends were going on a trip. He said he really wanted to go out fishing with his friends and friend's dad and didn't see a reason why he couldn't go. My wife shut it down immediately, said absolutely not, and that if he wanted to go out he'd have to wait for a day one of us was off work. After Marcus left the room, I spoke to my wife and told her maybe it wasn't such a bad idea for him to go since his friend's dad would be there. She said no, he just couldn't, and not to undermine her. I told her she needed to start letting Marcus have a life, and she needed to stop hovering over him just because she lost Sean. My wife completely blew up on me, crying, saying she could be as overprotective as she wanted. She was his mother, and I had no right to say that because I am as aware as her that the world is too dangerous. She then told me not even to mention this idea to him at all because it was a big solid no.
My husband's delusional ex-wife is requesting to have another baby with him after their son died, and my husband is willing to do it. My husband had a son from a previous relationship before we got together. I have been in my stepson's life since he was 2 years old. He turned 6 years old this year, and got along very well. My stepson's bio mom and I have never been friends in any capacity, but have always been cordial and respectful on the rare times we interacted and never had any issues with one another. My husband and she are similarly cordial and communicative around their son's needs, but not really friends beyond that. We pretty much adhered to a parallel parenting style and it worked fine. Everything was okay until 4 weeks ago. My stepson tragically and very suddenly died from an infection. It has been just absolutely devastating for everyone. His mom especially just wrecked. Her son was literally her entire life and purpose as a stay-at-home single mom. My grief cannot compare to the level I know she feels, and I do have compassion for that. My husband is also exceptionally distraught. I've been doing my best to be understanding of how they both need to grieve as parents. But nothing could have prepared me for what is about to come. 2 days ago my husband said he had something he needed to discuss with me. He explained that his ex-wife approached him with a request. She asked my husband to be her sperm donor for IVF as she desperately wants to be a mom again and wants to conceive a child with the same partner that she had her son. He made it clear it is something he is willing to do but knows he needs to understand how I feel about it. Well, I don't know how exactly to communicate what I feel about it at this point, but the feelings are not good ones. I told him I needed some time to process this. My husband and I have been trying to have a child of our own for the past few months, so this is even more personally difficult for me to take in. I think I already know that I am not okay with my husband having another child with his ex. But I am thinking of suggesting we offer her financial support to seek out alternative fertility options that do not involve my husband's sperm. Additionally, she is 41 years old, so there is a high probability this whole situation would be a lot of money and time spent without any results. Overall, I think I'm just in shock here. I feel disrespected and angry, but I also understand it's not really just about me here and that both of them are struggling to cope with this unimaginable grief. After I returned home from work last night, my husband came into our room and immediately started sobbing and apologizing. He had spoken with his dad that day and told him the proposal. My father-in-law, bless him, had apparently really gone off on the delusion of it. My husband and I had a long early morning talk about it, and he was able to recognize and explain that what seemed like interest in his ex-wife's request was misplaced desire. He explained that he's been so focused and excited about the prospect of planning for a child with me for the last 4 months and envisioning life as a father of 2, and it felt confusing to still be feeling that while dealing with the devastation of losing his son. Ex-wife's request was a total shock for him too, and when you're face to face with someone grieving so deeply asking for your help, However absurd it is, it's not always as easy to think logically. We agreed that he should ultimately end all contact with his ex-wife, but will still consider what sort of lump sum financial support makes sense with a consultation from a lawyer to keep it entirely copacetic. I just feel strongly about extending appropriate generosity in this transition since we have the means to do so. We also agreed to hold off on any child planning until sufficient time and counseling takes place. I believe that he has already called and told her ex-wife about it since she has been blowing off my phone with messages that I am being a beach with no sympathy.
Adopted a dog and it recognized my deceased girlfriend. Is this possible? I recently adopted a effing dog from the shelter after doing my due diligence. I wanted to make sure I was ready and able to provide for a furry companion. When I found the perfect pup, we connected instantly and he came home with me. On his first night, he displayed an endearing behavior of trying to get close to me without actually touching me, like he wanted my companionship but didn't want to be too pushy about it. At one point, he even climbed on top of my head and stared at me with his big brown eyes. The next morning, I woke up with him curled up right next to my face like he was protecting me in his sleep. As time went on, our bond only grew stronger. It felt like we'd known each other forever. He became an important part of my family so much so that I named him after one of my favorite TV characters. Yesterday evening as I got ready for bed, he mimicked what I was doing and jumped onto the bed wanting closeness just like when we first met, but this time something shifted. He kept staring at a particular spot on the wall where there happened to be a picture of my ex-girlfriend who had passed away in an accident several years ago after facing many hardships in her life. When it clicked, that's what had caught his attention. Tears started streaming down uncontrollably, which is weird because usually crying isn't really something that happens often for me. It was almost as if this dog understood the deep meaning she held in my life without any prior knowledge or explanation, somehow recognizing her even though they'd never met before yesterday afternoon when they encountered each other face to face for the first time. There's a reason NASA stopped exploring the deep sea. I am a former NASA scientific researcher. My division was in charge of studying deep sea life, both fauna and flora in the world's oceans. Here are some facts. The deepest part of the ocean is not the Mariana Trench. There's tons of underwater cave systems further down, some quite large. We have not identified every life form down there. Knowing these, let me tell you why NASA fired me in. A small team of fellow researchers from the Oceanographic Division hired completely new personnel and switched to space exploration. In their defense, I had no interest in continuing my research. Before I begin, I want to say that most of this division actually did study underwater life forms to varying degrees. But most researchers were not involved with the life forms that my team investigated. Therefore, no information about these events has been released to the public, at least to my knowledge. I'm purposely going anonymous here for many reasons, as the US government would prefer to keep this out of the public eye. And people have disappeared for far less in my profession. On an off note, it's deeply tragic what happened recently with a submarine that imploded. I think I'm correct in my suspicion on what caused it, of course, but it's not what the public was told. Anyway, I will now detail a few incidents that I think the public needs to be aware of. Case study: Montezero oil rig diving incident. I was involved with a study that was sanctioned between NASA and a private corporation to investigate an unknown anomaly. Metal parts at the bottom of the rig had taken damage from an unknown source, and a dive team of 3 was sanctioned to investigate it. The dive did not go well. Something we'd never seen before was down there with the divers. We do not know much about it, but I can tell you what we do know. It resembles an extremely intelligent class of giant cephalopods, more intelligent than any other sea creature ever encountered. They are strong and carnivorous and extremely large. It's theorized they purposely damage the rig to lure humans deep down. It's unknown what they normally eat or why they sometimes decide to target humans, but it is clear they will not hesitate to eat us. The 3 divers that were attacked had little means to defend themselves. These cephalopods worked in unison with an extreme understanding of human equipment. One cephalopod removed a diver's air tank from his back, while another removed his fins. Their tentacles had extreme suction and can attach to any object. Dive knives did not appear to damage their bodies, where in the past divers have been able to fight off Humboldt squids and other cephalopods with them. A second diver was choked by a cephalopod from behind as another created a distracting light display with its body, showing they had an understanding of how humans breathe. Note they can flash and take on any color as it suits them, unlike other squids, but normally they resemble a black-blue color, which is almost imperceptible at the deep depths that they live in. And explains in part how they are able to avoid discovery. Of course, none of us saw them coming in the research vessel up top, and it was too late to warn anyone. The 2 divers who were attacked perished, and we can only assume they were likely consumed. Amazingly, the 3rd diver was able to use an underwater flare to escape and report back the events in detail. As it stands, fire is this life form's only known weakness. Case study: USS Cyclops missing ship log recovery. What began as a normal shipwreck investigation has arguably become one of the biggest cover UPS in history. The ship's location has not been released to the public, and I agree that it should be kept secret. The beings that took that ship down should be avoided at all costs. To this day, the public does not know anything other than that a ship disappeared. Perhaps these creatures can be blamed for other missing ships, though we cannot prove that. This ship had a log that detailed the same beings encountered at the Montezero oil rig. Black-blue giant squid resembling entities that work in teams and can use tools of human creation. These cephalopods engaged the ship at night in a surprise attack and damaged it beyond repair. They dragged down survivors, including many, from atop lifeboats using their tentacles. They left no trace of their encounter. They are clearly incredibly strong and can easily hold humans underwater, drowning them. There's a theory that they may even derive pleasure in killing, shown by them flashing certain patterns on their bodies immediately upon the taking of a life. Although this is still just a theory. There are other incidents that I won't get into here. I don't intend to scare people by bringing this information to light, but I do think divers and people who are interested in using submersibles to investigate the deep sea need to be warned. These creatures normally stay in very, very deep water, and there's only a few incidents of human interaction. For the common person, they generally pose no threat. While extremely intelligent, they have not shown the ability to create tools, only to use those which humans have made. It is likely that they only go after humans when they are unable to find sufficient food sources in their own environments. We believe them to be just another species of giant squid, albeit an extremely intelligent one. I cannot understand why our government is hiding their existence, as they are just natural sea predators, like sharks and orca whales. But whatever the reason, remember this: humans are not the top predators in the deep ocean. Naturally, NASA has chosen to avoid further exploration of the deep sea for now to avoid contact with these creatures until the proper measures are put in place.
Am I the a-hole for canceling dinner and going home over something my boyfriend's dog did? Hi, I'll preface this by saying that I, 25 female, have been seeing Michael, 31 male, for a while now. He's a really funny, a bit too sarcastic though, guy, and we pretty much get along well. We've been dating for 4 months. Michael likes the food I cook and he wanted me to come to his house to cook him dinner and also meet his dog for the first time. I only saw him in pictures and videos. He's overprotective of him. I grabbed all I needed from the store and went over to his house. All went well. I met his dog, then we sat down to talk. Suddenly his dog started moving in a funny way. Michael was laughing while looking at me. I felt confused. I asked him what the dog was doing and Michael said that the dog was telling him about me. I was like, okay? And then he flat out said that the dog thought I was unattractive. This shocked me completely. I looked at Michael and asked if he was serious. He started explaining that his dog is like that with some people and that I shouldn't get offended over an animal's behavior. I felt horrible because I, as a person, always struggled with self-esteem and am no stranger to the word unattractive. My issue wasn't with the dog but with what Michael said. It's like he was indirectly giving his opinion about my looks and using his dog as an excuse. Long story short, we had an argument and I ended up canceling dinner and going home. Michael called several times. Then when I picked up, he was lashing out the entire time, saying that I overreacted and that I cannot blame him and punish him for something his dog did. He advised me to get rid of the toxic sensitivity I have and deal with whatever insecurity I have as soon as possible, because what happened will set the tone for our relationship and eventually our marriage later. I did respond later, which caused another argument. My sister said I messed things up with my dumbness and that I should have laughed it off, but for some reason I wasn't able to. Did I overreact here? My siblings are bragging that our parents paid for all their weddings and education but not mine, so I walked away and ruined dinner. I am the third of 4 siblings and have always felt like an afterthought. Lori, Chuck, and Jade have always gotten the first and best from my parents and each other. I get the leftovers if I'm lucky. I haven't gotten a birthday present from any of my siblings in about 10 years, but I still get asked to pitch in for group gifts for each of them every year. On Friday night, we were having a family dinner, and it honestly felt like every other sentence was a dig at me or a less than subtle brag by my siblings about something my parents had given them that I was denied. They talked about how nice almost all of our weddings were, but mentioned that it was okay that my wife and I had a small, low-key wedding. And it was okay. We loved it. But they brushed over that my parents paid for my siblings' weddings, but not mine, because somehow they couldn't afford it because they were saving up for Jade's wedding. They brought up their little student loans because my parents helped them. All of them lived on campus at expensive 4-year schools. I lived at home and went first to a watchmaking school. I got paid to attend this school and paid rent at home. My parents paid for my tools, and I appreciate the help. I do. But they paid $121.50K each for my siblings. They gave me $7K for tools, but to them, it's equal. When I returned to school alone, I didn't ask for money and wasn't offered it. When my brother returned to school, they covered everything without him even having to ask. There were many other small moments, comments about cars and other lifestyle choices, but what made me snap was my brother and his wife mentioning their marriage being so great because they do things like spontaneous dates, like the one they had the prior Friday night. On Friday night, my parents called my wife and me at the last minute to cancel plans. They had to eat dinner at our house because they had to watch Chuck's kids because of an emergency. It turns out that emergency was a dinner for Chuck and my sister-in-law at Texas Roadhouse. I spent hours making my grandpa's ziti and meatballs with homemade marinara because it's my mom's favorite. I wanted to scream at them more than anything, but instead, I got up and left without saying a word, and my wife followed me. When my mom called me later to ask why I had left, I explained exactly why. I explained the favoritism, the unfairness, and the fact that it doesn't feel like they care about me. She didn't say much, and I wasn't looking for an explanation or an apology at the moment. I just felt like it was self-evident, but if she didn't see it, I'd spell it out. Evidently, at least parts of what I said have been shared with my siblings because now Chuck and Lori are furious at me and say I ruined dinner, and my mom is upset that I am hurt. They say I'm immature for keeping score. On the other hand, Jade told me that she understands my feelings and is also trying to make things right. Update: my wife and I sat with my parents and cleared the air. As several people suggested, I wrote down my thoughts and compiled a listing and full accounting of the disparity between what my siblings were given over the years and what I was given. I did sit down and do the math, and it turns out that while I was at the technicum, I paid my parents more rent than they ever paid for my tools. But the final reckoning came to between $370K on the high end, Jade, to $190K on the low end, Chuck, for how much my parents directly gave to my siblings that they never gave me. Sitting down and seeing the full amount all spelled out like that is probably the angriest I got during this whole mess. My parents had been aware of discrepancies but pushed back on the actual amounts until we sat down and reviewed each major gift/incident case by case. By that point, my dad admitted my reckoning was likely conservative. That was more or less the end of any productive talk that night. My dad claimed they didn't think it had gotten that bad but wouldn't give any details about how they could have possibly not noticed. In the interim, Chuck and Lori continued to escalate their anger and call and text me, my parents, and my extended family. I have not spoken to either of them directly since and don't expect to soon. Roughly a week after that first sit-down, my mom and dad asked to meet again. Lots was said, but the gist is this: they felt I was doing well and didn't need their help. They thought I would be fine without them. They admitted they probably lived outside their means and gave more to my older siblings than they should have and could never have given me that much. They claimed the timing of my wedding lined up with probably the direst of their overspending and lack of saving and that they did not have the funds to live up to their promise, especially as they were paying for Jade's tuition, car and apartment. They have offered money. They have offered to pay for vacations, a car, and all kinds of stuff, but I think they don't get it yet. My wife and I don't want their money, but we aren't sure yet what an ideal resolution to this looks like. At least they have admitted they were unfair and are open to working things out. My wife and I also talked to Jade, and she said she was shocked to know that I was not receiving any gifts on my birthday because, apparently, Lori is asking her for hundreds of dollars every year to pitch in. Jade and I are on good terms now. My wife and I spent Easter with Jade, her husband, and my grandparents, and my mom and dad came over in the evening. This seems to be more or less the new normal for now. Ida for expecting my husband to make an exception for me when I didn't make an exception for him. My husband thinks I'm a hypocrite for not cutting off my best friend who cheated on her husband multiple times. My husband and I have been married for 10 years. The only real argument we have ever had is the one we are having now. So, my best friend Cindy and her husband Mike are going through a nasty divorce and it has caused a serious rift between my husband and I. I didn't realize how serious it was until this morning when he told me he was going to stay at his brother's house for the weekend. For context, 4 years ago my husband's best friend Alan was caught having an affair. I was friends with his wife Carol. We were not super close, but we'd get together for cocktails a few times a month and occasionally we'd go on double dates. My husband told me that Alan had been unhappy for a while because Carol had stopped having intimacy with him. When I talked to Carol she didn't deny this. She said that Alan had gained weight and she was no longer attracted to him. Alan was a chef and started sleeping with a female co-worker 5 years younger than him. He was 35, she was 30. The affair lasted for some time before they were caught at work. It all came out, he was fired and Carol left him. I was there for Carol and the kids through it all. The divorce was ugly and costly. Suffice to say it would take Alan years to financially recover as Carol took him to the cleaners. Throughout the whole ordeal my husband still talked to Alan and would occasionally loan him money. The problem was I didn't want my husband to remain friends with him. I told my husband if he continues his friendship with Alan then we would have problems. After some back and forth, and me basically putting my foot down, he agreed to basically cut Alan out. We didn't need influences or people like that in our life. Alan was extremely upset when my husband told him they'd no longer be friends. They had grown up together. But I didn't want men like that in our life. Shortly after all this we were reflecting on everything. My husband said something that I never forgot. He said, "One day one of your friends will do something they regret and need you. I hope you have the same wherewithal to cut them out if I ask you to." Cut to the present and, you guessed it. My bestie Cindy cheated on her husband Mike. Mike worked in manufacturing and was laid off. He eventually went back to work, but at a much lower wage and money was tight for them. Cindy picked up a job working as a barista. As she tells it, one of her regulars was a younger guy in real estate who had an eye for her and was constantly asking her to get together. He would slip her $100 tips a few times a week. He knew she was married. Eventually Cindy gave in and started seeing this guy regularly on her days off while Mike was working. Because she had already started an affair with someone, she threw herself into the deep end and began seeing another guy on the side too. The guy in the restaurant who gave her tips was an emotional as well as physical affair, whereas the 3 other guys she was seeing were all strictly physical affairs. She told me she always felt guilty and knew it was wrong but couldn't stop herself. She said the intimacy with the guy from the restaurant was like she'd never experienced with Mike and she felt wanted and desired it again. They were caught when their oldest daughter came home early from school because she wasn't feeling well. Cindy was busy with her affair partner, didn't see the text from her daughter, and the daughter walked in on them. The daughter told Mike. Mike was devastated and they are getting a divorce. The family has basically ostracized Cindy and want nothing to do with her currently. I and a few friends have been her support through everything. I need to say that I recognize what she did is terrible. However, my husband has pounced on this opportunity and is demanding I cut contact with her completely. Just like I did with him 4 years ago. He says, "We don't need cheating cradle robbers in our lives." I explained that this is different and the issues between Mike and Cindy are more complicated and she feels genuine remorse and wants her family back. He says he doesn't care about the issues or how she feels and that he made a sacrifice for me years ago by cutting out one of his closest friends, and I need to do the same for him. I told him I wasn't going to do that and that he was being petty and vengeful, and he knows the situations are completely different. This morning he said he's heading to his brother's for the weekend. He said he feels betrayed. I honestly don't see how he feels this way.
I've been ghosting my fiancée after she lied to the police and got me put in jail for the night, just to protect her male best friend. I'm not sure I can forgive her. My fiancée, 25 female, and I, 28 male, just got engaged 2 weeks ago. We've been together for 5 years now. 3 weeks ago I came home from work exhausted. When I arrived home, I saw her and her friend Mike sitting at the dining table. I went over to my girlfriend, kissed her on the cheek and dapped up Mike. I didn't really think too much about him being there since I know him really well and he's known my girlfriend since they were little kids. I just asked him if he wanted a beer or something, but he refused, stating that he was here to talk to me. I was confused at first, but when I looked at their serious expressions, I knew it was something serious. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat at the table as well. They started talking about how close me and Mike were getting over the last few years and stuff. I just sat there flabbergasted. I didn't understand what they were trying to get at. I think me and Mike were sort of social buddies. If we were both attending the same social gathering, of course I'd hang out with him, but I never really hung out with him alone or made separate plans with him. I just told them to stop rambling and to get to the point. I was exhausted and really didn't want to beat around the bush any longer. My girlfriend asked me if it was okay if Mike could stay over for a few weeks since he recently got fired and evicted from his place. I told him of course he could stay as long as he didn't make a mess and contributed to the household chores like taking out the trash, etc. He got up and gave me a tight hug and thanked me. Little did I know this man was a filthy alcoholic. The first week things weren't that bad. He just kept to himself, did the chores I asked of him, and it was fun having someone in the house to watch basketball with. After that first week, things took a massive turn. I started seeing empty beer cans everywhere, his dirty socks stuffed into our couch and stuff. I confronted him about it, but he just apologized and told me it wouldn't happen again. I told my fiancée, but she told me to cut him some slack since he was going through a tough time and he would get better. It only got worse. I started seeing dried up vomit on our toilet seat, and that's when I suspected he was an alcoholic. I started seeing empty bottles of rum, whiskey and vodka everywhere. I kept mentioning it to him, but he always gave the same response as before. My fiancée couldn't care less either, and that pissed me off even more. 5 days ago I came home from work and my apartment reeked of alcohol. I just lost it. I stormed up to the guest room and found him drinking beer on the bed. I just went off on him. My girlfriend came over and tried to calm me down. But I didn't budge. I told him he has 2 days to clean my apartment and to get out, otherwise I was going to call the cops on him. I guess he didn't like what I said one bit. He just got off the bed and charged at me. All I remember is him ramming me into the wall behind me and me hitting my head against a sharp object. The next thing I know I see an officer pointing a flashlight at my face. I asked him where Mike was and he told me he was in a safe place where I couldn't hurt him. He and another cop grabbed me off the floor and dragged me outside. I saw my girlfriend and Mike talking to a cop. At this point I'm fading in and out of consciousness. When she looked at me being escorted down the stairs like some rag doll, I wanted to tell her something, but my head just hurt too bad to form any sentence. I got put in the cop car and was driven to the station and put in a holding cell. I kept asking them why. All they responded with is "I have right to remain silent" bull crap. I remember just sitting in the jail cell with my head feeling like it was going to explode any second while trying to make sense of what just happened. I remember dozing off and at some point and being woken up by a cop. He told me I was lucky they didn't press charges on me and I was free to leave. My headache felt much better at this point, so I could actually form sentences. I asked him to explain to me what happened. They told me they received a phone call from my fiancée claiming I was drinking again and got really violent, and her friend had just subdued me to stop me from hurting her. I was so confused. Like, who was drinking and who got violent? He just told me the same story again. I was beyond pissed at this point. As soon as I got my phone back, I texted my dad to come pick me up and to drive me to my apartment. He tried to pose questions as to why I spent the night in jail, and I just told him to drive me home. I'll explain later. Once there I just stormed upstairs to see if my front door was unlocked, and to my surprise it was, and my now ex-fiancée was sitting on the couch. I could tell she had been crying since her mascara was running down her face. She jumped up and tried to hug me, but I just pushed her off me and told her to get the hell out of my apartment. She tried begging and pleading, but I told her to shut it and to pack a few essentials and to get out. She left after begging a bit more. I immediately called off from work claiming I had an injury and just got dispatched from the hospital. That whole day seemed like a fever dream to me. Nothing made sense. Why did my fiancée lie to the cops? That's all I thought about all day. She tried calling me a million times, but I kept trying ignoring it until I just couldn't hold back anymore. I picked up and told her to explain everything and to not dare even think about lying to me. She ended up telling me that after Mike knocked me out they both started to panic. She was scared of calling the cops on Mike since he was already on probation and this would probably end up destroying his life. She told me in the heat of the moment she made a stupid decision to claim that I tried to attack her and Mike protected her and accidentally knocked me out. Her reasoning being I could afford it since I didn't have a criminal record and Mike did. I didn't want to hear any more and just hung up. She texted me all kinds of apologies and tried to call many more times, but I was done. After I started randomly throwing up, I went to the hospital the day after and found out I had a concussion and would be forced to stay home for the next month. I'm beyond hurt by this. Why would she choose her friend over me? Why did she try and ruin my life to try and save her friends? She tried coming over several times a day, but I never even dared to answer her. I've blocked her on everything, but today I got a text from her mom claiming she tried to out on painkillers yesterday and was in the hospital. All she wanted was to see me again. This has made me sort of regret ignoring her. I haven't responded to her mom or anyone for a fact. The only people besides those involved who know are my dad and mom. My mom is taking care of me at the moment. I'm really conflicted. On the one hand, I feel like hurting her for what she did, but on the other hand, I still love her and feel like she made a genuine mistake. I don't want to feel any more pain. My life is a mess, and by erasing the last 5 years of it probably would just make me end it all. I don't want to see the love of my life being buried over me ignoring her. I don't want to force my poor mother to be my free caretaker for a month. I feel like it's my fiancé's responsibility now. I'm so done with everything. I'm literally glued to a bed all day and my laptop and phone are the only things keeping me sane. I start randomly getting panic attacks and start shivering uncontrollably. Please, what should I do? Should I allow her to come see me? Am I wrong for ignoring her?
The time I effed up by telling people I had a twin. My brother, 18, and I, 16 female, are in the same year, both in year 12, and when we used to go to the same school, not anymore, thankfully, people used to ask us if we were twins and I'd explain that no, I skipped. Pretty much everyone got confused and people always thought we were twins, and I got tired of explaining, so I just gave up and told everyone, yeah, we're twins. I'd explain it, then once more I'd get asked by the same people what it was like to have a twin. I got tired. We've been in different schools for 3 years now. I've mentioned I was 16 a billion times and I thought everyone knew it was just a thing I say is then they're likely to work it out because he is 18. It's a running joke now in my whole school. People will ask me, how's your twin? It's just a joke. Basically, a girl who came from my brother's school kept asking when my birthday was, so I told her and she gave me a confused look and said, but his is in November. I guess she didn't realize I was 16. And I was not in the mood to explain it. I was in the middle of homework, and she found me in the library, so I said yeah, my mom was in labor for months, and that was that. She effing believed me. Why would you even? Her mom ended up calling my mom because the whole school is making fun of her for believing my mother was in labor for months, and her mom started complaining to my mother, who got mad at me for not explaining the joke to her. My brother thinks it's effing hilarious, though. He laughed about it for absolute ages and told our whole family and his whole school. In my defense, who the F would believe that? I am sorry.
My boyfriend ate all of the brownies I made, and I cried about it. This is so stupid. So, the other day, I made these amazing Heath bars and pretzel brownies. My boyfriend and I tried them almost straight out of the oven. Literal heaven. I was leaving to go back to my apartment so I could be a reasonable distance to my work the next day and asked him to leave a few for me when I came back for the weekend. He said okay. I was salivating thinking about having my brownies today at work. But then, I walked into his place. The brownie pan is clean and in the drying rack. I feel so dumb while typing this thing out, but reader, I started tearing up. It's just like, I asked him to do one thing for me and he couldn't do it. Just like when I asked him to buy me flowers a few months ago, and he promised he would, he hasn't. I buy him flowers for his vase whenever the last bunch dies. Like when I asked him to plan a date, I plan all of our dates. Like when I ask him to come over to my place instead of me making the drive all the time, there's always some excuse. Again, I feel dumb writing all this and I can't believe brownies are why I'm so sad/pissed right now. It's such a small, stupid thing. But it's just another brick built on top of the other small things, and as you can tell, these things add up over time.
My parents are pulling me out of dance because it's making him stumble in his walk with God. My parents and I were talking about my Sweet 16 plans for the past couple of weeks leading up to what happened, but it wasn't about dance in the beginning. My parents aren't vaccinated and they don't believe in getting flu shots either, and they also didn't believe that the virus was real when it happened. My parents are very religious, and while our church moved to online services in the beginning of last year, they went back to in-person services that were open air within a few weeks, but people didn't seem to socially distance afterward despite the chairs being separated from other people. Why do I bring that up? My parents would bring up my Sweet 16 and how I wouldn't have one if I wanted to get vaccinated despite how many times I told them it was unrelated, but they said they didn't care because it was their money and that they didn't have to do anything for me and throwing me a party because it was a privilege, along with how getting vaccinated wasn't putting our trust in God and how the virus was just a tool that Democrats used against the 45th, and we argued a lot about how my party had nothing to do with their beliefs, but they kept holding it over me until they eventually said I wouldn't have one, but they've been angry with me ever since I voiced my opinion, and them taking me out of dance is the latest thing they've done. Every so often, they will sit me and my sister down for a talk on a quarterly basis to talk about whatever regarding the family, and I really hate these talks because it's just them telling us their opinions and things like that, along with new rules that they'll sometimes have. However, in their last talk, they talked to me without my sister and told me that my current semester in dance and gymnastics would be my last one, and they pointed to what they taught me about purity as to why mom said that women are supposed to be honorable to God and themselves with their bodies by not showing too much and stuff like that, and in the past, she's been really controlling with what we wear. No shorts or two-piece bathing suits when we go to the beach or pool, but in regards to the conversation, Dad said that he felt led to address dance and gymnastics, and that as I grew nearer to adulthood, I needed to start thinking differently too. And when I asked him what he meant, he said that he felt challenged being in the gym environment in his walk with God, and that he felt God telling him to address it. But I told him that that has nothing to do with me, but he kept pointing to purity and how mom agreed with him too and said it was a big thing for him to address it, but it has nothing to do with me, and they've been treating me like crap ever since I told them that I want to get vaccinated and wear a mask. Something that they've refused to do and still do, and I'm now losing dance right after my party, but they just won't listen to me. I told Dad that mom can drive me or one of my friends, and I even told my grandma about it who talked to them about it, but Dad yelled at me for going behind his back and for being disrespectful by going to his mom, and I just feel like I'm losing more privileges the older I get, and I don't know what to do to make them stop. Is there anything I can do to at least let them have me continue dancing, since I can't talk to anyone else because I'll just get yelled at again? My parents are pulling me out of dance because it's making him stumble in his walk with God. I'm stuck here. When I talked to them again, they said that they would help me keep some of my friends if I was respectful and that it's a privilege and that they don't have to drive me. But when they brought up how I was wrong to tell Grandma, Mom said that we should build each other up as Christians and not the opposite by talking about people, and she said that we're supposed to help each other in their walk, but after they said that, they gave me some other options. Dad said that he wanted me to still play sports and try something else, but that I couldn't do dance or gymnastics or swimming or cheerleading, and Mom said the verse about not conforming to the world and that the world tries to tell you to show too much, but we are supposed to be different because of God, and Dad said that he turns away from commercials that are like that too, but I've seen him not turn on many commercials too. When I asked Mom what that had to do with me, she said that the uniforms I wore in dance were inappropriate and that I should be thankful that they let me do it at all, but Dad said that's why he doesn't watch Olympic gymnastics either, but I told him again that it has nothing to do with me. I talked to my coach, and I also had a chance to think about everything more. Before I get to her, I want to talk about Dad and what I now think of the whole situation. When Dad talked to me, Mom said he was doing a big thing, but he hasn't done anything to work on himself, and I want to explain what I mean. When Mom took my sister to the gym without him, he stayed home and watched TV, and he hasn't seen a therapist or anyone in church about it. He said that no one outside our family should know about it. As part of working on himself, he said that he wouldn't watch Olympic gymnastics/swimming this year, and he wouldn't go to the gym for 2 weeks while he's fasting. But as of right now, he's been back at the gym, which is why I decided to talk to my coach. When Dad first talked to me, I didn't know what challenged meant, but after our follow-up talk about how I can't do sports that require a similar uniform to gymnastics, it made more sense, and I want to explain why. If Dad was feeling challenged by one of my classmates or instructors, he would have let me continue gymnastics and just moved to a different gym, but because he didn't want me doing dance or swimming or gymnastics because of the uniforms, I began to think that it was me who challenged him, and that is what I talked to my coach about too. I didn't want to think it was me, and I kept telling myself that it wasn't in my mind, but if it was a friend or a teacher, we'd just switch gyms. But because he didn't want me doing gymnastics or swimming or dancing anymore. It wasn't a gym thing, and I didn't want to believe it. He could have had Mom drive me permanently if he was feeling challenged and always stay home, but even me getting dressed at home could challenge him, and that made me scared about something else. Given how Dad isn't watching Olympic gymnastics/swimming, I began to feel uncomfortable with him having sports pictures of me through the years, and now that his 2 weeks of fasting at home is done, he's back at the same gym watching my sister's practices, and that also made me believe that it had everything to do with me. I hate writing that, and it makes me feel horrible when I think about it at home. I don't want him having pictures if he sees me like that, and I don't want him at the gym for my sister either, and my coach said that she would talk to the head coach about it, and I could barely make it through that practice because I couldn't get it off of my mind. I'm scared that Dad gets off with old pictures, and Grandma also told others in the family about whatever she and Dad talked about, and Dad's mad at me because now it's a thing in extended family. He's been to one practice since his 2-week fast, and my coach said that she would have a follow-up with me at my next class, but she also told me that she may have to talk to them or authorities after talking to our head coach, and we're going to talk again at our next practice. That's basically it. Dad is upset that the family knows, but he hasn't told me anything about calls or anything else, and I don't think I'll know until I see them for the holidays. I don't know what will happen when I talk to my coach again, but she agreed that Dad shouldn't be at the gym, and she said that the head coach might talk to my parents before our follow-up, if they weren't talked to already when Dad went to my sister's practice for the first time since his fast. Dad's been really upset with the family stuff, and I wouldn't be surprised if he got talked to by the head coach and didn't tell me yet, but he said that we're going to talk again soon, and I wanted to write this because I'm afraid that I'll lose privileges or maybe my phone, and talking here has been really helpful when I can't talk to Grandma or anyone else, and I don't want to lose that. That's why I wrote this now, because I don't know what privileges I'll lose. I should delete this, but I don't want to because I have no one else to really talk to. I thought about showing them, but that'll definitely make things worse. I know I'm probably getting punished, but I want to ask if there's anything I can do before that happens, before we talk again about extended family now knowing, and most definitely if / when the head coach talks to them too. Is there anything I can do to just let this die down? I don't even care about gymnastics anymore, I just don't feel comfortable around him anymore, and I'm also afraid that the same will happen with my sister if it hasn't happened already. Is there anything I can do or plan to do after we talk and after I get punished?
What's your scariest camping experience? I was on a camping trip with scouts and me and my friend were put in the same tent as this weird kid. He was acting up all the time, getting into fights, showing off how many knives he had, biting his toenails and eating them. Anyways, one night we're in our tent playing blackjack and I guess I said something that made him mad because he started yelling at me. Well, that let the scout leaders know we were still up, so they told us to get to bed. I don't know how long I was asleep, but I woke up to him hurting me. I thrashed about and tried to get him off me, but I couldn't focus and was panicking. I remember the tent seemed to be getting darker, and how heavy my eyelids were getting. My chest and head were hurting and aching trying to get me to breathe, but I just felt so tired. I was starting to fade away, thinking my last thing I would hear was his laughter when, wham! My friend had woken up due to me struggling and him laughing and got up and started clobbering the dude. I was part coughing and part breathing once he got off me. My friend screamed for help and it got the adults' attention. He was yelled at for what he did and they shuffled around people so that he would be sleeping in a tent alone right near the adults' tents. I got into a tent with my older brother and I must have woken up 3 times that night kicking and screaming from nightmares of him ending me. When we all got back from the camp, his parents were told what happened and that he was banned from scouts. They also told my mom, and it must have taken the active will of God for her not to go and go Iron Mike on him. He got banned from a bunch of other activities that we both did, so I didn't really ever see him again. I still wake up scared from nightmares of being choked or suffocated. And while I am a pretty sound sleeper, if anyone tries to walk or get close to me while I am asleep, I shoot up awake and panic. I can't even really nap with my dogs because of it. I don't know if I'll ever be able to sleep soundly around anyone ever again. I told my husband I would never choose him as the father of my child. My husband Liam and I have 2 children and I'm currently pregnant with our 3rd. Liam has so far been a wonderful husband and a fantastic father. I was out at brunch with a few friends of mine. I was telling them a funny story about my cravings and how Liam had made a cake from scratch for it. A friend of a friend named Paige said that I chose so well, and that she should have put as much thought as I did in choosing the one for her. I have a reputation for being really thorough and thinking things out before doing anything, the responsible one. I told her that I never would have chosen Liam to be the father of our first child, but I am so grateful he was. I was very lucky. Our pre-marriage life was messy. I was with another man, Dave. Dave was a steady, reliable man and we had been together for years. Dave made a new friend who was Liam. And I could not help but absolutely hate him. According to him, Liam made Dave feel young again and he was desperate to reclaim the sense of youth he lost by being responsible since he was young. He spent all of his time with Liam and other guys. Dave would spend every night out partying until 3 a.m. He spent his entire paycheck and some of my paychecks on wrestling videos and online gambling. He bought a motorcycle. He used our savings to buy crypto. He shaved his head bald. The last straw was him spending $20,000 of my savings to travel. Throughout this, Liam was incredibly disrespectful to me. Dave broke up with me when I asked him to stop hanging out with Liam and his other friends. He immediately moved in with a girl I had concerns about. I felt deeply hurt and for the first time in my life I felt like hurting someone in return. I was miserable, out of my mind, and called Liam over. I wanted to ruin their friendship like he ruined my relationship. He was annoyed at Dave for something else and was down for anything. I woke up the next morning realizing that I made a huge mistake, but Liam had also pounded me till kingdom come in a way Dave never could. Unfortunately, my bad decision caught up to me and I got pregnant. Ironic since I had always wanted children, but I was told I was infertile. Both Liam and I were against children out of wedlock and we had a small wedding. I was ready to grit my teeth and make the best of our marriage, but surprisingly Liam turned out to be an incredible partner and father. If it was a mistake, it was the best mistake of my life. Paige was very offended that I said Liam wouldn't have been my choice initially. She messaged Liam to tell him what I said. I was a nervous wreck about this, and was worried about how Liam would react. Fortunately, a few hours later Paige apologized for overstepping and reached out to me. She was having a rough time in her own relationship and felt I was being ungrateful, as my boyfriend, unlike hers, never put something into my drinks or laid hands on me. I also checked up on Liam. I asked him if he felt hurt by what I said. He said he was deeply offended and I should make up for it with 1,000 kisses plus interest starting right now. Am I the a-hole for asking my friend to pay for water damages in my kitchen even though my sons pranked her? My lifelong friend, Carla, is in the middle of blowing up our friendship because I asked her to pay for water damages in my kitchen. Carla has been staying with me for a few weeks to visit and also to meet with some potential new clients for her new business. I live alone with my 2 sons who are 13 and 18. There's more than enough room for Carla to come and stay, and she's even happy to pitch in for bills and food as her stay doesn't have an official end date and she doesn't want to feel like she's freeloading. Overall, it was all going really smoothly until my boys started pulling stupid pranks on her. They dumped cold water on her while she showered once, hit her suitcase, and they played her ringtone on their phone so she thinks she's getting a call. They were being trolls and I didn't raise them to act like that. At first I thought it was just my 13-year-old, and I sat him down and explained how inappropriate it was to prank a grown woman, and that I expect him to give her a big apology. I found out that although my 13-year-old was the one doing all this stuff, his brother was the one cooking up the ideas. I went ballistic on both of them and everything settled down until a few days ago when I came home to a flooded kitchen. What happened was that morning, Carla had gotten ready to go meet with a client and was in the kitchen when she turned the tap on and the spray nozzle started soaking her and she screamed before storming off and out the door without turning the tap off, causing water to spray everywhere and flood my kitchen. The reason this happened is because the night before one of my boys taped down the trigger so that the next person would get blasted with water. Now my kitchen baseboards are waterlogged, and the carpet in my living room is soaked because the water leaked into the next room. I asked Carla to please pay to have the baseboards fixed, as this could have been prevented had she just turned off the tap. She lost her mind on me and told me that she deserved more respect than to be harassed by my 2 sons constantly, one who is an actual adult. She said that she was trying her hardest to be a polite guest in my home, but that me and my sons have been terrible hosts. She then told me that she was leaving and would carry out the rest of her stay in a hotel, and that she will not be paying for the damages caused by your developmentally delayed sons. I told her to leave after that and I would send her the invoice for the fix. She told me to lose my number, packed and left. Now that the dust settled, I'm starting to wonder if maybe I was the asshole and should apologize, but still I don't understand why she didn't just turn the tap off and let me know my sons were still behaving poorly. So, am I the asshole? Waiters, what's the worst Valentine's Day disaster have you witnessed? I worked at a pretty high-end Mediterranean bistro. For my second Valentine's there it was probably the busiest night I've ever worked as a server. We had reservations that booked basically the entire restaurant including the bar and patio from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. No walk-ins were to be seated unless a reservation was cancelled, or someone with a reservation didn't show up. Most of the customers were pretty understanding and either waited or simply left. One dude however kept pushing and pushing, asking every 10 minutes how much longer until he was seated, constantly saying how he was a regular customer, and how his date was going to be there at 7, he got there at 6. We insisted that once a table was available, and all the customers before him were seated, he would get a table, but because of the amount of reservations, we couldn't guarantee he would even get a table at all. At about 6:50 the guy loses it, fast walks up to the hostess stand where the reservation book is, grabs the reservation book, and practically runs out the front door. Now everything is going to complete poop because the only copy of the reservations for the night that is barely half over is gone. Two of the owners ran outside to follow the guy and try and get the book back, but by the time they got out, he had already left the parking lot. Even better is, 2 hours later, chaos is still running rampant and the dude shows back up saying he has a reservation for 2. 3 of the 5 owners, all brothers, escorted the dude and his date out to the parking lot and banned him from the restaurant permanently. They even took a picture of him and posted it in the window saying do not serve this man. An old man proposed to an old woman. He tried to get off the chair to kneel. But he tripped and fell. I assume he broke something since he couldn't get back up and we had to call an ambulance. My manager had to drive her teeth to the hospital separately because she had taken them out to eat her soup, Lord knows why, and left them on the table in the confusion. I was managing hotel room service where there was a Valentine package that included getting each course of the special menu delivered to your room. More than a few couples thought it was a good idea to call for the next course and then start having sex. Having to help with deliveries as reception fucked up the bookings, I had the privilege of people answering the door naked, seeing sex toys strewn around, and one where the other members of the threesome were carrying on in the background. After complaints of similar instances from my team, I had to take action. I ended up having to call the offending guests and tell them if they could not respect my team by answering the door in at least a closed dressing gown, they could come down and collect the rest of their meal from the restaurant. Bonus from the same night, had to call an ambulance for a woman with a dislocated shoulder. The guy admitted that they were trying to recreate a bukkake type scene in the shower using conditioner as the cum. He slipped in the conditioner and fell on her. Not a waitstaff, but I used to work the front desk at a hotel. One Valentine's Day I was working the night shift, and this woman comes down with a cut above her looking like she just won a few rounds in the ring with a boxer. The woman starts sobbing and asks us to call the coos, which we do immediately. Turns out this girl's boyfriend just beat the shit out of her during a fight, and from what I could tell this probably wasn't the first time. So after the police show up and haul the dude off, my manager offers her a different room on the comp as we need to leave the guy's stuff where it is for him to pick up the next day. She accepts, and I go up with the woman to help her collect her stuff and move to the new room. There were a bunch of bottles of alcohol in the room, and she donated them to the front desk staff. I got a bottle of Hypnotic and some vodka. The manager got a bottle of Patron. The cherry on top of everything, the dude's wife called later that night saying someone had stolen his card as he was out of town on a business trip. Never one to defend an abuser, I told her where she could find her husband. Fun times. Older woman, probably in her upper 90s with her teenage grandson at a semi-classy restaurant. She was dressed to the nines and the grandson was in a nice button-up and dress slacks. As they got seated at their table the grandson placed a framed photo of what my friend assumed was the boy's grandfather and husband of the older woman. Found out it would have been their 70th wedding anniversary but he had passed suddenly but peacefully a few months back. The grandfather had always wanted to take her to a nice restaurant but never had the time or money to do it. So the grandson saved up his pay from the last couple of months and even got some donations from other relatives and took her to the restaurant. They ate dinner remembering all the good times with the man. They had my friend to take a picture and she did. They tipped my friend very well. By happenstance, my friend ran into the young man some weeks later to find out the grandmother passed away a few days after that night, peacefully in her sleep holding a photo of her beloved husband. He was so happy he could make that night special for her. Said it was the only day he saw her smile since his grandfather passed away. He got the picture they took at the restaurant printed in wallet sized and carried it around with him in his wallet. Am I the a-hole for ignoring an autistic guy on my flight? I'm a 19F who was traveling alone on an 11-hour flight today, and a guy in his 20s? Is in the same row as me. I was exhausted because I only got 4 hours of sleep before the flight so I could sleep on the plane, but this guy, we'll call him C, keeps trying to make conversation. C starts off by telling me he's autistic, and then asking me if I like K-pop and he keeps non-stop talking and rarely gives me a chance to speak, not that I wanted to. I tried to be polite because I have ADHD and I understand how social cues are difficult so he probably can't tell I'm not in the mood. Over the course of the next 20 minutes I tell C maybe 5 times I want to sleep and put my headphones on and each time C begins speaking to me after maybe 2 minutes of silence. Finally I was able to sleep for around 4 hours, but when I woke up C started up again. I'm still really tired, and I had some personal issues the day before my flight so I'm also socially exhausted, but I let him talk for a bit before I start watching a show on my phone. I tell him maybe 5 separate times that I'm trying to watch a show, and that I'm not interested in talking to him right now but maybe later. C still keeps trying to talk to me, and when I snap a bit and tell him I'm getting a bit annoyed he goes into a full-on self-hating "I'm so sorry, I'm horrible God I'm just gonna shut up now" rant, and I feel bad because I should have been nicer to him and I can understand emotions being too strong and spiraling. I tell C that it's okay, and I just want some time to myself as I'm not the chattiest person, but maybe later we can talk. I put my headphones on and watched my show, but C kept trying to speak to me but this time I ignored him, which was honestly a shitty move for me but I just didn't have the energy at this point to interact with him. This was the wrong move, as he moved to get out of the row and stood in the aisle and began yelling at me. I didn't catch everything he said but it was along the lines of why can't women believe not all men are bad? Some men are on your side. I'm a nice guy, why are you ignoring me? He storms off to the bathroom and I take that chance to ask a flight attendant if I can change my seat because he really freaked me out and I didn't want to have a panic attack on a plane. The flight attendants were amazing and got my stuff and moved me far away from him. I feel like I'm TA because he does have autism and I could have been more patient maybe and ignoring him was a shit thing to do.
I was pressured into a threesome by my boyfriend and enjoyed it but not because of him. So I, 21F, have been with my boyfriend, 22 male, for 3 years. He's known I was bi since we started dating and had never really said anything about it till last year. After he met my college friend Maya is also bi and very beautiful but while honest about her experience isn't one to brag. When in a group playing drinking games last year Maya opened up about a threesome she had before and I guess that's when my boyfriend got the idea. I had been against it when he first brought it up but eventually he wore me down. When I finally said yes he immediately suggested Maya, which looking back was his aim from the start. When we approached Maya she was down and we had made plans that worked for everyone's schedule. Maya texted me separately multiple times to make sure I was on board and comfortable as she put it just didn't seem my style. I told her I was on board and to not worry that I and my boyfriend had talked about it. When the day came she surprisingly took the lead which I don't think my boyfriend was expecting either. I'll spare you the details but she made sure the focus was me and actually instructed my boyfriend on what to do. If he tried to focus on her she gently redirected him to me. Saying things like "New look how pretty your girlfriend is when you do this." She barely let him touch her without asking me "Do you want to do?" She would praise me a lot though out something I didn't even realize I liked. She also checked on both of us through the whole thing. I honestly think it was the best time me and my boyfriend ever had. The craziest part is when she did her solo session with me and I had never felt anything as good as that. After it was over she did what she called aftercare and made us comfortable. I don't remember me or boyfriend falling asleep. But when we woke up breakfast was made. Maya is a chef professionally so it was amazing. She had also left us a note as she had work in the afternoon and was sorry she couldn't stay. I feel like the dynamic between me and my boyfriend had changed since and I know we have to talk about it but I don't even know what to say. My point being I enjoyed intimacy with Maya more than I ever had with my boyfriend. I didn't want to go super into detail, but Maya was mostly touching me and was focused on me. I also think my boyfriend is disappointed he wasn't the focus. I also think he was surprised how much he liked being told what to do. My boyfriend beat me to it and has texted me "We need to talk, we are planning on meeting up at Starbucks after my shift tomorrow." When we met he apologized. He said he never saw himself convincing me as manipulation as we had talked about being more adventurous in the bedroom before and he thought I just needed time. He told me he did enjoy it a lot but it wasn't what he imagined it would be and was feeling insecure because I had been so responsive to Maya. It wasn't until after it was over he started feeling inadequate as a partner. I'll admit I was a little heated because I told him for the past year something like this would happen and that 3 ways, especially ones not talked about in depth and hard boundaries set, this happens. I was willing to work through this if he was willing to work on his insecurity, but then he asked me to drop Maya. I absolutely refused. Maya is one of the few friends I have in the city and we're very close even before all this. I explained to him that distancing from Maya would not fix his insecurities. We went back and forth for a while before he tried to give me a "it's me or her" speech. I just left him there. I'm hurt and angry with myself it even got to this point. Like how in the HLL did I get here? And I know you guys made sure to point out all the red flags but he was my first serious boyfriend. 3 years are hard to see past that I guess. I called Maya after I got home and explained everything. She tried to apologize, explaining she had had a small thing for me when we first met but grew into more just a friendship. When me and now ex-boyfriend approached her she was excited to, in her words, F it out of her system. She apologized again saying she didn't want for us to break up or for this situation to be more than it was but I reassured her none of this is her fault. It looks like I'm going to make a move on Maya now, but I'm not sure if she still had the same feelings for me.
Final update: not sharing my dad's inheritance with my brother. Thank you for your responses and advice. I talked to a lawyer. I told her my plan to continue living overseas and that I planned on going LC with my mom and brother. She said I should set aside money for my mom and brother in the form of a trust fund. They will be paid X amount per month, the dividend from low-risk investments, but can't touch anything else. I don't trust them both with a huge amount of money so this way they will always have a steady income in their lives. I know this is against Lee's wishes but I just need to take care of them this last time. I already have a will set up that everything will go to charities. I make decent money at my job so I set up a will a while back. My family knows this when everyone visited me that one time. Sam still has a year of school before university, so he should still be living with my mom in the meantime. My mom has a room in a high rise that Lee gave to her a while back so they should be fine with a place to live. I plan to support Sam's university expenses. He's not academically inclined, but in our culture he will definitely be pushed to go to university. I'm still working with my lawyer to see how that can be without having to get too heavily involved. As to why Lee never found out before about Sam, my mom is mixed race while both of her children's fathers and Lee are the same race. Sam and I look like her, so it's hard to tell. Don't know why Lee decided to investigate after all this time. He was to blame for Sam being spoiled, too, with how much he had been letting Sam spend over the years. My mom is 10 plus years younger than Lee. Maybe that's why she had the affair. She has a university degree so she can find a job if she wants. Her jewelry should be worth near 6 figures though, so there's always that. Lee's relatives took carrying out his intentions seriously. Ever since Sam became more problematic in his teens, the relatives tolerated him for their blood connections. Now that he is not, my mom and Sam are instantly in their bad book, I guess. Once this mess is more settled, I'm thinking of asking my workplace for a relocation. A change of scenery should be nice. I like my job, so I think I will continue working, but maybe my vacations can get a little more extravagant from now. Thank you.